Hello, you're very welcome to the Overlap Rugby podcast. I'm Shane, that's Daragh.
Hello.
Two brothers discussing all things rugby through the lens of Leinster and Ireland. This is show number 114, and we have another great one in store because we're going to open the show by looking through all of last weekend's games as the autumn test window kind of closed with a bang. There were bangers left, right and centre, just so many good games that we're going to look back on now because there's a lot to pick
as
through.
Super a Saturday as there ever was.
Indeed, very much so. So many really good games overshadowed by some of the dramatics later on in the day, but thoroughly enjoyable watch for all rugby fans on Saturday for sure. As we said, we're going to start by looking back on all of those before we kind of take stock of where all the top teams are going into the next half of the World Cup cycle. I guess we're just over halfway through that World Cup cycle, that 4-year cycle, and we're just going to kind of round up our coverage of the international footy by seeing how all of them are doing and how they fare and what they need to work on going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we're going to, just for a bit of fun, later on in the show, we're going to each pick our team of the series. We've picked ours totally secret from one another, and we'll see if we do pick the exact same team as I think we did the last time we did one of these.
Yeah.
Just confirming our existence as a two-headed monster.
Indeed.
Hopefully there's a bit more diversity of thought and we've gone for some different players, but we'll find out that later in the show. We're also going to recap the Stellenbosch series in Africa that was going on, all of the women's internationals that also wrapped up last weekend. We're going to take stock of the returning club footy games. There's some good ones this weekend as well, in Munster touring South Africa and in the URC. Premiership and Taco Tours back as well. And then, of course, we'll wrap up the show, as we always do, with the rugby news of the week.
That's right. And this will be our last full show of 2021. We will be back with the next full one. We'll be previewing the Six Nations next year. And there will be probably some shorter vids and collabs that we might do in the meantime as well. So, as always, if you do enjoy the content, like, subscribe, share, but ring that bell as well, because our uploads will be a bit less frequent as we round out the year, but there will be still some things to look forward to and some content up there. So, yeah, absolutely ring that bell, and as we often kind of say, try and drop a comment down below as well. If you have any thoughts on the rugby yourself, do drop the comments down below. We do like to get a bit of discourse going in the comment section.
We do no question. Yes, listen, absolutely, it's been a great year, and thanks for sticking with us for one more show at least.
Yes.
And without more ado, we're going to move on and get into the meat of it, and that starts with the Autumn Internationals, the Autumn Nation Series, as it was the final weekend officially, I think, of the Autumn Nation Series, despite the fact that there's a couple of Barbarians games and Russia Chile this weekend. We had the main of it finish up last weekend. Yeah. And man, oh man, I mean, the narrative building is right there. I mean, it was an incredible final weekend in terms of the quality of rugby, also notable in terms of the results that we had, as the European sides ran out emphatic victories over their Southern Hemisphere rivals. Now, it's easy to talk about the issues that are going on with the long tour. It is an exceptionally long tour for some of these southern sides, but nevertheless, the stats are pretty stark. First time since 2002, 19 years, that New Zealand, South Africa and Australia were all beaten on the same weekend.
Wow. Yeah.
That's an incredible stat.
Yeah.
Obviously, the first time since the inception of the Rugby Championship that all 4 of those sides lost on the same weekend, consequently.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's the first time ever that all 6 of the Six Nations won on the same weekend.
There you go.
I mean, we weren't lying when we were telling you earlier in the year that the Six Nations was being played to a high standard. I don't think there's any doubt.
No, that chat was definitely vindicated in terms of just the performances of all the teams, and just how close and clustered it is at the very top end of the game right now is kind of what's feeding into these results kind of toing and froing. And certainly, like, the Six Nations next year is looking like a very competitive tournament. Sure, the champions are currently the 5th ranked side in it going in, there was a lot of great performances at the weekend, and just the Northern Hemisphere sides have definitely improved. The Southern Hemisphere sides are definitely somewhat fatigued. It is the tail end of a long series. But the standard of rugby all over the world is just kind of coming up, and we had some great tier 2 showings as well at the weekend. It wasn't just limited to the big boys as well. There was good competition kind of pretty much across all fixtures, barring the Sunday game that our own charges were in. That was kind of the biggest blowout of the lot, but for the most part they were one or just over one score games, and very competitive.
Absolutely. And then there's no question that the Six Nations is being played very, very well at the moment. I mean, I remember in the build up to the 2015 World Cup where you could see that the Six Nations, there were some competitive matches, but it wasn't being played to anywhere near the same standard as the Rugby Championship.
Yes. And they ended up getting that just lesson when all 4 Rugby Championship sides ended up in the semi-final. semi-finals, and now they're getting bullish on the other side of it. You have guys like Clive Woodward coming out saying there'll be none of them in the semi-finals on the back of an autumn series 2 years out, which is a bit,
Oh no, that's a bit dubious, all right. But the omens are pretty good. I mean, we brought up that stat about New Zealand, South Africa and Australia not being all beaten in the one weekend since 2002. That, of course, was in November, just before the one World Cup that a Northern Hemisphere side has ever won.
True.
And there's just no question, just to your eye, that the Northern Hemisphere sides are much, much better at attacking. They're playing the game the right way. They're super competitive in terms of their skills, their athleticism, their power, and all super competitive with each other as well. It's a brave man calls the World Cup at this stage 2 years out. It's not a question of the northern sides being dominant, but being super competitive, and we've really arrived at a top 8 right now. Obviously Argentina, having been pegged back, have dipped out of that, but we've got the five nations in the Six Nations and the 3 tri-nations. Argentina and Japan obviously be looking to get into that mix, but all 8 of those sides at this point in time want to be making World Cup semi-finals and finals and trying to win the tournament, which is very, very exciting. Obviously, from our point of view, it's been a wonderful year of rugby, and the World Cup is in Europe as well, so even the away from home factor, it factors into it.
It does. There were definitely that was at play all through the Autumn Nations series. Just the return of crowds, when you compare it to the Autumn Nations Cup last year, which, although it was a good idea, didn't have anywhere near the same intrigue because there were no Southern Hemisphere teams in it,
because the quality of rugby wasn't good.
Wasn't either, and there were no crowds as well, so it was just kind of a flat, kind of lower standard affair. Whereas this time there were crowds back. It was anything but flat. There was raucous atmospheres in many of the games, and it was a lot for the Southern Hemisphere teams to rise to in terms of just how many games they've gone through and how many minutes. You think of like Super Rugby Aotearoa was so long ago, and that was such an intense competition in its own right, and now New Zealand are still playing, and the European teams are just kind of arriving to the pitch now to get into their season, and they have crowds back, and you have that kind of 16th man factor that you can hear throughout the TV, bleeding through the TV. It was sounding great. So a really good spectacle at the weekend, and just overall a really successful series. I thought the quality of rugby and the standard of kind of the many contests that we had that were competitive. There were a few blowouts, but I think not enough to kind of pale from the really dramatic rugby that was on show, and high quality stuff as well.
Absolutely. We're going to run through now all of the games that were last weekend. I think we're going to try and do them all a bit of justice, because there were some incredible games in it, and we're going to start with we'll run through them in chronological order, which does leave us starting with one of the lesser games of the day, but nonetheless a competitive one. True. Between Italy and Uruguay, where the Azzurri ran out 17-10 winners over Los Terros in Parma. Yeah, it was a absolute scrapathon, and
it was a scrappy tier 2 contest.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that Italy are technically a tier 1 team, it looked for all money like it could have been, a World Cup qualifier.
I mean, let's be real.
The home team just edged it.
Italy, on the evidence of what we've seen this November, wouldn't be out of place in Rugby Europe. Yeah. Like, they'd be in there with Romania and Georgia, winning some of those games and losing some of those games. Yeah. They are artificially enhanced to a tier 1 side for no good reason that I can think of. They just are a tier 1 side and are just given that position. Yeah. But in terms of what's going on the pitch, they were better than Uruguay on this occasion. But Uruguay, obviously, they've been blown out by Romania a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. Not exactly touring that well. I mean, they defended gamely. They have some good goal line D.
Their goal line D was at it all day. That was the dynamic of it. Like, it looked all rosy when they scored their first try. Italy, it was a nice maul. Brandstein was spearheading the maul back in there, looking very strong. Yeah. Garbisi with a lovely wide pass to find the winger on debut. Actually, Bruno. He was one of the lights in terms of he got man of the match on debut, which was one of the positives from this win that you'll take. And it was a lovely, well taken try. But then from there, they were back there like 2 minutes later and mucked up their set piece, turned over. Uruguay go up the other end and then end up scrapping and finding a 3-pointer themselves. So rather than 14-0, it was 7-3. And then the brittleness of the confidence of the Italians just started telling. And then you could just see the youth and kind of inexperience at halfback was also telling, where they were just not managing the game quite so well and butchering chances. And yeah, it was frustrating to watch them kind of flounder around impotently, but credit to Uruguay for making it that scrappy kind of game. There were a lot of errors, there were balls to deck, there were scrums, but Uruguay were competitive in all of that. And one of their best qualities, which is true of kind of Chile as well in terms of the South American sides, is they're so kind of calm. They don't hit panic very often, if at all. Like even when they're getting blown out, they're very short to like they have a very good patient kind of temperament on defense and whatnot, which is not what you could say about Italy. Like panic is very early set in Italy, and they end up a little wild and throwing balls past Ioanni's ear into touch, and it was all
exactly. It was you're right to flag that about Uruguay. I mean, I think it's probably their best strength. I know they have some pretty offensive plays, but when they're at their best, they defend very well. They defend with width, and they defend with discipline.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw both Georgia and Fiji have real issues, despite being brilliant defensive teams and at the top echelon of Tier 2 rugby.
Yeah.
They have real issues with discipline, maintaining discipline in multi-phase attacks, even against each other, as we'll discuss as well. Both sides give up penalties more readily than Uruguay. I think they have probably the most disciplined defence in Tier 2 in terms of how they go about it. I mean, sometimes they can be soft and caught as they were against Romania, but when they're game for it, they're a very able defensive unit. Although I must say I was disappointed with Italy's output. I thought, this was, as what did we bill it as? It was their chance against a side that they were ranked ahead against. You were talking about, they have this Six Nations aura, they're in the Six Nations. This is going to be a decrease in their usual standard, and they're going to get a chance to show what they were about. Yep. And they didn't do any of that.
Yeah. I mean, they had a chance. They did it in the first 10, and then when the next chance got butchered and the 3 points happened, you could just kind of see that aplomb and that kind of swagger kind of disappear. Because that fizzing wide left-handed pass was audacious, and it came off, and that's a confidence side. But then the second it doesn't go right, the confidence just goes away, and they have no experience with winning because they play against teams who are like, before they played this is their first game against a team that they outrank since the World Cup, which is crazy, and it's also their first win since then of any kind. And like before they played Uruguay, they played the All Blacks. They played the All Blacks last week. It's like, why did that game have to be made? It didn't happen in the World Cup because the typhoon called it off, so it's like, we have to do that again. It's like, why? They play against sides that hammer them all the time anyway. Why do the All Blacks need to hammer another side? It doesn't make any sense. Why couldn't they play Romania or Tonga or some of these sides that they might be a bit more competitive with, and you end up with better games?
Well, the news was announced, they are touring Georgia and Romania next summer, which is what I'm looking forward to. But I mean, this was a real opportunity to give them some confidence going into the Six Nations and just going into next season, and they kind of blew that. You could see at the death of the game that Garbisi had enough. When he kicked that ball off, he wasn't happy to get the win. He was just kind of throwing shapes and being a bit like, man, I can't believe the game went this way. It was scrappy to the last, and I think even towards the tail end of the game, Uruguay could have stolen a draw.
They had a chance to steal a draw. And
not that they deserved it truly, because they spent most of the game
it was pretty evident from the early exchanges that Italy were superior in terms of physicality and in terms of just that, all of that, that Six Nations stuff is kind of true. They're just used to tougher things, and their maul was working, but it was just the composure to convert. That one before half time was the most criminal one, where it was 32 minutes, they got a penalty that's kickable, turn it down, go for the scrum. From that scrum, Peel blind with the scrum half, and there's just just one pass try, and he doesn't give the pass, gets swallowed up, gets turned over, and they exit again. And then 2 minutes later, when they get another kickable penalty, they kick it this time because they're a bit more contrite after butchering a surefire try because your halfback didn't throw the pass. It's a bit wild.
Definitely, Callum Brady had a tough day, and is definitely not a patch on Varney, who was there in his place. But that was that game, and credit to Uruguay for keeping it tight. There was another game that also kicked off at 1 o'clock on the Saturday, the curtain raiser kickoff time, and that was between Scotland and Japan.
I love this game, to be honest. I enjoyed it quite immensely, because it was Japan's best showing of the autumn, bar none, including the Portugal game and all that, which they won. But they were in it. They were a little behind throughout because they were struggling to break down the Scottish defence. Actually, guys like Harris were having a really good time shutting them down, but they were remaining disciplined and moving the pill well enough. They were both Matsushima and Hogg were finding a bit of space on the ball in the early exchanges, so it was we could have a shootout again, and it kind of played out that way. But Scotland, unlike in Japan in the World Cup a few years ago, where it looked like Japan had a little bit more to them than Scotland for the whole game, and it ended up being that way. Japan in this one looked a little bit short of what Scotland were bringing, and we kind of knew that going in. Scotland had good form going in, and so they were keeping them at arm's length, but weren't weren't able to put them to bed entirely until the very death. It was only in the 79th minute they made it a 2-score game at 29-20.
29-20 it finished, and it was as you rightly point out, it was probably a little disappointing from Scotland. I know when they kicked that kick to make it 29-20, Finn Russell was kind of throwing some shapes and wanted to go to the corner. They were disappointed with the second half. They played a pretty good first half. They did, where they opened up a comfortable lead,
including a good clutch try just at half time, which is like good thing to do in a tight game like that.
There was some vintage Finn and Stewie kind of plays.
Yes, there were. Stewie's try was a highlight of the game because he set it all going with a counter attack from his own thing and a lovely pass out wide to kind of have Harris break into the 22. And then later running a nice line off Finn to finish it all off was a good score.
Finn giving a delicious little ball as well, just again with the no look, the soft hands, always adds a bit of deception even to the simple balls.
And it makes a half a second's difference. Yeah,
indeed. And his wide pass for the Darcy Graham try at the end was another peach off the left hand. But in the second half, again, it started to go awry, and we saw that against the Springboks, where when the passes stopped sticking, they got a little floundersome.
Sure.
And there will be cause for some concern for the Scots. I think as good as Japan played in this game, they definitely were better than they were against Ireland or Portugal.
Both on defence and an attack, they just had a bit more to them. They were starting to find a better tempo for their offence to start working.
You forget that they were only together a few weeks. They were kind of finally gelling. But at the same time, Scotland, had they been a bit more organised and a bit more composed, should have imposed themselves physically on the game, gone through their phases, gone through their sets with a little more clinicality and a little more control, and found a few more scores, and not had it be the close game that it ended up being. Although you do have to credit Japan.
They some great games in the second half. That set piece move from the midfield scrum that used Nakamura's boot to find a perfect 22 or 50-22 into the 5 metre, and from that then you have Tatafu, who we flagged coming off the bench to join that line out and just barnstorm over, and he does that like he's skittled the mish in that contact. He's a proper fierce unit to be unleashing on the bench.
He's one of the better number 20s out there in terms of back row impact that he can bring on, because their starters aren't that physical.
No,
so he comes on,
with the exception maybe of Jimeno.
He comes on though and shocks teams, and he does that consistently. Even in the 60-5 shellacking they took against Ireland, he actually shocked some of the Irish tacklers in that game.
It's true.
There's a lot to like about the Japanese team, but in truth, they were a little worse off than the Scots, but they did have some lovely plays. Matsushima had a great game.
He did.
Him and Nakamura had a little telepathy. Nakamura put a little grubber in the build up to one of their scores as well that Matsushima recovered. He was great on kick return.
It was himself and Hogg in full flight on kick return, just made it a very pretty watch, which is it like they're both very pretty teams. I kind of wouldn't hate to see them play annually, just regardless, just have one in Japan next year, have one in Scotland the year after. I like this game. I enjoyed watching it, and like any other weekend, a 29-20 banger like this, which was competitive and had some compelling moments, could have been a highlight of the weekend, but it ended up being overshadowed because of the early kickoff nature of it, and then what happened later on. But a really good game and a good win from Scotland to sign off their season, and probably a tough old year for Japan to dust off, but they're still growing and they'll still be
it's a long way to go. Tough series for Japan, but they finished with a more creditable performance against a good Scottish side. True. So they'll take some positives from that. There was also another game on that window between Russia and Chile. It was the one Southern Hemisphere win of the weekend. We're going to go into a bit more depth on that game a little later on in the show, because we're going to be previewing the second leg of that, one of the few games going ahead this weekend. Actually going ahead today as you're watching on Friday at midday, for those who are interested in watching. So we'll run through that a little later in the show, what happened in that game. But we're going to move on now and discuss another interesting Tier 2 matchup between Romania and Tonga. Now, we put out a video on this last week, and we were talking about the likelihood that Romania being organised might see at home against the kind of hodgepodge Tongans. And then obviously just after we put the video out, Romania put out a side with 10 changes, and then all of the talk was, well, they're not going to be Tonga now. They go out and beat them anyway.
Oh, they beat them very well, in fact. It was a good game, and credit to Tonga, they played a good game as well, scored a couple of nice tries.
Had a 20-13 lead at one point, but ended up losing the game 32-20.
Yeah, it was 20-all at one point, and then from there, that last quarter, you could see the fitness starting to tell on the Tongans, and the fatigue, and the organisation of the Romanians and the discipline of the Romanians, kind of seeing them home. They kicked 12 unresponded points, or points unresponded to ice the game at 32-12.
And they finally got a bit of ball. They the most underrated thing about this Romanian team is what they do with the ball now.
Yeah.
Like they have a very solid set piece, but they launch off it. For much of that game, Tonga were on the attack. Romania were having to defend.
Yeah.
Tonga did have most of the possession in the game and ended up building that 20-13 lead because of it.
Mm-hmm.
But as towards the tail end of the half, as you point out, the Tongans did tire, and Romania got to launch off a few midfield set pieces. And there were lovely stuff. There was bits of deception. There was a couple of screenplays. There was a couple of inside balls to wingers that resulted in offloads. Kept ploughing forward. Caught the Tongans offside, chipped over 3.
Yeah.
And they did that consistently towards the tail end of the game.
Yeah.
And it was very, very impressive. This again was with a changed strip. They didn't have their usual starters in there, but the same organisation, the same really well coached
systems, people slotting in and out is exactly what you want. Now a few key men were still out there as well for them in terms of the changes. It was like it wasn't a wholesale in terms
they
of the
did
offense.
have Vasa in the 13 shirt, but Tudor Boulder, who comes in at 10, slots every kick.
Yeah, lovely.
There's building some real depth over in Romania, and when you consider a year ago or in the build up to the last World Cup, I'd suppose you'd say
when they were losing games, they had no notion or no experience of losing to teams that they normally are handling, and they were definitely on the decline. And then their government were trying to nick their lovely stadium on them, and it was all down in the dumps.
Well, when they didn't qualify for the World Cup the last time out, people thought this was a decline. I think Canada can take some solace in what the Romanians are doing, because they have a grassroots base, they have a supporter base in the country for rugby. It does exist there. And because of that, like a very shrewd appointment, as it turns out, in Andy Robinson, and a bit of direction has actually got them to a place where they're really
steadied the ship first, and now kind of they are on the increase. They're no longer declining; they are improving.
Oh yeah, they're getting
palpably.
It started with it started with the forward pack and the defense. Married with a good kicking game, that to work on their discipline, and now they're building an offense.
Yeah.
And every game they seem to be getting quicker and sharper and better.
Yeah.
Really, really impressive from Romania, and unfortunate for the Tongans. I think obviously if they had a full squad to choose from, and if they had a proper campaign with their coach and everything, then you're going to stand more of a chance. But gone are the days where you can assemble a kind of a hodgepodge squad and rock up to some of these Rugby Europe teams and expect to get an easy win. Those days are going. Some of these teams are very good.
It's true. Yeah, and the organisation is the main thing that you're looking for from Romania, in terms of just things that are being done well at Tier 2 level. Good discipline, good organisation, good fitness as well. Saw them through in the end. Really, really professional last quarter from a team that, with as you were saying, a lot of changes and an excuse to be a little disjointed in those areas, but when the game was in the balance, they kind of iced it very, very clinically, which is quite impressive for the Oaks.
Well, sure. I mean, like if you would have taken a Romanian team in the past, 46% possession, so Tonga owning the ball, 42% territory, 122 tackles made in the game for Romania.
Yeah.
And they only conceded 20 points, 2 tries. That's very impressive against a team that is physical, that did sit them down on a few plays.
And the 2 tries were taken very well. It's tough to blame defensive systems for well played Tonga, because it was well played Tonga. A few nice passes found the outside, and they do have physicality, especially when they had the energy to throw it about. And they did break a few tackles, but ultimately didn't break the Romanians, who managed to get good clinical tries themselves. The maul worked very well for the first one, and actually a very good snipe from the replacement halfback for the second one, kind of exposing those Tongan pillars for sometimes a little bit kind of leggy in the second half, and he definitely was just kind of scooted in.
He had a very good game himself. Suragiu, the Romanian 9, 36 years of age, but he had a fine game. So
Indeed,
he was kicking from the base of the ruck very well, pinning the Tongans back
just
on
playing
occasion.
Good territory, trying to be smart.
Played a smart game and took a nice try, so fair play to him.
Indeed, absolutely. But credit to Romania. They sign off their year with serious momentum now, because it's been a very good autumn campaign from them, beating Uruguay. Looking very, very comfortable. Obviously, doing the Netherlands as they should do, and did very professionally again. Back in the hunt for that second place spot in the Rugby Europe, and just positioned very nicely. The Oaks.
And given the fact that they get to host Portugal, they'll be bullish about taking that automatic qualification spot next year. But they do go on ice until February, and we'll be looking forward to that one as well, with much anticipation. Absolutely. Because Romania look a very fine side. The other game, the very interesting game, took place in Spain, in Madrid, between the two Tier 2 heavyweights, Georgia and Fiji. It finished 15 apiece.
Yeah, it was excellent.
It was
Tier 2's rugby. Well, Tier 2 rugby's ultimate clash of styles just delivered another corker here. It was good.
Well, you called it the Springboks against the All Blacks last week of Tier 2.
Yeah.
And it very much played out like a Springbok All Black game.
Yeah, the Springboks dominating up front in that Georgia were just... They arrived to the pitch more than Fiji. They bossed. The first quarter was 6-0 to them. They were doing the plan perfectly. They were edging territory, edging contacts, manoeuvring better than the Fijians around the park. And then the kind of a game-breaking moment that kind of epitomised the game came, I think, in the 23rd minute when the Fiji were on the attack, one of their rare forays when they managed to have a bit of ball. They got a little loose, helter-skelter. Vola tried a speculative enough little dink through grubber, and it was blocked, and Lobzanidze ran forward and got a toe to it. From an offside position, he was ahead of the block, and he kicked it, hacked it on, but that wasn't called, so play on. And he actually regathered it in the 22, but then he was at the base, and the panic from there, because Georgia traditionally, when they get to the 22, and whenever they play Rugby Europe, when they get to the 22, they settle down, go through phases, make you work on the defence and slow down and play there. But the bad habits against Fiji and the helter-skelter nature, they'd just gone the coast to coast, their halfbacks on the deck, so in goes the winger and fires it through his legs. It nearly bounces into touch. Kavesa of the 13 just grabs it, fires it back infield to Lamani, the halfback from Fiji, who just streaks up the other end, finds a man and who goes in untouched then. And that was it, 6-5 in a heartbeat, and that was kind of the dynamic of this game.
Yeah, it was a very cheap try to give up. It was well taken by Fiji on the wing to Imamba, getting a rare foray forward.
Yeah.
But it was a cheap one from Georgia, and they'll live to regret that. I think both sides had issues minding the ball, but I mean Georgia were dominant in this game.
They were.
It was their best performance in many areas that I've seen in a long time. From a scrummaging point of view, even in Rugby Europe, apart from against the likes of the Netherlands or those really smaller nations, I can't remember a scrum as dominant. And against a Fijian scrum that was causing Wales some problems last week.
To be fair to it,
Penny
the Fijian scrum in the second half managed to get a bit going when they could.
One or two scrums they kind of hung with them, but there were 5 penalties to Georgia at the scrum, and there should have been a 6th and a 7th.
Yeah,
that was as dominant a scrummaging performance. That was old school Georgia, just going forward at every scrum. Nailing it. It was a huge foundation for them. And then the other huge point, that's such a difference between this year and last year when they went, whatever it was, 38-7 down against Fiji, and then took a couple of late tries to pad the score, or even just a one late try. I think it was 38-14 that game. In 12 months, the thing that's changed the most dramatically is the defense. Much more proactive, physical defense, using their physicality on the defensive end. I think I count on one hand. I think maybe twice they were bumped off a tackle in the contact, but for the rest of it, it didn't matter if it was Tuisova, if it was Mata, it was Kunavula, whoever it was who was taking it up was getting smashed. And that was really, really impressive from the Georgians. They made shite of the breakdown.
They did. They were bossing it for the majority of the game.
And actually, their two halfbacks, as good as Lamani and Vola had been, Lobzanidze and Tato were head and shoulders above them. And actually, Lobzanidze had some great defensive plays as well as some great kicks. He was just game for the whole game of it. And Georgia were all over them, and I think we'll hit a familiar beat when we talk about the Springboks, but they'll be kicking themselves that they didn't manage to score more and they didn't put the
15 points
away.
From Tato's boot were all they managed, 5 kicks, and then Fiji managed to just grab 2 tries, and that's kind of a good illustrative difference. Actually, the last try was Bill Mata after a nice little sequence, well earned, because they had to earn it. They had to go through multi-phase, find some good hands on. Like their forwards finally found their way into the game in the second half. Actually, their 3-pointer that they kicked to make it 9-8 was also kind of lovely interplay between Kunavalu and Nakarawa, all getting offloads away, finding space, trying to get seams, and they earned a penalty that they kicked. But it was few and far between from Fiji. They weren't stringing it together. They were under pressure.
Well, sequence that was the try was their best sequence of the game. They managed to generate a bit of tempo. It was a lovely touch from Tuisova to put Mata in, just beating the blitz, getting over the top of it, and it was positive from a Georgian point of view in that you made them earn it. But the cheat, they'll live to regret the cheap try they gave up. But by and large, very positive game for them. Their defensive hustle, I mean, they spent much of the game defending in the second half, winning penalties, kicking it downfield, but probably mismanaging the middle third of the pitch a little bit. allowing Fiji to come back in, but then defending them gamely.
Yeah.
And it was a bit like, it was a great game. It was definitely very entertaining from that point of view. I did enjoy the clash of styles and what was going on. I enjoyed seeing the Georgians impose their will and just seeing how much that team has improved.
Yeah.
But it was also a scrappy game as well. Like,
True.
neither side minded the ball particularly
No,
well.
that's definitely
And
true.
that's a work on for both.
Yeah.
Like, when you're dialed out, when you have they have these moments where they switch off and give up possession too cheaply.
Yes.
Like, they do need, both sides need to mind the ball a little better
Definitely
at the
true.
breakdown area, and both sides have targeted each other with much success, and
Yeah.
hence there were all kinds of turnovers
There
going
were,
on.
yeah,
and
colourful, good back row plays from both,
yeah.
and just good hustle from both, and it's a great game, and it, like, Georgia will be the more encouraged just given the gulf that was between these two sides the last two times they played, in terms of Fiji getting the better of them, and quite comprehensively too. This was a much tighter game. Georgia were much more able to impose their game on Fiji. The gripe, the kind of caveat is, of course, they didn't get the win. They feel they've done everything but get the win in it, and it's unfortunate. But it was actually Fiji with the last kind of foray forward to try and nick a win themselves, and it was defended well. And then ultimately Tato kicked it out from his own 22 to take the draw contritely, which was a fair result, because it was just illustrative of the strengths and weaknesses of both of these sides, and how they do kind of match up well to kind of just cancel each other out. If Georgia can play their game more sensibly, they could manage to do them, but similarly Fiji are never too far away from unpicking them at any given moment. So it's just, I think it's going to be a great contest whenever these two meet for the next few years.
As they should do every year.
Yeah.
I mean, it was definitely the heavyweight tier 2 clash.
Yeah.
And great to see Georgia really back to their best after a tough time of it in 2019.
Yeah.
They've really come on since then. And yeah, that was a very fine game. A draw played out between the two tier 2 sides. Fiji getting a rare result for a Southern Hemisphere side.
That's true.
But we move on now to Twickenham, where England and South Africa played out, and a really good game.
Yeah, humdinger.
27-26 win for Eddie Jones's side. Oh, this was great. This was great.
Yeah,
I really
good
just
game.
the dynamics of this game were so enjoyable. It started with classic Eddie Jones. Like, his picture always involves a quick start that's planned out, and when they were game up front for those opening few minutes, they really made it count on the scoreboard. They had a plan. They targeted Villy LaRue in the air, won a few competitive kicks, got themselves in a position where they could launch off a line out, and did so really, really well.
True.
And ended up pivoting out to the left-hand side for Tuolangi to score. Then a little later on, after the Boks chip over 3, not too much later, they get in again. They pull the trigger again. They're not going for threes, they're going for tries. And the young man, Freddie Stewart, crashes over through Reinach. Brilliant stuff.
Brilliant finish from him as well. He had a few Boks to carry with him, and he did brilliantly to kind of ride the contact and get in, and it was perfect start for England.
Exactly right. It was their picture to a T.
Yeah.
But then from there, it starts going sour. The Springboks start getting on top. I think one of the turning points was when Kyle Sinclair unnecessarily got an Oxenche's face.
Yes, that was...
and turned Oxenche to Super Ox.
Yes, it was quite an ill-advised Sinclair moment, and he does have them. Like, he's sometimes a little silly.
He didn't
all right.
know what he was dealing with.
No,
He thought he was game in that, because they had hustled themselves a couple of early calls at the scrum, because they were going early. The Boks were mistiming the call.
It's a classic blunder to mistake that for dominance when you haven't actually set a scrum yet, and you're playing the Springboks. Like, it's damn silly.
It started going haywire, and Eddie Jones, for all of his talk about the forwards, we don't have a weak pack. They think we have a weak pack. We'll show them who's a weak pack. Their pack got dominated, and it looked for all money like the Springboks were just going to go to work. They were winning penalty after penalty after penalty. They were getting down the field.
A monster all day.
They were
again.
Edsmith was absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
But then it was the England backs who pulled it off.
Young backline, really, like, starting with that Freddie Stewart finish, which is just like vindication, as you were saying last week. He's just, every now and then someone will just grab a jersey and go like, I'll have that for 10 years, thanks very much. Looks like Freddie Stewart might be one of those, because they've been kind of giving minutes to guys like Furbank and kind of chopping and changes in the fullback, and Elliot Daly.
Is he the guy? Can we maybe play Slade at fullback?
Yeah.
Have we tried Tuolangi at fullback? All kinds of stuff. And here comes this 20-year-old kid who's a monster for 20 years old.
Big unit already. Carrying Springboks over the line from 5 out.
Fabulous looking player. Had an awesome game. But then the play of the match was off that line out. On 62 minutes, they were about to fall behind.
No, they had 18, 17.
Exactly.
The Boks had managed to kick their way to 18 points.
And it looked like, that was going to be curtains, and then they just strike, and it was really a fabulous piece of play right off the top of the line out.
I think it's Curry into Slade, and Slade with the flat pass, looking at Marcus Smith out the back, but giving it to Marchand, scything through.
Slade had a brilliant game.
Yeah.
And Marchand cuts the two centres apart. It splits Dale Indy and Am like you never see, and then flicks it inside to Rafi Quirk on the perfect trailing line. Bang! Try straight off the line out. We did what the Springboks could not do. And that was the narrative of the game for me. The Springboks were absolutely dominant. Their forward pack were fabulous. The bomb squad had an incredible impact. They broke the England pack, and yet they couldn't win the game because they don't score quick enough. And England, by contrast, like you'd never see an England team, bullied up front but won the game because they struck. They found 3 tries. They found 2 at the start when they were game for the contact and they were matching it up front. Bang, bang.
We forgot to mention the first one, actually, which was Tuilagi.
I mentioned that,
but it was just unfortunate that his game was done. But Joe Marchand came in and slotted in beautifully in centre. He added a lot.
Didn't he just? A lovely player. And the makeup of this young backline looks like it has a really nice balance to it. And I think you're looking at it and thinking maybe the role for Faz going forward is to be that bench 10.
Maybe.
Because the way that Slade is playing, he's your second distributor. He's playing so well.
Yeah. And ideally you want either Manu or Marchand, who looks very good.
In that centre with Marcus Smith as well. And then out wide, Freddie Stewart, as we mentioned, class player.
Actually, of all the backline, Johnny May looked a little dialed out. He had a few quirky, weird moments, including
slipping on the turf a bit.
A quick tap that he made a meal of. A few weird kind of things happening around Johnny May that was like, compared to his usual high standards, and with the backs doing so well, it was unusual to see him.
No, it's true.
Out.
He wasn't great, but you would have faith in him to recover.
Oh yeah, he's class.
But no, I think it was totally a deserved win for England, despite the fact that they got bullied up front.
Yeah.
They aptly punished the Boks, and the Boks have food for thought.
They do. It's probably a timely enough reminder for them that they need to hurry up and make their presence known on the scoreboard when they're dominating games. Make it count for a bit more, because like when they went behind by that try, they went and found that Mapimpi try really nicely, actually.
Yeah.
Good pass from Yankees, good pass from Am, nice wide balls, but a good sequence of play as well. So like they can find tries. Mapimpi's been scoring for fun this November. They are definitely missing the kind of Colby factor on the right edge with Creel there. They're a little less penetrative down that way, and that's going to contribute because they end up milking penalties before they can make the incision, and then they end up deciding to kick those penalties.
It's not just Colby. I mean, the call to put Jesse Creel in there and to send Sabu and Kosi and Afalele Fassi home was ridiculous. I mean, he doesn't have the pace to play wing, and especially like it's one of the things we've always said about the Springboks. The reason it works is because you have those lethal wingers who can take tries. That's why it works. Otherwise, it's too blunt. Otherwise, you're veering towards Ledesma Pumas territory,
indeed,
where you're game for all kinds of contacts and set pieces, but you don't score enough. And that was the problem with the Boks. There were 2 problems, and one of them was the defence. And they'll have some things to iron out with the defence, because this has been oft-hailed as the best defence in the world, but it was unpicked a couple of times. True. Henry Slade unpicked it twice. Off line-outs. The first one in the build-up to the Stewart try, fizzed a pass, got outside of Am, who was just caught a little narrow, and then that got Malins to the edge, and that ended up being the Stewart try. And then the second of which, it's just a very weird picture from the Boks, where Dale Indy gets lost and ends up covering the same defender as Yankees, and Am meanwhile is pushing out, and the two of them are just so disconnected.
Massive hole.
Exactly, and like when you're 2 centres, especially 2 who've played as much as those guys together, a bit like centre backs in soccer, you don't need the gap between them to be that big ever. Especially off first phase, off a set piece, the 2 of them need to be connected and communicative, and they weren't, and they were unpicked, and it cost them. And then the other thing that cost them is just so much dominance for so little reward. I mean, Pollard, yes, he kicked over a few kicks. He also let a couple go by. Elton Yankees missed a conversion.
Why did he kick that at all? Because Franz Stein kicked a lovely conversion that could, or a lovely penalty that could have been the game-winning penalty, and he is still a nice man with the boot. But it was another dubious. Like, just because Elton's on the pitch, like France was on the pitch as well. Of course, France kicks those. He's a much better kicker than Elton.
And a much better clutch kicker, particularly than Elton. And even though he's more used to taking the ones from straight in front than the ones on the side, his little hooking motion, his little draw that he gets on those kicks would have been perfect from that left hand side. True. So I agree with you on that. But I mean, just in terms of the points they left behind, They left behind a couple of 3-pointers. They left behind that 2 points from the try. Also, on the couple of occasions that they went to the corner and they didn't score, they actually came out with nothing.
Yeah.
So they're just, at the moment, for all of their brilliance up front, not as clinical as they need to be to beat the top sides in these tight games away from home.
Yeah, that is fair. Yeah, and they still are in grand shape. Like, it's not a result that means you have to throw the rattle out of the pram at all, or throw the toys out. Like, they were very, very dominant, impressively dominant in the forward battle, which is still very encouraging. It's still what they build their game
Insane.
on.
Like Vincent Cock on Joe Marler. I have never seen that happen to Joe Marler. It just doesn't.
Yeah, the domination they bring off the bench. And you couple that with the fact that Oxenche had such a kind of bullish performance himself, and it was like, they're frightening in the forward unit. They definitely are the most fearsome pack you'll face in World Rugby.
Etzebeth just dominating the game,
destroying
Itoje in that battle.
Yeah, he absolutely did destroy Itoje.
I was raging at Elton Yankees and the play at the death because he once England took the lead with that kick, the Boks had a restart and it panned to Etzebeth with this just look in his face, and I was thinking to myself, Jesus, Elton, just give him a chance, just put it up there, let him get there, and he'll make a play. And he didn't. He overcooked it. It was way too deep, and Etzebeth ends up giving up a penalty because he's chasing after it like a bull rushing man. It's just way too far. If he put that in the right spot, I have no doubt in my mind that Etzebeth would have regathered that. And they would have a chance.
Just having that kind of game, for sure. He was very, very impressive, and putting his hand up was like, "What about me in terms of World Rugby? What are you doing?"
Overlooked a little.
He's been awesome, including dominating Itoje in Lions colours or in England colours. It doesn't matter. The Boks still mighty impressive, but England's young backline, very good finds to uncover at this juncture as well going forward. Guys like Marcus Smith slotting in, doing very, very well, kicking that game-winning kick as well, but running the offense rather nicely.
And he's been put in a nice situation where Slade is often at first distributor. Like Eddie Jones is clearly looking to mind him in his early, not looking to shock him.
But it was he got up and kicked it after it was on him that penalty as well. Actually, Visa with a stupid entry to the ruck in which he kind of just kneed him when he was down. It was a carry from Marcus, and he saw that he was on the deck and runs in and knees him and gets pinned, and you're like, that's silly. Like, obviously you want to hit the young 10 and whatnot, but at this juncture that's just silly. And
the game-winning pen, was that not Herschel for going off his feet?
No, I think the decision was for coming in late and kind of kneeing Marcus in the back. He definitely did that anyway. There were a couple
of penalties in that breakdown, and it was definitely a fair call. Yes, and it all came from that terrible moment, a terrible way for Khaleesi's season to end.
Unfortunate, just mistiming it in the air and getting himself carded. And actually, it wasn't a great game from Khaleesi either, because for that Freddie Stewart try earlier in the game, he kind of just before it arrives in Stewart's hands, Khaleesi's on the blind side, and then he hits the dead ruck, and then it goes back out to him, and he's kind of last man into that contact and can't really make the hit.
Doesn't notice that it's Reinach out there, and he needs a bit of flanker help.
Indeed,
he also had a couple of lovely moments on offense, but he had that moment where he just couldn't connect with Creel. Although I really think that Creel overran it.
He did overrun it. He demonstrated the not Colby-isms of him as well, because that was a moment that they could have just won the game then and there as well. It was very fine margins, and for all that not being clinical, it's still a one-score game, same as it was in the All Blacks when they lost
through the
that
second
one.
Half, they looked like they were going to steamroll. They were steamrollering them.
Yeah, it's rare enough that you see a forward win the battle and not end up winning that team not end up winning the game. But this is an example of it.
They were so dominant that they scored 26 points and were totally not clinical.
Yes,
that's how dominant they were.
Indeed,
their dominance should have yielded 40.
And if you give the All Blacks or even England or anything that kind of platform, it would be 40 or 50 or 60 plus, and that's kind of the issue for them going forward. And it is a work on, but from England's point of view, they've worked on a fair bit. They've exercised some demons of that Rugby World Cup, although they'll still be concerned about the sheer power of the Springboks and that game, but definitely good to get the win. A very good November from England as well, like a lot of good players. 3 from 3, can't complain at all, and rolling into 2022 with a bit of momentum are Eddie Jones's charges. I like it. Never have I ever seen an England team win when they get dominated up front, so that's true. A huge positive for them. We're going to move on though now and look at the other game, the second of the sort of major triple header that was going on from Saturday afternoon into evening with the big three teams. Wales hosting the Wallabies in Cardiff. Another banger. Absolutely.
29-28 win for Wales. A much needed win for Pivac's men. And yeah, last gasp, drama. This game had it all.
It did. It definitely had it all. It was great. Wales are impressive to manage to salvage a win, and it's back-to-back wins now. A cheeky bit of momentum for them somehow. But some good plays on either side. It started really, really promisingly from the Wallabies. They arrived to play. They looked a bit more sharp. Lovely kick from Paisami, who's just been dialed all autumn long. Win, lose or draw. He's just been in impeccable form. Lovely little chip through for Kellaway, who's been scoring tries for fun all year as well.
Yeah, he takes a shot there as well. Takes a shot off the ball and then just holds his feet and attacks that ball. Yeah. It's a really well taken confident wingers finish.
Yeah, he's been at that all year. He looks mighty impressive. But yeah, that was in was it the 7th or 8th minute that they took the lead 7-0, and we're looking very good, moving the ball very well. Wales came on an attack. Adam Beard on the carry. High shot, heads meet, and that's a red suddenly, and it's 14 Aussies then, and that was the 15th minute that they lost Valentini to a high shot, and it was a red.
Just a huge moment in the game, and a terrible way for Valentini's season to end. He's been so good this year, but it's a really reckless action, head-on-head contact. He gets his angle all wrong. Yeah. When you're the tackler, the onus is on you to dip. Exactly. It's on you. If you lead with the head and go in high like that, it's just always a red card under the modern laws, and so unfortunately he walks, and we'll talk a little bit about the controversies that arose from that later on,
because there are more aspects of the game that were controversial. Well, the next one was Beale seeing yellow. Shortly after that, they were reduced to 13 for Beale slapping the ball down forward, and that's a penalty. You're not allowed to do
penalty yellow card. I mean, it was that was another deliberate one, and they were a little ill-disciplined, as they have been all tour.
It was only then, when they were down to 13, that Wales managed to cross their try line first. They had kicked a couple, but they managed to kick themselves, take a lead at that point only to, I think it was 13-10, and then a few kicks were exchanged for 16-13 at half time. But the next source of controversy came early in the second half when the Wallabies had the ball, were moving it. Tompkins stuck an arm out, batted it down. But the play on was the call, because it didn't go forward, it went backwards, and the only one playing the whistle was Tompkins, and off he trotted under the posts to score a 7-pointer and give a 10-point lead to Wales, which was pretty massive at that point in the game. But
huge,
definitely one that the Wallabies were feeling aggrieved about, although you got to play the whistle, and ultimately when you look at it, it went backwards, so it's not a knock-on if it goes backwards. So,
can't be a knock-on if it goes backwards.
It's one of those risk-reward plays. You stick an arm out, very similar to Beale, you stick an arm out hopefully, but if it goes forward, it's a yellow card against you. If it goes backwards, it's play on, it's a try. It's a risk-reward thing, but well done Tompkins for playing the whistle and grabbing a try.
They found a way, and to the Wallabies' credit, Wales picked up a yellow card.
They did.
And then the Wallabies going 14-on-14. Curtly Beale just stands up Halaholo, does him one-on-one.
Absolutely beautiful bit of footwork.
The trailing runs is just classic Wallabies. Pass, try, Nick White, scrummies in.
Yeah.
Great stuff. They were very impressive, the Wallabies. Despite being down to 14, it was one of those games that was kind of good for both sides, because the Wallabies, despite going 3 consecutive losses, found a quality performance. Taniela Tupou in that first half as well was everywhere.
Yes, he was.
They were physical, they were sharp, they picked lovely passes, they scored some lovely tries. They were always game for it. They very, very nearly found a win with 14 men.
Well, they found a try with Wales after that try. It was 26-20 because they kicked their way to a 6-point lead, and then again Paisami, I think he had 4 clean line-out breaks in this game, but the last of the one was chief among them, because from the middle third straight into the 22, and they actually spread it very well when they managed to get it back and find Daugunu on the left wing, who finished expertly in that corner.
Gave it a lovely little dot down.
Perfect. Didn't manage the conversion, but that made it a 1-point game. And then they traded 3-pointers for the last game. Curtly Beale kicked what could have been the game-winning pen at 78 minutes or something, and coolly slotted it over. But then Wales were able to recover the ball and find some good territory with a bit of good industrious play to get them into the red zone and milk a penalty then and kick the winning score. But it was great tit for tat battle.
I loved the little Gareth Davis break in the middle to that.
That's what made it. He
won
the game.
He's the guy for me. If you're Wales, he embodies what that Welsh team is. He's cheeky, and when he sees a gap, he takes it. And this Welsh team do take cheap tries no other team.
They do,
and it does frustrate the bejesus out of teams who play them. them.
Yeah.
They just find their way to cheap scores.
Yeah.
But they're very good at it. I mean, I think Gareth Davis is a much better spearhead for that than Thomas Williams, and if he has any kind of form, he should be stuck in there, because Williams wasn't great this autumn.
No, and
they didn't
Hardy hasn't really had a run of games
they didn't
either.
give Gareth Davis enough minutes, and then he comes in and pulls off a game-winning play.
Yeah, his
against
ceiling
the
is
Wallabies.
probably high. Like, they're all very similar scrum halves, similar mould in terms of
Yeah.
what their game is, in terms of just quick clearing the ruck, bit of a running game, but mainly just clearing the ruck as quick as can be. But the highest ceiling of all of them is definitely Gareth Davis.
Like his performance, he's the best running threat.
Well, yeah, when you look at his World Cup 2019 showing, like, he was
fabulous.
unbelievable in that tournament, and none of the other two halfbacks or the other halfbacks from Wales have demonstrated an ability to get to that pitch or that level, whereas Gareth Davis can consistently do it.
It was a fabulous game of rugby. I think stolen a little bit by Wales. Wales, they were very, very good in moments, but I think they do need to think a little bit on, especially when you're looking at the Six Nations. As much as we joke, you're champions, how can you be fifth seed? Yeah. There's a reason that they're fifth seed, and
that started by drawing and then losing to Argentina in the summer. And
their forward pack isn't fronting up at the moment. It's getting blown away by just about every opponent it faces, despite some game performances from the likes of Jenkins and Basham. Ultimately, they're losing just about all of those battles. True. And their defense is leaking. It's just leaking scores and line rates here, there, and everywhere. And I did like the Halaholo Tompkins selection for its ballsiness and its offense.
For its form, yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, like, the guys, neither of them make dominant tackles, ever.
And Halaholo got absolutely ankle broken by Curtly Beale
and done a few times. His man Paisami had an absolute stormer. So it was like there's problems for Wales on the defensive side of the ball. There's problems for them up front. Well, and I don't know if they'll be able to make up the difference against the quality of side they're going to be facing in the Six Nations.
The flip side is that the team,
they wouldn't have won this game without the red card. On this occasion, I feel confident saying that.
Oh, that's undoubtedly true. Well, the Wallabies looked like they were playing the better game from year one, and it was just unfortunate that they got to mind the discipline on that thing, and nothing is served by calling foul and calling controversy, because not only are you wrong, which they are, but like the reflection has to go inwards. And like, there's examples of it. Like, Lachie Swinton came off the bench and put in a lovely tidy 20-minute shift where he made like 10 tackles. He was very, very busy. All of them were low, and like his red card was a year ago for exactly the same thing that they got red carded for in this game, going too high in the contact, making contact with the head. It's a red, and yet in both instances a year apart, you listen to the Wallaby coverage or the Aussie coverage and they're shocked and incredulous as if it's an injustice or a surprise. And it's like, you can complain about whether it should be, or you can, like James Slipper on the pitch said, but he didn't mean it, or but it's an accident or something. It's like, you're the captain, you've been playing under these laws. Like, you can maybe campaign outside off the pitch for it should be this, or it ought to be changed to that. But there's no excuse for not knowing the laws right now, and like it's wild stuff to hear.
Exactly. Like, I watched the game with the British commentary on our end. We didn't have the Sean Maloney coverage and the Aussie coverage. And as I was watching it, I was bemused by Slipper's chat as one of the things. Like, he was definitely there was a culture clash with Mike Adamson, and like, he is frustrating at the best of times.
Oh yeah, well, both sides had quick taps overruled. Like, I've still yet to see him let a quick tap go.
No,
he's got some terrible habits.
Hates quick taps, and Slipper did come up to one point. Probably his most reasonable point was just going like, "Why are we doing TMOs at every break and play? It's killing the momentum in the game."
Yeah.
And Adamson was like, it's an important decision."
Yeah.
And that's just kind of who he is, and that's definitely a frustration. But despite Slipper's chat very much annoyed me on that high shot, as he said, because is it not accidental? And I was like, James, you're the captain, you don't know the law. Yeah. It doesn't matter if it's accidental. It was reckless. He went in high, his technique is all over the place, and he goes head to head against the ball carrier. That is a red. Know the law. The law of the game. And then it was only after the game, after I watched it, and of course went on to watch all the other great games that went on the weekend, that I discovered that this was apparently a really controversial game.
Like rugby.com.au, like, we're posting controversial Tompkins try and all of this stuff. And it's
the Wallabies, the consensus opinion now is that the Wallabies were robbed. Yeah. And I'm sorry, but like, divorce yourselves. Take the golden goggles off for a second and actually analyse each incident that you're talking about. And to be fair to Mr. Mikeson, he gets them all pretty dead on. I mean, I'm sorry, the Valentini one, you can't give anything else. If you give a yellow there, it's a joke. Yeah. He's gone head to head. It's reckless. He's way too high. He has to do better. Yeah. Like, that is a red card by the modern laws of the game. Know the laws of the game. And then the Welsh one that wasn't a red card. And I understand the confusion on this, but it's not the case that like any head contact is a red. Like to call that the same thing, the Welsh yellow as the Valentini situation, it just wasn't. It was a reckless clean out. It was no good. And he comes in and he kind of drops the shoulder onto the midriff, and that's where the bulk of the contact is. The shoulder into the midriff. That's where the force of the contact is. And on his way through, his trailing arm, it's not a swinging arm, his trailing arm catches the head of your man,
which is a yellow,
with force.
somewhat a harsh yellow you might feel, but it's the same one as what Cody Taylor had in the Ireland game a few weeks back, where it was on Sexton. It looks an innocuous hit because they're both going for the ball, and he just wraps low and then swings up and clips him high, and it's like you caught contact with the jaw. That's like initially head contact is a red, but it's mitigated down because there's no danger to a yellow, clear cut stuff. But you never hear any of that when the Wallabies are commentating. You never hear mitigated back down to this. You never hear the actual guidelines.
And as for the Tompkins incident, as you rightly point out, you can't give a knock on when the ball goes backwards.
Yes,
it's not a knock on. No. Like, I'm sorry, you can kick and scream and moan all day. Kirtley Beals was the exact same. The distinction is that Kirtley's went forward and Tompkins didn't. Like, this is basic stuff in terms of the laws of the game, and everybody's going absolutely mental about it, and I'm sorry, but like he got those big calls correct. It's not bias, it's not rigged World Rugby referees. Like
Northern Hemisphere referees.
Yeah, we've probably gone in a little on the refs in recent weeks, but I like nothing more than to have a go at Mike Adamson. He drives me crazy sometimes, but he got those big calls right, and I'm sorry, they did happen to go against Australia, mostly because their discipline's not in check, which probably has something to do with them not knowing the laws.
Yes.
But I mean, like the hyperventilation that happens after just about every game these days that you lose, that the whistle goes against you, is ridiculous, and it's gas that they can complain so much when they willingly don't know the law. Like, they refuse to learn it, refuse to acknowledge it.
That's my take as well, because I remember it was the same when I was watching. Like, we've watched a lot of rugby over the last few years doing this show, and like when they were doing the ELVs, or the experimental laws to introduce around the aerial contest, when that was getting a concern, when Izzy Folau was still in his pomp for Aussie and all of that, and you had like many of these aerial collisions, so they brought in kind of really clear guidelines, and for a season and a half there were a fair few yellows and reds because there were reckless kind of things, and then there were complaints about it, going like, well, what are you meant to do? And slowly but surely teams adjusted to it, but the last ones to even know about it were you'd be watching Super Rugby in Australia, and it would just those collisions would go, and it's like, there's a red card, completely ignored by the officials and the commentators, and then they're in a test match, and like, because they're not being ref by two Wallaby sides being ref by a domestic ref, we'll just ignore those kinds of things, and the commentators won't know, and then they come in a test match, and then so they go high, they compete in the air, the guy flips over the horizontal, lands dangerously, red card, and they're shocked. They're like, Corbetty's sent off for that? I thought it was a great hit. And you're just going like, no, it's not.
They do a disservice to the game. Like, the Aussie commentators can be great. Sean Maloney's one of the best colour guys out there for sure.
I love him.
One of the best play-by-play guys as well. Yeah, he has enthusiasm for the sport, but just in general, like, they do a disservice to the game when they're so baffled by straightforward decisions.
Yes, they did the same in the France series as well. That this is wrong maneuver. Where
this is wrong.
Yeah, but initially they're crediting Corbetty for a great smash, and it's like
shoulder direct to head.
Yeah, and you're like really upright in the contact, and like none of them even from a Wallaby perspective. Like, when I see a hit like that delivered by an Irishman or by a Leinster man, I'm going like, oh no, I hope they don't look at that. But there's none of that. There's no sense of that. They just carry on, and then they're shocked when they go back for it, and it's just like, as you
rightly point out, the Swinton incident happened over a year ago. So they don't do themselves any favours, and this particular brand of ref bitching has no foundation in the law. No. It is just nonsense on this occasion, and the ref got them right, and Wales played the more disciplined game, played the more streetwise game, you might say. Rode their luck, of course.
Yeah, they've been at that all year. A bit of discipline, bit of street smarts, bit of milking, maybe taking your opponents off such that they get a little loose and you get a yellow card.
Finding the odd cheap play, finding the odd cheap try, like the Ryan Elias set piece move, and getting the job done as they did. So credit to Wales, credit to the Wallabies as well, because they played a great game with 14 men and do look in a healthy place. They definitely ended their season on a high, regardless of the result.
I would agree with that. Yeah, no, there was kind of all doom and gloom, because I believe it's the first in 45 years, first time they've lost all Northern games, but it's not really reflective. There's been a lot more good than bad this year from them, and they brought so many different players on this tour that they've just given a load of minutes to a load of guys in this kind of mid-cycle year, which is not a bad thing. It'll serve them pretty well.
Warming to the task as well. Got a big jackal steal from the big man as well.
He did.
There was some good moments from him too,
for sure.
But we're going to move on now and look at
the
main event of the weekend, and boy oh boy, what an incredible game of rugby this was. Stade de France, Les Bleus. I asked them, to deliver a performance that they have not delivered yet under Galtier, their best performance, their 80-minute show. They did it and then some.
They did.
40 points to 25.
A 15-point win over the All Blacks. Ka-chunk.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I've not seen them. I don't know if they've suffered a defeat like that. Probably not since 2012 when England got them by something similar. But that was incredible. That was from the very first whistle, they were fabulous.
Yeah,
they and the crowd in full flow.
Yeah,
but they worked the All Blacks physically. They matched them on offense. They matched them
skill set for skill set. They've matched them, like we were saying, like the only evidence we've seen for beating the All Blacks was to dominate territory possession and kind of just grind them down that way, which we know France weren't going to do, and France are more likely to engage in a shootout kind of game. Yeah. They did, and they were game for it. It involved guys like Dupont running a beautiful offense initially to get them going round the corner and sitting that offense down, and then guys like Ntamack just playing a flawless game at 10. Yeah. Pretty like his perfect game at 10, like down to taking his try beautifully. That was a really well worked try, lovely little inside move, the big exit play that had everyone talking, the viral moment from his own goal line and just contextually when the All Blacks were storming back into the game to snuff out the comeback with such stylish kind of sexy points as well, because the little gliding out of your thing and then the little no look switch pass to Jaminet on the outside and just away they go. Beautiful French rugby.
Savia's most disgusting play of the year, absolutely killing what would have been the try of the year. They recycled the ball from that contact with Wokey, but Savia didn't let it happen until 10 minutes. I mean, it was an incredible game from the off. The first half, they just started with an absolute plum. Found their way through contacts. I thought Wokey was incredible. But their whole pack, Shea Launch, they stood up. They were winning contacts on the inside. The All Blacks gave them a penalty entrance. Movaka goes in. That second try, just the around the corner. Like the All Black outside to in defence that we were citing, that worked so well against Wales, that worked so well against Australia, that was yielding picks, like really found out by just being a little too soft on the inside. And France just kept going back to it. It was Dupont, and he was giving it just to runner after runner after runner, and it was so effective and so speedy as well. They were getting wingers like Villiers in, cutting those hard lines.
Busy all day.
And then found Ntamack, who just slid in untouched for the score. Lovely little step from him. Like his best show ever in a French jersey or even a Toulouse jersey. He was absolutely fabulous, just wonderful. Every touch a gem, reading the game so well.
Down to the pass he slotted for Wokey for that break as well. After his break, he gets back on his feet, gets into 10, throws a lovely left-handed skip pass out to Wokey.
Posure for days. I mean, I was a doubter, but
he's taken the. I think going into this autumn, you would have said that Jalibert had the 10 jersey with Ntamack in behind, but now it's flipped in my mind, and kind of correctly on form. It's the Toulouse halfbacks with, actually in this instance it was the Bordeaux halfbacks of Luku and Jalibert on the bench, but they do have stocks in both, but those two are the guys, and Ntamack is the guy at the moment. He just danced around the All Blacks.
There was a moment but actually before Movaka's second try when it was 17-6, but France were winning all of the little moments. The All Blacks were absolute deer in headlights. But the camera zoomed in, the sort of artistic French direction that does go on, and it was zooming in on a bunch of the All Black forwards, including Dane Coles, who was of course wearing that shiner for the whole game. But they looked physically and mentally beaten and shattered about 30 minutes into the game, defending their line as the raucous French crowd were jump up and down going
and it was an intimidating kind of cauldron to find yourself in when you're feeling a little weary, and like even the Hackett was a funny old look where it was like a load of them were wearing shiners already, and it was obviously a tough game in Dublin last week as well, but also just a long season illustrated on the face of some of the front row forwards,
and to take on some of these teams away from home at their pump, absolutely dying to get one over on you, and it was too much for them. They were absolutely beaten up. Sam Whitelock and Retallick losing their battle, but to their credit, like they went 24-6 down at the break, absolutely beaten out the gate by the French forward pack first and foremost, but then that dazzling offense spearheaded by Dupont and of course Ntamack as well. Just outplayed, outworked, turned over the ball. Whenever they got the ball back, the Edwards defense was putting them under pressure. They had some claggers like Nepo Lalala's drop. Like they just were so reactive, a little like they were in Dublin, shell shocked and unable to cope. And then they did find their way back in, and they made it exciting, like the All Blacks always do.
They can never write them up. That first try, which was Geordie Barrett did well to grab it, but it was just an illustration of what Aaron Smith brings to you, because it was slow ball on the line. There was no right for him to score it, other than that it was a bullet of a pass out in front of him, so all he has to do is catch and fall over and it's a try. And like his distribution is so good, and I was so excited because as the All Blacks were coming back, we were starting to see that great show of Dupont versus Smith, which
we
is
had our one error from Dupont in the game where actually Retallick and Whitelock on a counter, he caught him just holding the ball, comes straight through over the top of him, they fizz it wide, and Rico Ioane only needs that invitation to slice through the French defence and score. Awesome try, and then they're back in again, and you can feel like the French did get a kick to open that up, but then the All Blacks came back at them again, and you could feel the kind of confidence certainly of the Kiwi fans and commentators growing that this is a familiar narrative, and they found that Artie Savia try just crashing over
that
physicality.
was big from Artie as well. He's a big game player for them when their backs are to the wall.
And then as you point out, Aaron Smith leaves the field. You know, we've just made it a 2-point game.
Yeah, they're still behind, which was what was wild to me, because he was warming to the task. He had a few poor box kicks in the early exchanges that were contributing to France's dominance in the territory. Like, he didn't kick well initially, and it looked like he was kind of struggling to get to the pace of it, more so than Dupont, who's got a full season, probably nearly, or a full kind of pre-season and start of the season. But he was warming to the task, and I was excited because, like, I'm a former halfback as well. I was watching. I was like, these are the two best halfbacks in the world right now. Let's watch them go at it.
Running their offenses.
New Zealand brought on Brad Weber from 60 minutes for the final quarter, while Dupont was not going anywhere and the game was in the balance. And then, like, a bit of a foray that led to a chip ahead that could have been all kinds of pressure for the All Blacks.
The first thing Weber did was chip it straight into touch. He had a bad kick himself.
That's true. He clanger himself. But there was that moment only a few minutes after when Ntamack went up the other end, and kind of then Sevilla went in and killed the ball. He's gone. So suddenly, in like a space of 5 minutes, when the game's in the balance, it's a 2-point game, and the All Blacks removed Aaron Smith willingly from the thing, and then forcibly Artie Sevilla was gone, and that was kind of the game there in a nutshell. Those two guys were too important to lose for them, and France just never let them back in.
Yeah, no, well, indeed. Well, they kind of, it's a funny one. Like, it was 30-25. They probably would be raging that they didn't get a try from that fabulous Ntamack break, although it was still such a huge play given them the sin bin. But Sam Cane, with 12 minutes to go, makes a strip in their own half. They have a huge overlap, and David Havili just without looking panic. And this is like that was so weird to see, where that was one of those moments where you're like, okay, the All Blacks just aren't quite right at the moment. Like, they're just a bit exhausted, because that was an example of a play you just never see from the All Blacks. Because they were out of the game, but all of a sudden turnover ball, all of a sudden Sam Cane has come up with something. Here we go. They have numbers, and just not just in All Black jerseys in years gone by would you never see them make that mistake, but even this season you'd never see Havili make that mistake from 12. Like, he pretty much in the Crusaders, he, like, his hallmark of his play was reading a shooting defence, checking the pass a little bit, and then pump fake, go in, and then float the ball over to where your men in space are. And I'm telling you, if you watch that back, that is on. Like, he's getting a bit of pressure, but he has time. He has time to catch the ball and get it over Pinot and go wide. But it was probably an indication as to what you were seeing in those panicked faces after 30 minutes. Like, they were exhausted, they weren't thinking right, they weren't playing right, and he just, in a state of panic, tips the ball on recklessly, and Pinot takes it off him.
Thanks very much.
Game over.
I'll have this big famous moment as I run into a raucous crowd. Thank you very much. And he did look like in disbelief, like a giddy puppy or something, going, ooh.
It was a great play from him. He ran right into that passing lane and decided, exactly right, decided pressure was the way to go, and boy did he get a result out of it.
100%.
Fabulous play. And then to France's credit as well, after that moment, they spent the last 10 minutes just knocking on the door at the other end. There was no sense of come back from there.
They ended it with a nice emphatic 3-pointer and make it go from 37 to 40 and sign off with style. A deserved 15-point win. They were comfortably better throughout the game, to be honest. It was just, as you say, a perfect game from Ntamack, but Dupont was stellar as well. Still some quality, like Rico is still rapid at 13 was one thing I was going to say. Like, that try was taken so well, because it was between Wokey, who was covering across, and Villiers. And it's like, those guys are not slow by any stretch, even for a lock, which is Wokey.
Compared to Rico, they kind of are.
Serious wheels that he has. They are still not panicking, not pulling the plug really, But yeah, it's a bit of a shock. Back-to-back defeats for the All Blacks, definitely not something they're too used to. And conversely, for the French, a well overdue win for over New Zealand, and just a really good way to sign off their year, where it didn't, like, lots of improvements have been made, and like Toulouse, and for particular that Toulouse spine of the team, they're European champions as well as top Tours champions, so they have managed to kind of build through the club game, but they blew that Aussie tour, which is a shame, although they did uncover a few gems over there, like Gélange and Jaminet. Like, it's all been progress.
You're right. They blew the game against Scotland, and they didn't blow this game. Yeah. They came out firing, they stayed firing, and the nuts and bolts of the team are very, very impressive. They have significant depth up front.
True.
They have a well-organised set piece. They're violent at scrum time. Cyril Bai don't sleep on him as a loose head.
Oh, yeah.
And awesome. with Antonio back in there, they have actually a really strong front row, and Mohamed Hoas can kind of move on because Antonio is 100% should be their starting tight head going forward. It's a vicious-looking front row.
True. And with Movaka not stopping scoring
tries.
Two more today, and he scored a peach against the RGs as well. He's awesome.
Like 5-6 tries in 3 games or something like that, something ridiculous.
Yeah.
No, absolutely, and Julian Marchand to come back, so they have a fabulous pack with loads and loads of depth. Even their captain Olivon wasn't
as well.
Their captain Olivon not involved this tour. Fabulous forwards, and then on the offense, just endless skills. They have pace. They can take tries from anywhere. And they have a well-organised, determined Sean Edwards defence, which is not perfect yet, but it's very, very game.
It's much more game. And they're much more balanced as well with Dante Fiku this week, as opposed to the 210s on the pitch. It was just much more sensible and more aligned with what they were doing in the Six Nations as well with the guys there. So, they're slowly but surely putting the pieces together.
When DuPont runs the offence, there's no need for a 10-12 distribution combination.
No, indeed.
It's kind of silly because Jaminet slots in the first receiver as well.
So they actually need the heft of some of those guys running hard lines in the centre, which they definitely have with Dante, who's a unit, and Fiku as well, who was game all day. It was a deserved win and a really good show for those in attendance in Paris as well. It was just great to see that stadium hopping again, and just the French bounces back. Like, I haven't seen it in quite a while, where, like, they've had it a bit in the last couple of seasons, and this team have definitely been much touted, and they are young, and Galtier's building, and that's been true for a while.
Under 20 wins with the bulk of this squad.
Exactly, so it's been coming for a wee bit, but it's not really since that 2010 team we were citing, or those mid-aughts team, when you could remember just the ball always seeming to bounce for Clerk and the big raucous atmospheres, and it was just this great side.
One of the toughest places to go in World Rugby.
100%, where it hadn't been for pretty much a decade since, but it's starting to become that again. You can see it. France are back, and Les Bleus definitely in full flow. French flair, it's an important part of the top level of the game, and it's great to see it in full pump. And New Zealand will be contritely, they were sent home. I think they only touched down earlier on. I was seeing the boys arriving, but lots to ponder and wounds to lick back in Aotearoa.
Yeah, they didn't deserve it. They were outmatched from the start, and they weren't able to rise to the physical pitch of the game, and they often count on their skills to bail them out. But that Ntamak run up the pitch was an indication that they probably can't get away with that as much as they used to against the northern sides.
Yeah.
Because they went on that sequence of years, you look at 2012, 2013, doing it to England, doing it to Ireland, where they get blown away in the physical stakes, but then their skills bring them home.
Yeah.
Now the sides they're playing against have skills as well.
Yes.
And you're not actually going to get to dominate without being up to the physical battle of the game. You're not going to be able to dominate the scoreboard that much, even with their ruthlessness, and they are still probably the most ruthless team in world rugby, just in terms of the limited opportunities they get to score. But they know that they need to do more to match the game up front. They need to be able to adjust their defense. They need to be able to generate turnovers, and they need to be able to match teams up front in the contact areas where they've been struggling in the last few weeks. If they want to win games, they cannot just rely on the skill set to bring them home. I think those days are gone. The European sides are just that bit better than they ever have been, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and France illustrating that beautifully. Great performances from all of them throughout. Woki of a coming of age performance himself, so just like Ntamak as well. Yeah, their best showing of the Galtier era. The most complete performance they put in so far, but they are still building towards that 2023 World Cup, which they're hosting.
Waiting on a trophy as well. That was their biggest achievement in blue for any of these guys. Yeah. Winning the All Blacks, and they do get one of those trophies for that they seem to get to lift a trophy for beating the All Blacks. We didn't get to lift a trophy for beating the All Blacks. Ireland are just the team bereft of trophies. I know we technically play for a trophy every time we play a team, But everyone else seems to get an awards ceremony when they win a game, and we don't.
No.
I don't get that. For France, they got to lift a big trophy. They had a podium moment, and it was like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
They won a game.
Yes. Indeed, those kinds of ongoing, perpetual ones. Yeah, we're a little late to the party. All of ours are like Millennium Shields and whatnot.
That's the England game, and not much history to it, but no, fabulous win for France. Much to think on for the All Blacks. It was a joyous watch on Saturday evening.
Absolutely great game, and then we will pivot on to Sunday, where there was only one game. It did involve our own charges.
Gone were the great close contests.
Yes, Super Saturday. Super Saturday was delivering in all things competitive and great. In be it Tier 1, Tier 2, there were just competitive matches. This was a match that, like, historically is a very very hotly contested one. But ultimately, Ireland were way too good for the Pumas this year. 53-7 it finished. Record score for Ireland over Argentina. Argentina grabbed the first score of the game, really kind of caught Ireland napping, caught up Ireland very slow on the turn and took a 7-0 lead.
Another example of that slow Irish defence, and just every time they concede a line break, they seem to concede a try, which continues to be a lingering concern.
Lingering problem, because they did create that exact player could have grabbed another, was all but through. Porter snagged him a little Carreras, and he actually injured himself in that moment, and when he went off the field early on, and then Buffelli missed a couple of kicks, his boot was askew, and then from then, like, we kind of knew, it's like, all right, well, there goes the danger then. If they can't kick threes, and if that guy's not going to create tries out of nothing for them, where do the scores come from? And ultimately that kind of rang true. They couldn't generate anything. Credit to the Irish pack, they rose to the occasion. In the early exchanges, we were trying to kind of use that pullback and get wide like we were doing to great effect against the All Blacks, but credit to Argentina, who, like, for all their faults, their defence is still really, really good, and they were shutting down that outside. They were reading it, they were getting Henshaw man and ball and kind of killing that play, freezing the wingers out ultimately. But then it became about the forwards, and like pretty much the whole pack managed to get on the board because they dominated them.
Against Japan, 9 tries scored, 8 from backs, and here against the Pumas it was 7 tries scored, all from forwards. There were some pleasing aspects to it. I mean, it did in some sense become about the penalty count from Argentina as well, just giving endless entrances to Ireland,
which you can't
and
do.
Ireland's red zone offense, which they'll be very pleased, because it was the area that they struggled with against the All Blacks.
Yes,
that was probably the one blemish on that whole game, was just how they didn't find their way over the try line in those scenarios. And in this game they did every time. Part of one knock-on call against Cian Healy after he crossed the line. Outside of that, every single time they got into the red zone, they scored.
Tig dropped the ball, but I think they ended up still.
But they never left the red zone before they'd scored again. But all of those line-out fives ended in tries. They were absolutely dominant in the contact. And as good as the Pumas' defensive hustle was, or the interplay of Ireland's forwards and the power from Ireland's forwards was way too much for them.
Too much for them. And they go very cynical, very dirty, very quickly when they're outmatched in that area. And you can see the differences in some of the players in their cards. Like Matera's one was from a clean Tig line break or a half break that he smashes through, and he's looking for an offload that could have been a Conor Murray try. One of a few backs try, and Matera's like, nope, I'm going to slap that down cynically because I'm a footballer. I know that's probably going to be a try. I'm going to kill it. It'll take the 10 minutes. That's a kind of a savvy enough yellow. Cynical, yes, but understandable in terms of the rationale behind it. He's outmatched where they're raggedy and they're going to kill that play. The other card was Lavanini, just obligatory red card again. The man is he's just criminal out there, literally criminal out there. It's wild to me that, given the disgraceful exit to the World Cup that he had, doing pretty much the same thing, he's still there doing the same thing. We're going to keep having to talk about him probably in 2 years' time, because he'll probably go with them if they stick with Ledesma as well. And it's wild stuff. If you can look at Lavanini and his record and think there's a useful player that I want to have in my team, I don't know what game you're looking at, because there's a guy to get out of your team, out of your dressing room right away, because he's a liability out there. He just kills you. He gives away cards. He gives away silly cards. And Peter O'Mahony's assessment in the immediate aftermath on the ref mic was pretty bang on, Good man, hard man. You're great. Go on, fair play to you. Oh, that's not like you, is it?
No, indeed. I mean, it's hard to argue. It was off the back of it was their best offensive sequence since that opening try. Like, they actually were putting phases together. They had a bit of momentum. Cian Healy's on his knees. and
Not
he just
in the breakdown.
he just sees red and decides to hit him for no discernible reason.
Yeah, like it's a penalty in all kinds of ways because he's in at the side off his feet
Oh,
before
no, but
he even makes head
it's just
contact.
a mad cheap shot.
Yeah.
It's just like because they have the ball, the scrummy has it in his hands.
Yeah.
You can see on the replay, Scrummy's looking away to try and find a pass because actually the Pumas for once are moving the ball pretty well here, trying to get something going. And meanwhile, Lavanini's just giving it away, giving everything away, and then they end up shipping loads and loads of tries. Very impressive from the Irish pack again, just imperious looking this autumn, physicality off the charts. But even guys like the footballing dynamic forward stocks that we have, very encouraging. You had Nick Timoney, who got a call in Belfast at 7:45 in the morning. He comes into the team, gets a jackal steal, contributes really well. Dan Sheehan comes in, looks explosive, absolutely brilliant.
Tyke Byrne into
Ryan
start when he
Baird
did
makes a 50-metre break.
Yeah, he wasn't meant to play either because he was in for Tyke Byrne because I think it was Henderson who was out early and kind of created all that hodgepodge. But Tyke Byrne went really, really well, and then Ryan Baird, awesome 50-metre break, which we know he can do. We've been seeing him do it for the last couple of years for Leinster. Very exciting.
Usain Baird,
very much so. He's one of the quickest lock I think I've ever seen in terms of just the range rangy stride on him and the way he gobbles up the ground. But a few other guys like Josh van der Fleer, who's always class, grabbed a couple of tries to get some headlines too. It was good to see. Doris put no feet wrong at all, and his try was the most satisfying try of the lot because he ran straight into, I think it was Gomez, Cadea and Matera, and he clattered into them, and it looked a wild hit that would break any man. And then courtesy of a little generous bump from Tig Furlong, that is, who was everywhere, he managed to kind of go again and get over the line, which was it was great to see because it wasn't a very technical hit from either of them. They just threw their big shoulders in it, and he bounced off, kept the feet and scored, and it was just good punishment for this Puma side. It was nice to punish them because they've, as you've been saying, they've been annoying us all year, and it's very difficult to, when you're previewing from Ireland's point of view, it's very difficult to be bullish, but we should have been bullish, and their scoreboard reflected the difference in the two sides. Ireland have improved this year, whereas no evidence that Argentina have done any of that.
No,
really.
They've certainly regressed, although it's been a tough outing for them.
But we'll make note of, I think it was their 23rd consecutive away game.
I mean, they
haven't played a home game since before the World Cup.
They were very much on the bus home for this game in large part, but it was a sensation for us. If Tyg Furlong, another incredible performance, game in the
man of the match on any other day, except Carberry, credit to him, played a nice game and got man of the match from the host broadcasters ourselves. But I for my money, it was Tyg Furlong all day.
But Peter O'Mahony, sensational, class in the air, and then Tyg Byrne and Caelan Doris cutting the sharpest lines of any of the forwards, and just allowing that interplay to work so well, and to see it unpick that Pumas defence because they weren't telegraphing carries. They were very, very powerful in the contact, but not telegraphing where the ball was going. That was very, very pleasing to see, and the offense was sensational, very, very clinical, which we haven't been in a long while. So excited.
A lot of tries this autumn, very much good momentum for Ireland.
They've got an eight game win streak now, and racked up some lovely scores. I'm pretty
sure you were saying that's the longest active one in World Rugby, which is kind of a nice little feather to have. It is still 2 years away from the World Cup, so never mind all that.
Classic Ireland time.
Indeed.
But anyway, listen, that was the games that took place last weekend. What a weekend it was.
Awesome.
But with that, we're going to move on. Yes, and with the conclusion of last weekend and the conclusion of the Autumn Nations series, we're going to just take a moment now and take a look at each of the teams that we've been kind of looking at over the course of the last season, looking sort of at, broadly speaking, all of the World Cup teams, but starting mainly with sort of the top 12 in the world, and then we'll take a look at some of the other tier 2 teams and just take stock of where they're at now that we're 2 years out from the World Cup.
Absolutely,
and we're going to start with the number one side in the world, and that is the Springboks.
That's right, the mighty Boks. They're still number one in the world, but 5 defeats in the season definitely leaves some room for improvement for them. The positives are the pack is still the most formidable forward unit in the world, possibly the most formidable one the world's ever seen, and remains to be seen, but it is a mighty beast that is too much for just about anybody at the moment. The issues are, we were highlighting them earlier, need to accrue some points quicker and just more clinically than they are currently, because they're leaving games in the balance when they shouldn't be, and they're losing a few of them based on this year's evidence because of that. But the work-ons are minor because they're still world champions and number one and the team to catch, and they're just kind of adjusting and keeping their game developing as they move forward. Don't want to get stagnant, but they still look very good.
Yeah, well, the power game is unrivaled, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, they just blow forward units away. I'm excited to see how they look against this dynamic looking Irish pack, and we will get to see that game obviously in the World Cup, but also next year. They're at the moment that performance against the English pack, despite losing the game, was astonishing. The dominance that they managed to get by the end of that game.
Sure, yeah.
I've never seen a Toji nullified like that. I've never seen Marler destroyed in a scrum like that.
Yeah,
it was dizzying how good they looked in that game away from home in Twickenham at the end of a long campaign themselves.
True.
Only not using it as an excuse, dominating.
Yeah.
But they do have some work-ons, as you say, not accruing points. Also the defence, which has been such a hallmark of this team, giving up some plays on first phase in that game. You know, they'll look at the Australia games and I think that England game primarily as examples of just questionable defence at times, and just little disconnects between Dale, Indy and Am, which they'll have to work on, because at their best it is a hallmark of this team. It generates scores for them. It doesn't give them up cheaply.
It wins Lions tours, which they managed to do this year as well. So like it's definitely. It is what they have built this unit on, and it is still a fulcrum, and it has been a little loose, or maybe teams have adjusted to it or are finding different space, but either way they'll need to tighten it up going forward. A few little kind of work-ons that have always been there, the restart is killing them sometimes.
The third set piece.
They switch off for it. They're good in all the other set pieces, but they do drop balls or drop heads or just dial out on restart plays.
The restart married with their compulsion to go for 3-pointers instead of take on tries, despite their excellent maul.
Yeah.
Like the marriage of those two failings leaves them like dominating games and just for no reward. Like 5 minutes of dominance yields a penalty. They go for 3, they kick it, they switch off on the restart, 3-3.
Yeah.
You know, knock on player ahead of the knock on offside, instant 3-pointer back. Or worse again, a side like England, when they have the energy, bullishly goes for the try line and punishes them further.
Yeah.
So that there's little game management points of concern, and definitely the restart is one of those.
On the game management is fly half an issue for them as well, just in terms of that navigating of it. Like Pollard has kicked very well, and he is their guy. Like he's got the
very
highest
well.
ceiling.
Not from the tee.
Pretty well, but he's not playing a stellar game himself. And to be honest, none of the 10s they have look like they would be able to swim in these deep waters if their pack weren't dominating the way that they are.
No,
including Pollard these days. Whereas before you would have said Pollard is a top level 10. I don't know if he's playing a top level game at the minute.
He hasn't had a great season since he's come back.
And it has been a growing concern. It was all kinds of talk about that during the lockdown period of like Super Rugby Unlocked and all of that kind of Curry Cup stuff that they're going around in. It's like, can Kerwin Bosch step up? Who can step up? Like there's a sea of 10s that aren't quite what they're looking for seemingly, and it's
kind of
at the moment it's Pollard and Yankees who are taking them to the next World Cup.
And I honestly think if it is to be that right now on form, there's a case to be made if that's your two guys, starting Elton and bringing Pollard off, because Pollard actually has been like, Elton is decent, as you say, when the pack are going forward. He'll make nice passes, he'll put together good offensive plays, but at the moment they have him coming into games and having to make clutch plays, and that's what he's worst at. He's not got great bottle. Whereas Pollard, that's probably his best strength, is his bottle. You saw actually to the tail end of that second Lions test, he really dialed in some important kicks, and he does when the money's on. You'd back Pollard and more so than you'd back Elton, and so I think they've got the balance of that a little wrong, and you saw the tail end of that game, missing that touchline conversion and then missing that restart as well.
The flip side is, though, if you're going to bring Yankees off the bench, which they are, because Pollard is their preferable starting option, like Franz Stein was already on the pitch, as I was saying. It's like, why is he kicking at all? If you have Franz Stein and Elton Yankees on the pitch, easy decision. Franz Stein takes all the kicks, easy decision, and then it's less pressure for him, much like what Finn Russell has in Racing sometimes, where you can just have the freedom to play a bit of ball if you're Elton then, and remove that clutch element from it, because he's not done it very well historically and currently, and it doesn't seem likely that he'll kind of develop that. You have a unit like Franz Stein, you can use it, but like so many quality players across the park for this team, and still even in the games where their bad habits are revealed, they've never been blown away. They've never not been blown away yet. Really, the one was the Karevi, in the Karevi kind of smashing game where they did get blown away the first game on Aussie, so the second game on Aussie soil, But by and large, they're still in the scrap very often because their forwards are just too good.
Mole tries
guys
and all
like
kinds of
Peter
things.
Detoit and like Faf de Klerk and Cheslin Colby as well to come back into that side. Still very good. Like there's so much depth in Safa rugby because there's just so many Safas all over.
I'm looking forward to seeing Afalele Fassi have a cut as well. All of that is very, very exciting. They are still a special team and still deservingly just the number one side in the world. Off the back of the number one forward pack and in a solid place going into next year, and I'll be curious to see how they kick on.
Truly. Yeah, but with that we will move on to numero dos.
The second place
in the world are the mighty All Blacks, who obviously took a couple of humblings over the last couple of weeks, but are still all class and very, very dangerous and just... enjoyed a lot of the season from them. Fozzie's off-season talk was about developing skill set and discipline. And if you were to look at that as a metric for their work-ons, they've 100% improved immeasurably in those areas. When you compare them what they were doing in the Tri-Nations versus what they're doing now, night and day, they look much more like an All Black side in terms of their intent and in terms of their style.
They found something. They found something, but they found themselves again. Yeah. They're playing like an All Black team at the moment, and I know that's kind of hard to swallow for All Black fans, and because obviously the results have gone badly the last little while, but I think you have to remember and contextualise that this team has been trending downwards since 2017, and this was the first year that it bucked that trend and became more of an All Black team. Like every time they were under pressure in recent years, they went back to a power game, and it started to really fail them. This year they went to a skills game. They played all offense. They had a difficult year in the sense that they played a lot of blowout games. They played Fiji twice. They played Tonga. They played the USA. They played a changed Wales side. Italy, exactly. Just way too many of those kinds of games. I probably imbalanced them for the tough games that they ended up having to play.
Sure.
They will be worried about what happened against the Springboks both weeks, and what happened against Ireland and what happened against France. And the reason that Foster is under pressure, just to contextualise just how dominant this team is and what the expectations are, they lost 3 games this year. They have only ever done that on 3 occasions now, so three times prior. In 1949, they lost to South Africa, Australia, and Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe. What a great win for them that was back in the 40s. On a tough tour to Africa, they shipped a couple of losses. In 1999, they lost to Australia, France, and South Africa. In 2000, the next year, they lost to Australia, South Africa, and France again. That was probably just an era where they weren't quite at the top of the game, and that's a harsh one to take, but that's where they kind of were. But this year, obviously, losing to South Africa, Ireland, and France, their first time ever losing to 2 European sides in one season. Probably an indication of how good the European sides are, as well as everything else. There are definite work-ons for this side.
100%.
And it's definitely true that the rest of the game is coming up around them, and they're probably tapering off in the sense that like the team that you constantly can't help but compare them to from 2013 through to 2015, 2016, even that era, with all of that talent. These guys
on the bench,
exactly. Dan Carter, Man Nonu, Kieran Reid, Jerome Kino, Richie McCaw. Endless names, endless quality, Prime, Whitelock, and Retallick as well. There was a special group of players, and this group of players are very special in their own right. They have sublime talent, but they're not as dominant a force as that team was, and so they have to be. They do still have skills, but probably have the best skills of any team in the world. But they do have to figure their way out of games, do the nuts and bolts, the detail in the game. They have to do a little
bit more shape for their multi-phase for sure. More balance to their back row in general. Sam Cane generated a nice deal that they ended up throwing the pick from, but they needed more of that in Dublin. They need someone like McCaw or Kino was just willing to go into the fire and emerge with the ball for them then to strike. But these are like work-ons for this next off season where they'll have a big 3-match series against Ireland, which they'll obviously be bigging up now to start their season. Very different
start to this season than last season, where they had the Islander games and that celebration at home. They know, like Ireland, end of a long season, they will go into that series as strong underdogs. But their records in recent times away in the Southern Hemisphere isn't bad. They're 3-3. They lost a series 2-1 to South Africa, then they won a series 2-1 to Australia. They don't usually get blown away even in these games. They'll come to town determined to chalk up a historic win over in New Zealand. The All Blacks will be determined not to let them do that. and it's going to make for a very, very intense start to their season.
True.
I'm looking forward to Super Rugby Aotearoa. I'm looking for other guys, particularly in the forward pack, to step up, and like Scott Barrett and Tui Pilato need to come and put pressure on Retallick and Whitelock.
Need to take those jerseys from them ultimately, because like they are the old guard really that are still there, and they looked at in the tail end of the season they looked a little bedraggled and a little weary, whereas they do still have all kinds of depth and all kinds of quality, which is why you'll never write them off. They can still take a try instantly, guys like Will Jordan, and there are guys like Caleb Clark who could come back in for last season, and just there's still so much talent that you shouldn't be panicking at all. No. But there's been improvement this year. That's where I some of the criticism that you hear from Kiwi fans talking about Foster out or talking about Robertson in, very often you'll hear that point going like, oh, it's been downhill ever since he came in 2019, and it's like, Maybe it has until this year, but it was downhill since like 2015, lads. Like you started going downhill in around that Lions tour. Like it realistically, it was the tail end of the previous campaign that resulted in that shellacking to England in the semi-final, and it was like they were still a bloody good team. To say that they were on a decline, like they're still a bloody good team. Then like their decline resulted in them, instead of winning their third World Cup on the bounce, they were semi-final exit and finishing third overall. I mean, that's the ceiling where they're at. And this season they in terms of their off-season messaging, as we were saying, skill set, discipline, those areas have 100% improved. Now it's time for a new off-season message of improving some of the more detailed aspects, and you kick on from there. Their
defense, adjusting their defense to their opponent, lots of the tight work that goes on in and around the breakdown. They need to be much better. They need to generate turnovers. They need to be able to slow their opposition down on defense. Yeah. They facilitate quick play too easy. Yeah. They kind of just let you go, and they almost respect it so much that they just want to try and defend your quick play. You need to be able to slow games down and be just a little bit wiser. That's got to be the work on for Foster. But no, there's no question that they're a better team this year than they were last year. Yeah. That team that lost to Ledesma's Pumas.
Yeah, only scored 15 points against those.
Yeah, exactly. That just wouldn't happen with this year's side. No. They wouldn't have any of it. They're not a blunt instrument anymore. They're all about their skills, to their detriment at times. But now it's about sort of ironing out those creases, not losing the skills and discipline, but adding elements to their game and structures to the game that can facilitate the skills a little more and leave them looking a little less blunt when they are physically matched. Yeah. But no, I don't think rattles need to be thrown from prams as a result of those two very, very tough games against brilliant sides in their home venues with really big crowds.
Both of them playing brilliantly.
Yeah, playing out of their skins, and yet they still hung with them, and they were absolutely knackered from a long series. So it really isn't time to press the panic button just yet. And I was sceptical of Foster this time last year. He won me over in the off-season. He won me over in the early part of this season, and I'm still with him. I still think he's the guy.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. But yeah, with that, we'll move on to third in the world rankings, which is currently England, the Rose of England. And no bad thing, considering they just beat the world champions. It kind of feels fair. I think the Wallabies were rewarded with the third spot when they beat the Springboks, and so too have England been. It's one of the favourite things that World Rugby is. If you can beat the Springboks, you jump up in the rankings, which is fair and proper. They are number one in the world for a reason. It was a tight game, but exciting times for England. They went unbeaten this November now as a result of that, and that was the game they were targeting mostly. It was unfortunate that the game against the Wallabies ended up being as flat as it was. Like, they were a little clunky themselves despite being superior, but we didn't get to see. And they probably could have used a game Wallaby scrum to prepare them for what was coming in the Springbok game as well. To be honest, it would have been helpful. But they still managed to own the result there, and it was never in doubt. You have guys to come back like Ellis Genge in that front row could add a lot of power and heft too.
Genge is going to be important. Their front row wasn't great this autumn. That obviously.
No, their whole set piece was a little clunkier than it had been.
Well, listen, Eddie Jones cleaned house.
New coaching ticket entirely.
They finished fifth in the Six Nations. It wasn't working. They were falling behind. Other teams were much more clinical than they were. Yeah. Now they've very much cleaned house in the coaching ticket. They've also added some real impetus in their backline. They've got exciting new stars.
Well, Marcus Smith has just made that easy for them by having an unbelievable season and just kicking on to new heights every week.
And here's Freddie Stewart taking that 15 jersey. Slade, who had the most minutes this year and was trusted with that 13 jersey, is repaying that trust. True. And Marchant, a jack of all trades, to chuck into the mix as well. Very, very exciting talent. the balance of it is lovely. Obviously, they still have Youngs at scrum half, who played a very fine game at the weekend. They will have to arrive at a potential
Rafi
other
Quirk
option.
scored a lovely try. Good to see him getting a cap, and he's been very good as understudy to Faf as well. Like good young talent coming through in England, as is always the case, because the club game is in good health
and still a monstrous pack. And they will that they will be a little wounded from what happened against the Boks, and it remains to be seen. They'll have a good test in the Six Nations. Those forwards against the likes of Ireland and France. And even Scotland.
Scotland give them a rattle a lot of the time.
Absolutely, So it'll be an interesting thing to watch this England side develop. But I think mostly it's exciting, it's fresh, and it's very, very talented. And that back row, like the forward pack on paper, is very good. And I expect to see, like they have been doing this Curry Underhill thing at 7 and 8. And there's so much chat that goes on, by the way, in the rugby community, that positions don't matter, and that actually, like, you're naive if you think that a number 8 should be a number 8 and a number 7 should be a number 7, or anyone can play anywhere. Like that positionless rugby is the way forward. That actually the structure of rugby in terms of how teams are organised by position, there is a balance to that, and you can tell when a team doesn't do it, or when a team veers away from that, they do miss something. And England, I'm very excited to see Sam Simmons and Dombrandt battle it out for that 8 jersey, because that's the way it should go. And Laws can play in the second row, or he can be bench impact, but it should be Curry, Underhill are your flankers, and then you need a ball carrying, busting number 8, and that's going to be Dombrandt or Simmons. And listen, on paper that balance is frighteningly good, and I think England, strong contenders again for the Six Nations and the World Cup, talent to burn, and a very good coach in Eddie Jones, and that performance against the Springboks was all kinds of encouraging, because you're right, they didn't have the set piece, they didn't have the
forward battle one at all.
They didn't have the forward battle. They looked in its infancy as a unit, the forward pack, in terms of its new coaching, the new coaching ticket as well, but the talent that they had, the tries that they scored, and just executing the game plan, doing that classic Eddie Jones's England thing of starting the game at 100 miles an hour, plodding your way to 2 tries, and using that to win the game with a clutch score later on. That was old school Eddie Jones's England, and Eddie Jones's England have been a formidable thing.
Yeah, well, ask the Wallabies about it. They've kept that record intact, and they are still motoring on, and yet 3rd in the world, probably right and proper. Although they're 5th in Six Nations, there's definitely some people who are probably aggrieved at it, but it's
all very tight, man.
It is just, it's chopping and changing every week, and it's just these teams are here to mix it, and they will have all kinds of machinations towards that World Cup in 2 years about winning it. And going forward, looking at Marcus Smith, like still have Faz, who's technically captain. You were asking, can he work as that super sub going forward and potentially ice games from off the bench? Maybe, but these are good headaches for the team to have. Just lots of quality and lots of positions, and very healthy place for English rugby right now.
100%. And we're going to look at our own men, our men from Ireland, who are sitting in 4th of the world at the moment. 3 from 3 in November again for this exciting new look Ireland team. 8 straight wins. For the men in green.
Longest active win streak in the game right now, which is very impressive. Nice little feather in the cap.
Our talk about them has been somewhat outdated, in the sense that we were rating them as not having much of an offense and not being able to make their forward dominance count. But since their last defeat, obviously they opened the Six Nations with a rough game against Wales away, then a really rough game at home against France, where they dominated and painfully managed to give up the game and scored 13 points, but actually France just gave them a cheap 7. Their offence, for all of its territory and possession, had nothing, and that was kind of peak blunt Ireland, after having had such a wretched autumn series as well. But since that game, a 13-15 home defeat to France, they've gone on that 8-game win streak, and this is the score that they've registered: 27 points scored against Scotland, 48 points scored against Italy, 32 points scored against England, 39 points scored against Japan, 71 points scored against the USA, 60 points scored against Japan, 29 points against New Zealand, 53 points scored against Argentina. They have not failed to score more than 20 points, and actually they've not failed to score more than 25 points in that 8 straight wins.
Awesome.
Wow,
that's awesome stuff.
Very, very impressive. Forward pack look elite. The stocks there look incredible. The chat out of them is much more healthy than it used to be back when they were doing that stuff. They're talking about improvement. They do have areas that they can improve. 100%. There are defensive concerns. There are speed related concerns.
There are still speed related
but
concerns.
I don't know if anyone else in the world has a forward pack quite like ours. I mean, the Boks have their very own way of dominating games up front, but like, it tends to be what's coming, try and stop it. But with Ireland and this ball playing forward
deception.
pack, you don't know what's coming.
Yeah, exactly, which has been lovely to watch, and it's always been something that Ireland have been elite at. It's just footballing flanker size guys, particularly flankers. Like the Leinster Academy just produces crazy stocks in the back row, and then so too the emerging talent from like Munster and Ulster is very often back row as well. There's always been just that physique of being a stocky 6 foot odd kind of really tough lad who also played GAA growing up, so has ball skills. So there's like a lot of that got around of just footballing forwards, and we were concerned about the backs. There was all kinds of chat about second distributor, this and that, like in terms of when the offense was failing. But the answer is not a second distributor. It's that all the forwards are distributing, and I'm kind of glad. Like CJ was a great servant to Irish rugby. I loved him at number 6. I think he was a real problem when he was at number 8 for us, because he's the antithesis to that. And then number 8 is like not only for this new ball playing kind of pack where everyone's a ball player, but if you're in a more stock back line like you're talking about with England, where you have your number 7, your number this, like the number 8 has to be a baller, because like not just like at the base of the scrum, it's a footballing skill to trap the ball, to pick it up, to evade a scrum half and get a pass away, all vital skills for a number 8. And for many years we were just kind of very rudimentary in our carry off that, and it was just way too predictable. And now with this kind of offense, this trust that we've had, we kind of found a healthy middle ground between unstructured play and structured play, somewhere between where Joe Schmidt was taking them and the kind of free-for-all Barbarians style. There's good shape and structures, and then there's a willingness to play within that and a freedom to play within that. And you see guys like Tyg Furlong thriving in a system like that, because he's always been a baller, and it's like for a few years all he was doing was clearing rucks under the Joe Schmidt era and not really getting to show that, whereas now you can see the dividends.
The instincts are being and there is a lovely shape to what they're doing. There's probably a couple of notes that I would make just from a critical point of view. I think it still doesn't work as well without Sexton.
True.
And even though they managed to score a million tries against those Pumas at the weekend,
managed to make Carberry man of the match. We didn't reach the outside.
Yeah, the midfield offense was getting stuck in a way that it doesn't when Sexton is there. And then the other thing that I'd say, and it sounds harsh because he obviously is a legend of the team and is coming up on 100 caps, so it feels very, very harsh to axe him, but it's not working with Conor Murray either. This ballerific Irish offense needs a quick scrum half.
It does.
And Conor Murray can't deliver that game at the moment. I'm pretty confident in saying when he tries it goes wrong.
Yeah, well, he had that knock on in that Argentina game that was very discouraging, where he did try and up the tempo and then dropped it.
You've seen it one too many times now. I don't think he can really deliver that game, and things improved when young Casey came on markedly.
By clearing rucks in fewer than 5 seconds,
But if Sexton stays healthy and he's partnered with Gibson Park, it's a very promising team, and they're going to go into next year hungry to try and claim a famous Six Nations win as were the other
five
teams.
Other teams.
Four other teams.
Four other teams, sorry, Ireland in a healthy spot themselves, bit of momentum to carry forward, bloody good team too, and just another one in that top echelons of the game that are just purring into gear slowly but surely, and it just tees up this World Cup hunt very, very well when you have teams like that. And we'll move on to number 5, which is France, who are hosting the World Cup, because they have machinations too about winning the thing, and they took a massive step forward this autumn with that massive result in Paris against the All Blacks. It hadn't been done in 13 years or something since they'd beaten them, and they beat them out the gate. 15-point win. Entomac with a glorious showing, Wokey with a coming of age display at lock, Dupont all class as ever, Fiku still all class, guys like Pinot, danger, Villiers, danger, Chamonix at fullback, a find from this summer when they took kind of a second string or an alternate side out to Australia. Found that guy. He'd only played Pro D footy at that point, hadn't played a top Couture's match, but was top scorer in the Pro D, and now he's straight into that 15 jersey and saying like, I might have this for the next 5 years, thanks very much.
Indeed. Oh no, it's very, very promising from France. I mean, during the Six Nations earlier in the year, they weren't exiting particularly well. They were imbalanced. They were offensively dazzling at times, but imbalanced, and they had a solid defense, but they were doing too much defending, and it was costing them ultimately in the big moments in games. Now they have a much more balanced looking team. They can work their way down the field effectively. They play smarter rugby. Their game at the breakdown. They're tenacious on D with that Sean Edwards back to defence, and they're dazzling on offence as well. They actually have come up with clever game plans on offence as well. They flood certain channels. They isolate weaknesses. They all dial it in. They're smart footballers. Brilliant offense, brilliant defense, brilliant defense. Kicking game constantly improving. Set piece really solid. along with the forward pack. The question mark with France, as we all know, is, it's consistency. Can they deliver the performance that we know they're capable of consistently, or are they going to have games where they switch off or lose confidence or do silly things? And is that going to cost them next year? Next year, the real test. I mean, they've proved they have the potential to be World Cup winners in terms of their stocks and their smarts. But are they going to be able to deliver on that?
It's a good little metric, is the Six Nations, because in all all likelihood it'll take 4 wins, maybe 5, to win it, but it'll take at least 4 wins to win the tournament, probably. You'd be doing very well other than that. And 4 wins out of 5 is a tough old ask for any team, to be honest, given the calibre of opposition. But it is a good litmus test for the World Cup, because the World Cup will be 7 games if you're to win the World Cup at home. And that'll involve 7 blip-free games, unless you have your blip on day one, like the Springboks tactically, and then manage to get through or whatever. But it's a tough old thing to do, and it's definitely something that is unproven in this French side. Now, they have progressed thoroughly over the last few years. They are a young side. As we were citing, they won Europe this year, just gone. Toulouse are champions of Europe, as well as Top Couture's champions, and the spine of the team is Toulouse, and even guys like Flamand, who they found from Toulouse, awesome unit, Movaka too. So the core of the team has won some silverware, some top level stuff. It needs to be replicated in France. They need to be able to, with more than one off game against England or something, or against the All Blacks, they need to string some performances together and get some consistency. But beyond that, the sky's the limit, because they do have such depth, as they always had. Even in the decade when they were at sea, they had undeniable talent and massive amounts of it, but they're slowly but surely putting the pieces together to be a very good force in world rugby going forward. No question. Another positive story this year is the 6th place team in the Wallabies. Granted, it finished on a sour note with the first winless European tour for the Wallabies in 45 years, but as it was with the All Blacks breaking such records against European teams, losing twice for the first time ever, this is a consequence of the European teams being better than they ever were. Yes, and partly because they brought a very changed hodgepodge side. They slowly found their feet. They gave their best and most cohesive performance in the last game, because they were pretty much a brand new team in this autumn, despite some great momentum they were carrying in from the Rugby Championship. The whole backline was different. They had European guys, and the locks were different. It was a kind of very changed team that they brought. Good minutes for a lot of guys in the mid-cycle in terms of doing that. It's a risk to do that, obviously, chopping and changing, but you think the French tour that they were very lucky to escape with, but is a famous win. That was Lolosio kicking with the winning game in terms of his as a young 10. Then in comes Quade Cooper to guide their way through the Rugby Championship very, very well, post Bledisloe. And then for the remainder of the tour, you had James O'Connor, who was the incumbent last year. It didn't go as well for him, but he played his best game again in that last game, and same with guys like Curtly Veal back in the fold. A lot of really good work done this year by Rennie. 2 wins against the world champion Springboks were the pinnacle of it. They were the best results of the season for sure, and showed what they can be about when they have guys like Karevi and Corabetti and their whole stocks about them. They're still dangerous, bloody dangerous. There's a wonderful balance to this team. They're as balanced as they've ever been. Some defensive frailties here or there. They can give up cheap tries at times. True. But actually, for the most part, they've stayed pretty well connected on defence. Ikitau has had a very fine year from 13. Paisami, again, is a bone cruncher on defence. But Karevi, obviously, is that game-breaking talent that they have that makes the offence gel. And Corabetti. And they're missing him too. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Corabetti as well, yeah. So they're missing those 2 explosive players. Kellaway, obviously, with the breakthrough season, scoring 1 million tries, but they've well-designed attacking plays. They've also got excellent attacking instincts. They can take many different types of tries, so the offense is really as healthy as it's ever been, as you'd always know with Wallaby teams. The defense is solid. It's not perfect, but it's solid. They've got a guy in Michael Hooper who generates all kinds of turnovers for them. Valentini stepping up front. The pack has come most improved so much. It's the stocks in the pack, because you had guys like Samu coming off the bench and doing really good work as well. Leota coming in as well, doing really good work. Valentini, great find this year. Swinton working his way back in. Gone are the days of Ned Hannigan coming off the bench for the last quarter, and I'm just looking at this going how are they ever going to win this game if that guy's coming off the bench at this juncture? And it's they aren't. It was the answer very often. But their stocks have improved in Europe. They've brought guys like Skelton back into the fold in the lock, as well as Arnold, and they have those stocks of Philip and Swain to go back to, who outperformed the guys who came in they did, but it's about World Cup assets that they're looking at. And then the other macro from the pack is the scrum. It's not just the fact that Tupou and Alatoa are awesome units, particularly Tupou, which is a big factor, but their whole scrum has got better. Like even when James Slipper was forced into tight head, he was scrummaging better than he was 5 years ago. Really good coaching from Petri Duplessis as their scrum coach, and he's done great work. Like they found obviously guys like Angus Bell has been a really good breakthrough at loosehead for them this year as well, but really good stocks and really good technique. They look much more game for tier 1 scrummaging than probably they ever have in the pro era. They've very often been a team with a lot of razzle dazzle and struggling at scrum time. This team looks slightly different in that regard, so yeah, they're building nicely towards the World Cup.
Yeah, no, totally. I think it's a successful season. I think their team is really balanced. I don't think they should be too conscious of the
European tour and the disappointment to tail end, or the Bledisloe series, which is also a kick in the nuts when that happens. But they've had good, streaks in the season of good and bad.
No, the Bledisloe was a rough start with Lolosio at 10, and they were figuring themselves out. I think in terms of targets for next season, obviously they'll want to rectify that. I mean, they need
win a game in that Bledisloe series.
They just need to be competitive in that series. It's not good enough that they're not. They start with, I think, a tour. Wales are coming to town to tour them, I believe. That's going to be fun to see. So yeah, that's an awesome start to their season, and I'm very, very excited to see them kick on. I think Rennie is a smart guy. I think they're doing a good job. I think we highlighted the issues with discipline that they sometimes have earlier in the show. That needs to be rectified.
Learn the laws. That's my growing gripe with Wallabies, both players, coaches and commentators. Just learn the damn laws and stop muddying the waters of game coverage by calling things controversial that aren't controversial. No, just cite the law and be grand. But beyond that, the team is looking in fine fettle and moving forward. And I suppose we'll move on then to another team that has made good strides this year. Sitting just below them in the world rankings are Scotland, and awesome autumn campaign to finish up their year, but also some positives. Like it's been weird, some positives in more ways than one. They missed out on the summer tour because COVID, which was a shame for them. They were going to play, I think, Georgia and a few others as well, but despite that, they bookended their Six Nations with away wins in Paris and Twickenham, which are just big bogey kind of fixtures for this Scotland team that they managed to edge. Particularly the Parisian one was in a tight contest at the death, which was a bad habit they had of losing those kinds of games, and they've remedied that and kicked on. And then this autumn they've just been clutch for days, blown away by the Springboks, who were world champions, which is a shame, but they were competitive in that game for large periods too. And then beyond that, managed to see off Japan, put in a really good showing on their last week as well.
And beating the Wallabies, of course, as well. Another tight game that they came out the right side of. They're a fabulous team to watch, Scotland at their best. What will worry them is the two games that were the roughest for them this year. They had 3 losses on the year. One was that great game against Wales, which played out as a shootout, and Scotland kind of outplayed Wales, and a little bit of poor game management here and there cost them that game. But the 2 games that were rough for them were against Ireland and the Springboks, and it's that power game, that forward-oriented power game that they struggle with.
True.
And who do they have in their World Cup pool in 2 years' time? It's Ireland and the Springboks.
Yes, that is a concern.
That's a very, very tough one for them. Obviously, for Scotland, they're in a place now when you're winning at Twickenham, you're winning in Paris. You have no interest in not qualifying from your pool. That is a failure, regardless of who's in your pool. That is a failure, and they know that. And they're paying for that Japan defeat now with this horrific World Cup draw.
True.
But that's the job in 2 years. That's the job that Gregor Townsend has, is to scheme up a way that this Scotland team can match it and win those games against those sides. And we saw in glimpses. They do have to be brave. They have to lean into the Finn Russell, Ali Price, speed access, their wonderful set piece designs, and maintain
the strike moves are still things of beauty, and they have them against even top level sides. They can string together lovely tries on first phase, and
exactly,
which is great.
Teams like Ireland and the Springboks can be caught being slow to score themselves when they're dominating games. Scotland, when they're on top, can be quick to score. That's probably their recipe for success, but it is a 2-year project for them of trying to get ready for that World Cup pool, but also at the same time, they'll feel like they're ready to claim some serious scalps and to actually claim some silverware. They were close this year.
They need a triple crown even, or a Six Nations ideally, but they need something to build on, because they are, for my money, the best Scotland side probably ever, but certainly of the pro era. Like it's just the best, most rounded Scotland side you'll ever see. Like their centres are a good balance of offensively incisive and very robust defensively. Harris had a great autumn and not letting much by him at all. Their wingers are danger and they have depth there, and Stewie Hogg still playing well, Finn Russell a world beater. Their pack can mix it. They have a lot of depth to rotate it, but it's when they get into that forward oriented game more than their back oriented game that they get outmatched by some of the packs at the top level. Some minor adjustments going forward. They probably do need to try and claim some silverware at some point in between now and the World Cup. A Triple Crown would be great because it would demonstrate an ability to beat Ireland, specifically Ireland, who have become a bogey team for them and are the ones they will be facing.
They're heading to Dublin next year as well, which as everyone has found out this autumn is no easy feat.
It's true.
It doesn't get any easier for the Scots, but they are a class team and they will mix it in the Six Nations next year. And then we move on to the Six Nations champions sitting in lowly 8th in the world rankings. Ranked 5th of the Six Nations teams at the moment. Wales.
Well, you can't ship 50 at home and hope to hold on to your position with the guys bunched as tight as they are at the top. That's always going to give you a pounding.
We've admired lots about this Welsh team. I admire how quickly they take tries. I admire their offensive instincts. I think they have they have a wonderful eye for a try or for a score. They take them from anywhere. They take intercepts. They take quick taps. They take crossfield kicks. They're constantly dialed into where the try is on any given play, and it has helped them win games where they are comprehensively outmatched fabulously. And they have some really, really wonderful players in the back line. I really enjoy Dan Biggar, watching him operate. Liam Williams, obviously class. Reece Salmon and Josh Adams, top of the stocks when it comes to wingers. But you know, it's one thing to be great at winning games when you're physically outmatched, but they're physically outmatched way too often. They're physically outmatched every week. They were physically outmatched against Fiji. They were physically outmatched against the Wallabies. Physically outmatched in nearly every game in the Six Nations as well. Like
the Pumas in that 2-match series.
The Pumas, like their pack is brittle and getting beat up, and Alan Wynne-Jones is not going to be around for the Six Nations. Adam Beard hasn't kicked on, or certainly didn't this autumn the way you'd hope that he would. Guys like Will Rowlands look to him as the answer.
I think he's not the answer. Actually, said Davies did better in that most recent game. But you're right in saying that the pack are too often dominated. They did find guys like Basham this November who could be a white hope. And when you look at the team
Alice
that was
Jenkins as well.
The team that was taking the field this autumn versus the team that was winning the Six Nations is a completely different team. Like you had George North in the centre in the Six Nations. He's been out ever since. There's a lot of chopping and changing that's gone, and there are guys to return to the fold for them. But you're right in saying that the pack is the main concern. Wynne-Jones still a quality scrummager and kind of wily as well.
Even Wynne-Jones loses a lot of battles.
They don't have the heft to kind of back him up either as well. Like he can wily his way to a few kind of free kicks or penalties on the engage, but ultimately if they end up locking down and driving, they'll lose against a lot of these top level packs. They certainly don't have a guy like Tupou or Furlong who's come through like one of these massive unit front row superstars like that haven't developed stuff like that. There is still the ongoing concern that their club game is a bit of a basket case, and it's tough. It was always a kind of a weird thing for us, like kind of very much we admire them looking at Ireland, because traditionally, like, we'd be Leinster fans going like, geez, we're the best team in Europe this year. How can Ireland be as rudderless as they are when Leinster are playing great footy? And then conversely, you look over at Wales and you're like, geez, the Ospreys are awful this year. The Scarlets are dreadful. There's no quality in Welsh rugby at the minute at all, and yet they pull on the red jersey and seemingly play above each other. It's a good instinct to have to feed up to that national jersey.
And there is quality, but I'm a little worried about them defensively and up front, and as creditable as their capacity to hang with teams is, I wonder how sustainable it is as well.
Well, certainly if you're talking again about a World Cup victory, which is what all of these teams were down as far as 8, but all of them will have a mind to go and win the World Cup. That, as we were saying, involves winning at the very least 6 games, at most 7 on the bounce, which it's tough to do that when you're getting outmatched in the forward pack every week. Like that's probably impossible to do that. Even for the All Blacks, who are great at that, as we saw recently, like back to back, you get dominated up front. It's very, very difficult to get yourself back into the game. So Wales have work-ons to do, probably some more talented blood. but they are still Six Nations champions. It's so classic. They'll go in completely written off
It's
again,
true.
despite they snuck their way to back-to-back wins by hook or by crook to end their November and end 2021 with a cheeky bit of momentum that goes under the radar.
Find a way to get a dub. They do that like no other team.
It's
Find
true.
a way to get the dub.
Never write off the Welsh.
It's true.
Especially if you're Irish, because they'll beat us then. Like,
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
the worst habit we can have.
100%. But that does wrap up the top 8, the main 8 sides in the world, the real tier 1, I suppose, at the moment.
Yeah.
And there's a group of other sides that could and are looking to make that step up. None more so than the 9th place side, the Pumas, who have, for my money, dropped out of that top tier this year.
It was an annus horribilis. Their one good showing was beating that Welsh side. That was certainly shorn of Lions and shorn of a fair few other Six Nations starters. It was basically a Wales A that they did comfortably beat. Yeah. But their campaign started with a sketchy win in Romania that was so dodge. And since then they shipped with massive losses in all of their rugby championship games. Did manage to beat Italy in semi impressive style in autumn, but got blown away by Ireland, playing a very negative.
Managed to flatter the scoreline against France by being given a couple of cheap tries.
That's
but
true.
Beyond that,
yes, they were more in the mix with France than they really deserved to be at all.
They weren't in the mix really at all. They were handed a couple of cheap tries and then nevertheless only managed to generate 6 additional points. I have sympathy for them. I think that obviously their performances this year is not a reflection of the state of the game in Argentina. The state of the game is pretty healthy. There's professional leagues developing. There's obviously frustration around the Jaguares, the homeless Jaguares. Who are
the homeless Pumas, as we were saying. They haven't played a home game since before the World Cup. They've been on the road.
Exactly.
Which is a pinch of salt that you will caveat their performances
100%.
with.
How would Ireland be if they had not played in the Aviva once in 2 years and you were judging them off those performances? A downside worse than they are now.
Yes.
No doubt about it. But I think the game in Argentina is very healthy, for the record. I think they've developed
they're providing loads of talent for Italy to plunder as well, surplus talent.
They're
adding
a second team to the SLAR competition. Excellent. They have endless stocks of pacey offensive talent coming out of their country. And the problem for them at the moment is that their national side isn't reflecting it. And part of it has to do with all of those caveats, the away form, the really long, tense, painful travel that the team has gone under. And then the other problem is that they're also just not doing the right things. That this current the Ledesma approach to the game that's going on is madness. They are playing a really ugly game. When things go wrong, they get uglier. They don't attack particularly. They have some talent, and you could see even just taking that try last week that they are trying to develop a little more offense. So there is that benefit.
Still there. They showed that against Italy. It was all instinct tries against Italy, but Matera will throw a flat pass off the left hand. No bother, good footballing skills from a forward. They just have no shape to kind of put those guys into that kind of position.
Doesn't seem like that's their point of focus. They want to be. Ledesma wants them to be defensive, set piece powerhouses. Kick heavy powerhouses, and they are not fit to play that game. They are much better playing a skills based offensive game plan. And the defeat to Ireland in the weekend just gone, and the defeats to the Boks in the Rugby Championship should have woken him up to that reality that this is not the way for the Pumas to play long term. He has one on the win column for it, which was that win over the All Blacks in the Tri-Nations in 2020, where they did just kick and defend for the whole game and it worked. Sanchez under penalty advantage tried to chip and chase, that worked, and that was their one try, and other than that they just defended and got jackal steals and kicked kicks. That's fine. It hasn't worked now in a million reps the other way. It's a bit of a nonsense. They need to develop an offense. They don't look anything like the Pumas that you would know and love.
The ones from 2015 that were scything through with all those sexy wide tries. It feels a long time ago. Credit to somebody like Gomez Cadea, looks a fine tight head, was doing damage in Paris. Their set piece is fine, dominant sometimes, more than enough to mix it if they had any plan to use the ball at all.
That's your baseline. That's not your game plan. It's your baseline. And that's what Ledesma is missing at the moment. Interestingly, there's a lot of calls for him to go from Argentina at the moment. His contract was up at the end of the year, and he took a question on it after the match in Dublin, and he had the gumption to bristle at the question. how can you bristle at the question? Of course you're getting the question. This has been an awful year.
Yes. Your team look awful.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But he goes and says, I don't have to be talking to my contact. I can tell you that it has objectives which were met.
Right.
And that means that that means that it has objectives which are met, which means that his contract should be automatically renewed by those objectives to last him through to the World Cup in 2023. Interestingly, according to other reporting, those objectives were 2 wins over Tier 1 opposition, which they got by beating a changed Wales side and Italy, who are technically a Tier 1 opponent.
Go way out of that.
So that was it. First of all, a side that's just beaten the All Blacks, that has been to World Cup semi-finals, that has as much talent as Argentina, having the gumption to put as a baseline in your contract 2 wins over Tier 1 opposition. What on earth is that? And secondly, you call that meeting 2 wins against Tier 1 opposition? It was they were hammered in every game they played against true Tier 1 teams. Yes. Hammered.
And Tier 1 level games, they were beaten out the door every single time.
It's absolutely Scooby-Doobious. And I just want to mention as well that Horkade, the man they ousted who got them to that semi-final,
legend.
He's been doing performance director work in South America and watching Chile and Uruguay explode into the World Cup and doing fabulous things. Then he goes off and does a bit of side work in Spain ahead of November and transforms them from an ugly team into a very pretty effective looking team. Yes. Like, he has an absolute Midas touch, and they should really consider going back to him, because I don't know why they got rid of him. Obviously it was getting a little bit stagnant. They weren't winning as readily as they had done in the past. But I feel like he could have fixed it if he'd given him a bit more time.
Indeed, well, certainly. Well, Ledesma came in just before that World Cup, and he fixed their scrum, which was a basket case by the end. That was the first thing he did, and he did it well. They went to the World Cup with an effective scrum and very little else.
Keep him on as scrum coach.
Keep him on as scrum coach makes all the sense in the world, but they are way too one-dimensional at the minute to even think about escaping their group at the minute in the World Cup if they're to carry on in this trajectory. Caveat is they are always at their worst 2 years out from a World Cup. Historically, that's true too. They still have oodles of talent and good attacking instincts. The culture in the team is thoroughly wrong. They defend way too often. They spent they played all that rugby championship. They spent at least half the game, more often more like 60 minutes of those games defending
their own goal line,
and then they ended up running out of steam, and then you saw Ireland in the tail end just pumping them by the end, because you can't do that. It's not sustainable within an 80 minutes to defend for that ratio. It's certainly not sustainable in a season to defend that long, and they're doing themselves no favours by doing it. They still have some great units in the pack. They have a culture that is
plenty of talent,
a little bit loose with the discipline, which is born of the pressure they're inviting on themselves as much as anything else.
They probably need to clean house a little in the back row. Like, some of these guys, like Kramer is a fine unit, but I don't rate his temperament. I think he's another Lavanini, and obviously Lavanini is a present and current Lavanini that should go.
He should have been gone quite a while ago. But that, this is the thing. I think Ledesma looks at Lavanini and sees a good hard man who may ship a few penalties or cards, but he's so physical that you love him anyway, which is just a backwards, ridiculous outlook on the game.
They could find a really useful from one of the domestic leagues or one of the domestic teams. Some of the talent that comes out of Argentina is absolutely sublime. I guarantee you there's a more useful operator in there that could be mined and selected. Quesada, by the way, the Jaguares coach, another potential shout for another coaching option. As much as Ledesma thinks his contract is triggered through to 2023, nothing has been decided by the Argentinian Rugby Union yet, and they need to give serious consideration.
Food for thought, because they are backs. Well,
at the very least, add a backs coach. At the very, very least.
So work-ons for sure for Argentina. But that brings us on to Japan. Next up on the rankings. Everyone loves Japan, but it was definitely a rough 2021 for the Brave Blossoms. Their only win was a narrow one in the last minute against Portugal, and Portugal very nearly managed to nick a famous win themselves in that particular game. But they did put in their best showing of the year, probably in that Scotland game. They were decent against the Wallabies as well, but they were more in that Scotland game and away from home. But it's been a transitionary kind of period for the team. They have new look kind of backline, like I know that 13 was it Nakano only got his first cap against Portugal, second cap just then, so there's kind of a few fresh faces around there, but the halfbacks look good. They were slowly discovering a tempo that suits them a bit more in that Scotland game and throughout the course of that Autumn Nation series. They're still building pretty nicely. They still have a fair few good units, particularly in the back row in the pack. They will have to work on tightening things up. Their defence is not as proactive as it needs to be at the top level to shut them down. Similarly, their offensive tempo, slowly but surely building the right one, but they need to discover how best to attack with this new look team. They don't have Fukuoka and Matsushima either way.
Prior to that fabulous Jamie Joseph team that did so well in 2019, where they just found the edge and that was enough.
Yeah.
Under Eddie Jones, they were actually a more smart kind of technical team that struck off set piece quite a bit, and they kind of need to rediscover some of that.
They do.
But they're in a fine place. They're still wonderful ballers, and if any tier 1 side takes them on and doesn't bring their A game, Japan will absolutely give them a proper rattle, especially if it's in their own home ground, as we saw against Australia earlier in the year as well. But they make it to tier 1, and all of the tier 1 sides above them have gone up another level in terms of physicality, in terms they've taken the lessons that Japan taught them and got their big units playing similar ferocious attacking rugby and scoring similar tries with offloads and everything else. Only the size advantage is still so stark that they are probably up against it coming into the next couple of years. We're always rooting for them, but
it's true. I feel they're a little hard done by to be behind the Pumas, to be honest, because I think despite the winless season, they showed a little bit more this season.
I think the Pumas are well placed because of the factor that they've just been away from home the whole time. They've been battered and bruised, and they haven't been able to give as good an account of themselves because of that.
That's true.
Like, they still have a boatloads of talent, the Pumas.
That's definitely true.
That's probably why I would.
But from Japan's point of view, the top league is growing in stature and in reputation. There are still more marquee signings coming from Super Rugby over there every year as well. So the standard is going up and being driven. You have guys like Yu Tamura, who was 10 at the last thing. He's coming off the bench now because they have found another really good unit in name escapes me right now, but Matsuda, who has been kicking beautifully for them at 10. So like they are developing players, and they are homegrown players. You have guys like Tatafu off the bench, serious impact too. Like they're not going anywhere. They're worth their place in tier 1 for sure. And they still have some progress to do, but they're well coached, they're well drilled, they're disciplined. It was a poor year for them, but it is a weird year in COVID.
They'll rebound. They'll come to the World Cup.
They still have 2
shape.
years. They can mine some momentum for themselves between now and then.
No question. Also going to take a look at the 11th place side in the world, and that is Fiji.
Everyone's second favourite team, apart from Fijian.
Vern Cotter's men making some strides, getting better in areas. It didn't really fall for them in 2021.
Not particularly.
They'll reflect on that Wales game with bitterness. Like that was really, really one that got away.
Well, Ronnie Sow, you shouldn't do that. Same thing we were talking about the Wallabies. Just don't do that.
Like, major complaints from them. No, it was just frustrating that they were so much better than Wales in that game and couldn't ultimately see it home.
True.
That'll annoy them. But
the Georgia game might annoy them as well, because they had a chance.
The Georgia
to
game
win
will
it.
really annoy them.
They had a chance to win it at the death, but like if they reflect honestly, they were blessed to have that thing, because they were dominated a lot by the Lelos in that.
And they showed a little something in Spain the first week as well, that like. Now granted, Vern Cotter wasn't in town, he was only on Zoom, and maybe that's a part of it. Like there's the holiday element that you can see Fijian sides have, where the big game in Cardiff under the lights, we'll show up and we'll be ourselves, but then the other games that are kind of in the crappy venues that haven't got the big crowds, that are being live streamed, we're just going to dial out a little bit and knock on balls and not bring the same intensity. That's obviously a problem. Like obviously their set piece had been coming on leaps and bounds, and then got destroyed by Georgia last weekend, and that is a concern. Georgians are good, but that is a concern, no doubt about it. But they've plenty of talent. I think they are well coached. I think the defense is getting better. I think the offense is having good structure to it. Lamani and Volavala will have to take learnings from last weekend, because they weren't good enough.
Vern Cotter, but also Bottia and Radradra to come back in as well, who weren't available for this particular campaign, as well as like Naya Kalevu looking awesome, world beater at 13-2. So there's just too much talent to ever write Fiji off,
question.
The talent and coaching that is Vern Cotter will get them whipped into shape. I'm confident they'll arrive at the next World Cup with a point to prove, and anyone facing them will be up against it, because you can never write off Fiji. They are like a handful at the very least, and very often more than that. They can dominate you. They have serious talent all over the back line, and some pedigree at World Cups. It's just whether they can iron out some of the creases that did get unfolded in this autumn series. You can see some of the bad habits re-emerge again that need to be ironed out.
Your key work-ons are set piece with a specific focus on maul defense.
Yes.
Vitally important. A lot of tier 2 teams struggle in that area, but Fiji do particularly.
Yes. General multi-phase defense discipline.
Discipline
is a key thing.
Discipline.
It killed them against the All Blacks as well. They were bringing really good line speed off the line, but very often getting caught offside or getting caught on high tackles that are just
and when you
tries.
Have the physicality that they have, and you know that you can trust that you're not going to get shocked in a contact. There isn't really a need to go shooting like they do, to jump offside, to go high in a tackle.
Yeah.
They just need to be a little more technical, but they do have all the skills and all the talent, and I do expect them to be thoroughly game come World Cup time in that spicy pool with Wales and Australia.
And it was the same last time when they were in their pool. Any game with Fiji versus anyone is always a class game. They are still just box office in that regard. It's just, how can you not like watching Fiji? Even when they're dialed out, you can just see some madness then. It's like when they're dialed in, you see some absolute magic.
No question. We're also going to look at the 12th ranked team in the world, my second favourite team, my men, my heroes, the Georgians.
Yes.
I'm very, very pleased with them this year.
Impressed.
I think they get absolute gold star.
Might be most improved team since the World Cup.
Of the 12 we've just discussed, I think they are. I mean, you can look at obviously Portugal and Chile where they were coming from. But Georgia very, very much improved. You take a look at the World Cup, take a look at the All Nations Cup.
Recent, you can gauge it by games against Fiji. Like in the World Cup, they were blown away by Fiji. In the Autumn Nations Cup, they were blown away by Fiji. Last week, they dominated Fiji, and through their own poor habits, which they still have some, didn't manage to win the game. They only scored 15 points, which Fiji scored as well. Draw, but still a marked sign of improvement over the last. And we've seen it even in the Rugby Europe. They've been expanding their game. Nini Ashvili at 15 is an absolute diamond of a player.
19 years old he is. I'm excited to see 21-year-old Nini Ashvili rock up to the World Cup. 24-year-old Tato as well. He's still just 22. They have a lot of young, really talented players. Aprasidza to come back into that team. Talented backs.
Plying their trade in the top couture as well as the back. There's still back row talent like Jalagonia and Jergadza and all of these guys who are awesome and are justifiably in top couture's teams. But now you have
Saganadze as well.
Awesome. Saganadze's been awesome all year. But now you have some backline players who are getting recognition too and starting to string it together. They also are varying their line out. That was a thing that was so exposed in the Autumn Nations Cup last year, was their tendency to just kind of lethargically jump at two and set up a maul and get driven into touch by the tier 1 sides. Now they're varying it, going long, going short.
They're sometimes going off the top and whipping it out to the back line. They're going for shortened lineouts and putting Beka Gorgadze in the midfield. They're mixing it up. They look well coached. Levan Maisashvili, who obviously so delighted that he came through his episode with COVID, but he is doing a wonderful job, and this team is much more rounded than it ever has been. And last weekend, really excitingly, with Gogachashvili and Beka Gigishvili, those were the two props they went for this weekend, and they dominated the Fijians up front. That is very, very exciting because their scrum hasn't quite been what it once was in recent times.
And traditionally is their game.
If they can get that back, if they can get that ferocious scrummaging power and marry it with what they're developing in the back line with young halfbacks, with a guy like Sharakadze who's just come on leaps and bounds, and every touch a good one from him these days. Fabulous looking player. Very, very exciting. And even a guy on the wing like Tabut Sadza who can take a try is night and day different to what they used to have.
And what they brought to the World Cup, as well as the proactive defence. They're starting to use their physicality on the defensive end as well as on the carry. Just lots of marked improvements in the Georgian game, and I'm excited to see them going forward because they gave the French a right old rattle. It was only the discipline that let them down in terms of that game getting away from them, but they're, in terms of the physicality, they're right there with the tier 1 sides in terms of being game for that. And it's just polish then the rest of it. I think they're well worthy of their place up and as high as 12th in the rankings, and in the coming years that could even be a different story. They could keep climbing because they are a team on the up at the minute.
And a country that thoroughly does love the game.
100%.
Plenty of talent in it. We're also going to just take a look now at the rest of the teams, kind of in that World Cup conversation, who we've been keeping an eye on thoroughly in tier 2, of course, at this juncture. But just the sort of stories of the year. Obviously, next behind Georgia, you have Samoa and Italy. Samoa and Tonga, particularly Tonga, are down to 16th at the moment. It was another stopgap year for them. Samoa did their business in their 2 games against Tonga. They got into the World Cup, and now they can relax. Tonga obviously had this hodgepodge tour that didn't go that well for them, but we've got these new rules about player eligibility, which we'll talk about at the end of the show. both of those sides are in familiar territory that they're not going to be able to generate any consistency in advance of the World Cup.
True.
Which is a shame for them. And really, I think next year the World Rugby needs to make an effort to give these sides games, to put together some form of PNC, get Japan and Fiji and Samoa and Tonga playing each other.
Yeah.
They need to work on putting something together next year. In that capacity, especially with all of the northern sides going off to do tours against the Big Four in July, they need to do something with that window. That's definitely true. But Samoa and Tonga still
another
loads
one
of
who have
talent.
climbed. Actually, you were mentioning Tonga in 16th, Samoa 13th, Italy 14th, but sandwiched in 15th is Romania, who have had a great year. We were talking through it. It started with disappointment and kind of being a little off the pace at the beginning of Rugby Europe, but they found their feet with some good clutch wins in that. Then they ran those Pumas as close as you'll ever see a tier 2 side do it. They pushed them all the way in their home ground at the beginning of summer, and they've kicked on from there. Their autumn campaign has been stellar, putting a high-flying Uruguayan side to the sword, and doing the same for Tonga at the death there as well.
Really well balanced game plan to them as well. They have a lovely maul, lovely forward pack, but then now developing a defence and an offence, exciting backline. Vasa, really exciting. South Sea Island find. Look, just disciplined, well coached all over. Bit of depth, bit of talent, a lot of momentum. Very, very exciting for Romania. And then the other two most improved sides have to be Portugal and Chile. And they're a little down on the rankings, but they are highly, highly improved sides.
Well, Portugal are in 19th currently, sitting pretty there, and actually Chile are down in 25th, which seems a bit harsh.
They're on their way though.
Behind Namibia and Russia and Hong Kong, dubiously up in 22nd. Canada as well, blessed to be in 21st after their showing, and Spain in 20th. And I think actually 17 and 18 is interesting. USA are currently 17th, and Uruguay have dropped down to 18th as a result of their 7-point loss in Italy.
Well, no, just as a result of their rough autumn tour. I think the US decided that their best chance of moving up the rankings was to just sit out in November.
Yes, and it has proven. But the US obviously losing that clutch game to Uruguay. Uruguay have already booked their place in the next World Cup and look very good for it. They're still an improving side too. Showed a lot in that Italy game, and they'll have Italy in their group as well, so that's some good colour for them. They already have tape on it. But the South American sides have been a story of the last few years in terms of that improvement. So themselves and Chile looking very, very good. And Chile particularly, that win against Russia at the weekend, we'll talk about it in a little bit, but very impressive. They have good clutch themselves, which is great to see. Like in an up-and-coming side that hasn't been to a World Cup, it's very encouraging that they have good temperament.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very much enjoying the South American sides. North American sides less so, obviously Canada out of the mix. Gary Gould's US with lots to ponder in the off-season. They took November off. They are going to have an MLR season. Here's hoping they might make a sea change.
Uncover a few diamonds in that season, hopefully.
Play some offensive footy. Yes. I mean, listen, Mikey Teo's only dying to play some offensive footy if a coach will just get him doing
Either
it.
Pick the sevens boys as your backline for a few games, or just what I want to see, ultimately I boil it down to for the US, is more basketball, less crash ball running backs out there in the back line, and just get some basketballers out there. They know how to pass. They know that in their games they know what passing is, and you have a great 10 in Adge McGinty as well, so it's like there's no excuse for the lumps that sometimes rock up in their back line, and their general speed deficiency a lot of the time. When you look at their sevens team and they're all about speed, it just seems a bit wild.
Okay. And story of the year then. Story of the year. I'm just going to give you 3 nominees: Romania, Portugal, Chile. Who's your winner?
I'm going Portugal. Ultimately. I like Portugal.
Because where do they come from?
Because where do they come from? And Spain had all kinds of notions about them, and they were chatting all kinds of stuff. But Os Lobos of Portugal have been awesome. And Marques at 9, beautiful. Portel, they pushed down to them pushing Japan all the way in that fantastic game in Portugal in front of a great crowd. No, I think it is Portugal for this year, and they are sitting just at the top end on points difference alone, I think, in the race for that second spot, but they are still in there with Romania and Spain and Russia, and that'll be an absolute knife fight next year. But yeah, I'm going to give it to Portugal.
2021 Portugal's year in Tier 2.
I think so. I think they've been awesome. Bloody awesome.
Yeah,
they're such a treat to watch. They're lovely to watch run the ball. They play the game in such style, and they were all kinds of reverence towards Japan when Japan were in town, because they're like, these are the guys that we were basing our success on.
Yeah, yet they still gave them a good game.
No, Portugal for me. Os Lobos.
Absolutely, I agree. Now we're going to move on. We're going to do something slightly different, just for a bit of fun, given it's the last last show of the year.
Yeah.
We have just seen the November series. We've just talked you through it ad nauseum.
Yes.
And we're going now to just, each of us have selected our team of the series.
Yes.
We did this once before and it was a disaster because we both ended up picking the same team. And we were just like way too in sync with one another, becoming a two-headed monster of it's no good. We need to have some debate and some difference of opinion on the show.
Yes.
But we have gone completely blind into this and came up with our two different teams of the series, and it remains to be seen how different they'll be.
Yes.
Here I'm hoping for a bit of difference, but we'll just see. We're gonna each rattle through who we've gone for and why.
Yes.
And I guess we'll start, I think, with the front row.
Yeah.
Do you want to go first on the front row? You could talk us through your
Sure.
thinking as well, maybe some bench options, or you could just rattle straight through.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna make a last second change because I actually
What's it? The last second change?
Yeah, I had meant to do it earlier, but I had Ox in there. But I'm gonna start with Cyril Bai at Loosehead. I think he was very, very impressive. I think he got one or two moments went against him in that Argentina game actually. But beyond that, like, he was awesome in the loose, very awesome in the set piece. Even that little moment of him schmoozing up to tucking in Wayne Barnes' little mic and just kind of sweet talking the ref that way, like just little savvy moments from him. He's a really good leader and he's a cool head out there as well. So I went with him from France. I also went with Pieto Movaka of France at 2 because I was torn between himself and Kelleher. And then Marks was in my mind as well because he's been bloody awesome too. But I think on balance he just scores too many tries to ignore Pieto Movaka. And similarly Ty Furlong at tight head. I think he picks himself because Tupou got injured for the Twickenham game, so it was just left for Ty.
Yeah. Well, I went to the liberty of chucking some bench options in there as well, but I went with at Loosehead Stephen Kitsoff. Yeah. Who I thought was coming on and just destroying just destroying scrums, and he was earning more penalties from Loosehead than I've ever seen him win before. That whole bomb squad unit are so in sync with one another at the scrum, but he was dynamic in the loose as well. And he's always been great, but he actually looks quietly, sneakily better than he's ever looked before. Yeah. And I think has been a phenomenal loosehead and is my loosehead of the tour. And then interestingly, Cyril Bai was like right there next to these guys, but actually that showing against Gomez Cadea stood against him in my mind a little bit, and I actually went for Porter was my second one, who switched to loosehead. I just think he's been everywhere, scoring tries. Fantastic in the loose and so game at scrum time as well.
He coughed up a penalty to a Gomez Cadea as well at scrum time though.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Maybe that's bias showing. Unsurprisingly, Pieto Movaka takes my hooker jersey.
Jeez, I thought you would have gone for Kelleher.
No, and I put Marks on my bench.
Well, Marks is awesome off the bench if you want.
I just don't think you're legit if you're picking front rows and not including some of these bomb squad men.
It's true.
There's a case to be made for putting Kitsoff and Marks together in my team.
If I were to have bench, it would be Vincent Koch.
Indeed, because of what he was doing to Joe Marler, and Tupou is probably one of the best tight ends in the world, possibly even better than the guys. But obviously, as you say, just that rough start to the tour at the Scotland game, not being able to get into the England game. He did have a fine game against Wales at the end. But no, you won't be surprised to know that my tight head is Tyke Furlong all day. What a series he had.
I think everyone kind of has to pick him, doesn't they? Based on this, like this autumn series is what we're based on. His team of the series, phenomenal. He was awesome. Awesome stuff from him.
All right, locks. Do you want to go or will I go?
You can go.
Okay. Evan Etzebeth.
Yes.
Easy money. How good was he?
Awesome.
Just incredible. Player of the year stuff from the big man.
Yeah.
And I put him in there with Wokey.
Slight distinction. I put him in there with Tyg Byrne.
Interesting. I put Tyg Byrne on my bench, but I went with Wokey. I thought Wokey coming of age series for him,
particularly against the All Blacks, his best showing in a French jersey, and it was at lock so fair enough. Yeah,
so rangy, quick. I just love watching him play. He's such.
You've been a big fan for a while. You were delighted for him when he got that try in Australia. I remember as well, and even more so now. So that makes sense. But Etzebeth is the one that's just undeniable.
No, for sure.
Like undeniable. Except if you're World Rugby and nominating Player of the Year. But apart from that, undeniable. He is certainly in there, and I went with Tyg Byrne as partner because I think actually his autumn was fantastic, even down to that last showing when he wasn't meant to be down starting, and then he rocked up and played a brilliant game against the Pumas as well. So that's what I went at lock time. If I were to have a bench man, No.
Well, if you don't have one,
I don't
worry about it. That's fine. We'll stick with the starting team.
Yeah.
I just put one in just so I can cover my bases. You know, not annoy too many people by not mentioning some class players, which I'm sure I'm already doing because there's so many class players out there.
It's true. Like Toji could be grand on the bench.
Yeah, except he just got all the way by the Springboks. It's the same reason Retallick and Whitelock don't feature. They just lost their matchups this series. It sucks for them, but
it's true. Maybe Diager. Maybe
Diager and Mustard are options, but no, I think Etzebeth was the standout from that forward pack, and Wokey and Tygburn have been excellent.
James Ryan would have been in the mix, except he picked up an injury actually that prevented him from playing all the games, but he was brilliant in that All Black game. He was smashing rucks for days as well.
Stole a couple of lineouts.
Yeah.
No question. What's your back row? Obviously, always contentious. How many options do you have here?
So many. But I ended up somewhat green lensed, I guess. But I went with Cameron Wokey at 6. Because I wanted him in the team.
Yes.
But I went with him at 6, and I went with Josh van der Fleer and Caelan Doris, both Irish. I was thinking about, because there were a few other options around, and like Courtney Laws had a really good game and in really good autumn as well. But no, I think Josh van der Fleer was just consistently awesome and has been for a couple of years. Grabbed that brace of tries in the last game to just kind of make that point a bit emphatic. And Caelan Doris was the one who was the most impressive this autumn from all of them, because it's it's a tough old task, and people were doubting him as far as his physicality, but he just delivered constantly. He didn't put a foot wrong all autumn, which was very impressive.
Yeah, you won't get any argument from me
because he picked the exact same one, except with
Sia Khaleesi got my 6 jersey. 7 was Josh, 8 was Doris. I thought they were both awesome for all of the reasons you just said, and the one who I thought was really harsh to miss out, who I chucked in as my bench option, was Artie Savea.
Yeah, he was awesome.
In losing efforts, just kept being game, so tenacious. Tough.
True.
I found it very, very tough not to pick him, to be honest, but I think Caelan Doris, obviously just winning his matchups, was exceptional, and I think Sia Khaleesi was exceptional as well. I know he had that error in the England game, but he's taken it to another level. The energy and work rate out of him, he was out working Dwayne Vermeulen. So
I take it he's your captain then.
For sure,
captain at 6.
Yeah, and but he was out working the likes of Quagga and Dwayne Vermeulen in that Springbok side. He's taken his game to another level this year, and I thought capped it off really well. So yeah, I'm happy to have Sia in there in my team. So will I crack on to the halfbacks?
Halfbacks, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Antoine Dupont.
Yes.
I put Ali Price as my backup.
Yeah,
I thought Ali Price was really good this year.
There were a fair few Scots in that calibre. They were constantly overshadowed in their games. Their games were good and they played really well. But
their pack suffer for that monstrous defeat to the Boks.
They do.
Hard to pick them after that.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a real standout, someone who just turned it on in the absence of the rest of his men. They were all playing okay, but just getting outmatched, which is why it's kind of hard to pick them. But Ali Price was one who would definitely stand out.
One of the guys who's kicked on. Some of those lines you were citing, Adam Beard has been a bit disappointing since his Lions call up, but Ali Price has kind of grabbed that shirt, obviously, and he's in the test team, and he's just kicked on to new heights. He was always a little hot and cold, brilliant in flashes, but also kind of clangers in flashes. But it's becoming few and far between for the headless chicken moments, and just drives a lovely tempo and is a running threat. He is an option for.
And his passing, and some of the one of the Scottish tries that they scored against the Springboks, the second one, they kicked off with a maul and drove it towards the touchline, and Ali Price picked it out from a maul that was right to the touchline and flung a pass which must have gone all the way to the posts, to the midfield, to Matt Scott. It was just perfect, on the money. And Finn Russell, eat your heart out. His passing has come on leaps and bounds. That was off the left hand as well. It was just fantastic.
He's on your bench,
but he is on my bench for precisely because Dupont, and we should wax lyrical about how good this guy has been.
He impressed the hell out of me in that Pumas game, that they were contriving a way to keep the Pumas in, but the breakdown was a mess and they weren't resourcing their offensive breakdown well at all. But he was clearing every one of them. He was having to scrap scrags off him and just diving past his way, but he was clearing them quickly as well. And then obviously that New Zealand game, he managed to set his tempo and show what he can do in terms of driving that offense. He's totally he's a really awesome scrum half. I'm a bit vexed that we didn't get to see him and Aaron Smith duke it out for the full 80, because I think that's what was on the cards, and they were both getting moments. I think they are the two best scrum halves in the world. The other one I would honourable mention is actually Whiskey, Jamison Gibson Park, who he probably missed out because they didn't go for him for the full series. He missed out on the last game through injury, but played the first 2 matches for Ireland and against Japan and against the All Blacks, and the offense purred with him, and he was awesome too, which is the main job of a 9, is just clear rucks and get the tempo going, and all of those guys do that brilliantly. But Dupont is the guy at the minute. He's up for World Player of the Year, and he's my front runner at the minute in terms of just he made some kind of statement at the weekend.
Yeah. Out half was an interesting one for me. Yeah. So I went through a lot of options in my head. I was thinking, Ntamack, can you pick Ntamack on the back of just one fabulous showing? Because he played the other 2 games at 12 and was kind of frozen out in both, but then he played the perfect game. So I was very close to Ntamack. I was also very close with Beauden Barrett because I think truly he's the best 10 in the world. And I think he showed, I think the Wales performance was phenomenal on his 100th cap, but he picks up an early injury after a rough start against Ireland, doesn't feature against the French. Just a little hard to give him it. I think Marcus Smith has done a splendid job coming into England, but you know, he's kind of had an armchair ride to some extent. Slade has been helping him a lot, playing out half for quite a bit. Like, he's yet to really show what we know he can do in that England jersey, so not quite there. Likewise, Finn Russell, it's been a little hot and cold, good play, bad play kind of stuff from Finn. So I resolved to go with Sexton. I think Sexton.
I thought you might.
Sexton's my guy. I think he was the guy who was running the most splendid of offenses from 10. I think Ireland's, like, he only played 2 of the 3 games, but they were fabulous, and it was telling when he wasn't on the pitch that things just changed, and the midfield offense, despite all those ball playing forwards, wasn't quite going in the right direction. The right options weren't being chosen as much, and this idea that the Irish offense is divorced from Sexton is so wrong. He runs that offense, and he did so absolutely brilliantly. It was an opus performance against the All Blacks, and it was just a fun, genius performance against Japan. We were at the Japanese game in the upper tier watching him direct the traffic, like a chess grandmaster.
He's a glorious player to watch when he's in his full flow.
Sexton's my guy. Bigger again had like just an iffy kind of at his best he's great, but it didn't really happen for him.
He was all over the place in the Fiji game for sure. It was as bad a show as you'll see from bigger.
And likewise, Garbisi is another one who you might have gone with, but then really had a poor series.
True. I went with Marcus Smith myself, actually, on the grounds that he slotted in very, very well to a side that I was already there, played all the minutes as well, kicked the winning goal in that Springbok game, looked comfortable and had the moment of the match in a scrappy Wallabies show as well. It just looks really good, and I was trying to pick out who to be fair to in terms of England, because there are a few other contenders in that back line, but the Springbok game was the one that kind of decided it for me, because like, as a young 10 who's fledgling in your role there, to come in and be against the world champions and have your pack be dominated, and to still be able to kind of move the guys around with as you're right, the help of guys like Slade and Marchant slotting in, doing great work as well. Freddie Stewart slotting in at fullback, doing really well. But it was just a really good coming of age autumn for him, and his trajectory is just up and up and up. Well, Sexton was another thought, and I had the same thoughts about Ntamack, and I kind of ruled him out because he didn't play that last game. Same with the whiskey thing. But I went with Marcus Smith. Antoine Dupont, Marcus Smith, just to my eye looks a very sexy
fun
pairing.
Looking halfback pairing. There's no doubt about that. Who are your centres?
In the centre, yes, I went with Hunter Paisami to chuck a Wallaby in there, because I think of all the Wallabies this autumn, and Hooper obviously got injured before the last game, he played really well in all of the showings. He was very, very impressive throughout. And likewise, I went with Gary Ringrose of Ireland.
Nice.
Because I thought, like, I wasn't doing any of that when we did our Team of the Six Nations. It was like, no Irish backs. They were bad Irish backs. Whereas this time I'm like, actually, you know what?
Some of them were pretty damn good.
And Ringrose played all the minutes, and he played really, really well. Grabbed a nice try against Japan. Made that cracking tackle on Jordy Barrett at the beginning of the All Blacks game that needed to be made. He split himself open doing it, but that changed the momentum. It could have been 7-0 All Blacks in that game. He had some really
lovely touches against the Pumas, because the Pumas were starting to telegraph the back moves, and a couple of times he had a few feints, few dummies that the Pumas bought, and he won most of his contacts. So it's not a bad shit at all.
So I went with Paisami, Ringrose, but there were a fair few who I was tossing and toiling about. There were a lot of really good centres.
Funnily enough, Paisami was one of my first names down on the team sheet. I've always been a fan of Hunter. I think he's had a tough season. He had a tough June series. He lost his jersey to Karevi because of course. But he really showed what he can do. And he showed who the real Hunter Paisami is this autumn. I don't know what was wrong with him earlier in the year, but this is who he can be. Distributing, tackling, all action.
A little dropping on the toe for Kellaway tries.
Classy player, tough player, cuts a hard line. I'm a huge Hunter Paisami fan, and he was in my 12 jersey as well. And funnily enough, at 13 I hemmed and I hawed and I hemmed and I hawed, and I actually hemmed and I hawed between a few different names that weren't Ringrose. I probably overlooked Ringrose now that you mention him, but I hemmed and hawed between Gail Fiku, Rico Ioane, and Lukhanyo Am, and those were my guys. And I was between mine, like I did him and haw all of those guys. I was so him and haw, but I thought that Fiku, while class and had a lovely game against the All Blacks, probably was frozen.
It was frozen out when they were doing the dual distributor stuff.
Frozen out against Georgia and Argentina, and probably just failed to impose himself on those games by his own high standards. And then Rico, I thought, was brilliant in moments, had really good flashes like that catch and give for Will Jordan against Ireland.
The try against France.
Some of the defence against Wales as well.
Great hits on Sexton in that Ireland
game.
Yeah,
except I think his defence kind of let him down in that Ireland game. Like letting Sexton get that loop off a few too many times. He's the guy who shoots out of line. Yeah. And I just thought he got a little lost in defence once or twice against Ireland, and that counted against him. And then obviously himself and Sever Reece had a few terrible non-telepathy moments on the left-hand side. So again, this is as close as I've ever come to not selecting Am in the 13 jersey. But I went from, and I was close. Like Am had not the best game against England and Twickenham, but he still had some fire moments, and he's developed his offensive game as well as his defensive game. Yeah. And as much as like he got disconnected from Dale Indy for that try, like Dale Indy is so out of position that like it's hard to blame him.
It's true.
I still a fabulous defender. Still gets jackal steals every game. Turns over so much ball. Classy operator. Has developed his passing game and his running game and his kicking game so much more. And I just still think he's the best 13 in the world. So yeah, much to everyone's surprise, I'm sticking with Am.
He's sticking with Cam Am in his 13. That's no bad thing.
Now my back three. Yeah. Now I fear that we might have the same back three here, but here's mine. I mean, I'll go with first of all, I'll go with what do you call them? What's the word for honourable mentions? Honourable mentions, okay, because there are so this is real Sophie's choice stuff.
Crazy stuff. There's
like
so
first of all, the fullback jersey. Yeah. How can you even decide? Like Hogg had a great game last weekend, but I mean Hugo Keenan, fabulous. Melvin Jaminet, honourable mention, so good. Like brilliant addition to that French side, has rounded them. Liam Williams, the one Welshman to just show up and be fire. Will Jordan, still scoring tries, still everything, gets an honourable mention from me because my back three is James Lowe on the left wing. Thought he had an awesome. You talked about Irish backs. He was everywhere. First distributor. He's your number one kicking option. He's your second distributor. He's your carry man. He's your everything.
The first try in both the Argentina, both the New Zealand and the Japan game.
Yeah, just a fantastic player in my team. Damien Penaud. Yeah, Damien Penaud on the right wing, just at his absolute best. His try grabbing.
He's coming off the wing and working more than because you were citing that as a problem in the Australian series. He was a little frozen out because he wasn't ranging off his wing as much. He is now, and he's grabbing that game icing.
Just at that moment alone. But he was. I thought he was fabulous the whole tour, playing that really game out try. And another honourable mention to Kellaway, who again is grabbing tries for days. Very, very harsh to be left out. And then my fullback, Freddie Stewart, this young 20-year-old kid from Leicester, is just taking this thing to new levels. He just looks awesome. I don't know how high his ceiling is, but he just looks absolutely awesome. So physical, so technical. Never, like, for a 20-year-old to come in and play that game against the Springboks and be under constant firepower and just never look for one moment under stress. That is phenomenal. As well as scoring that try.
The calibre of fullbacks at the top level of world rugby these days is stellar, and it has been for the last few years, but it continues to grow with guys like that coming out of the woodwork and Jaminet and the thing. No, mine is actually a different one for all that good. because there's that many Sophie's choice. I went with Makazole Mapimpi on the left wing.
Tries
for days, just grabbing tries, and I was weighing up. It was between him and Lowe, to be honest, and I think it was weighing up what I wanted from a winger ultimately, and I'm like, okay, no, I'm going with Mapimpi because I want to convert the tries properly, and I know that James Lowe will score a try as well. Like these are Sophie's choice. On the right wing, I actually gave the nod to Rico Ioane because I know he was playing centre, and I was toiling between him and Jordan, but I wanted one All Black in the team.
I think it's Jordan, isn't it? Really?
I think it's Rico in terms of just his capacity to find the try in the big moment, like he was involved in that Jordan try.
Finds a pretty good try.
He does, but in terms of the Parisian game as well, he was game, and I think even in the Ireland game he made a few mistakes, but he was more game in terms of relenting for most of it than a lot of the others. So I gave Rico the nod on the right wing. And it was, for my mind, between him and Jordan and Penaud and all of these guys. It was a tough choice, but I just wanted an All Black out there on the wing. And at fullback, I actually gave the nod to Hugo Keenan, who I didn't give the nod again in the Six Nations, but I was like, I was toiling between him and Stewart as well, but I'm like, Stewart's doing what Hugo was doing at the beginning of the Six Nations, which is taking that jersey that was up for grabs and saying, I'll have that right now. But Hugo's just kept doing it all year, and he was only taken off for the first time. Like, he's played 80 minutes most of the time for Ireland all year. He was taken off with the game signed and sealed, delivered in the second half in the Pumas game, and it was just job really, really well done. And the All Black game was where he was tested the most, because they did kick the leather off the ball, and he dialed in, just mopping that up pretty impressively. But as you say, there was so much quality from guys like Hogg throughout, who are unlucky to miss out, guys like Jaminet. But yeah, no, I gave Hugo Keenan the nod there, because I think he's just been Mr. Consistency all year.
Those plays against the All Blacks, in particular the taking of the Moana cross kick,
that could have been a Will Jordan try, that could have got him in my team, but that's
absolutely fabulous. Some of his defensive hustle and his offensive hustle, very good, so I can't argue. But there you go, some differences. We are not the same people. We are not two bobbleheads of the one Borg. We are actually two separate humans with sometimes slightly separate thoughts on the game of which we speak. So there you have it. Those are our teams.
Resistance is futile.
Those are our teams of the tournament. Please let us know your team down below. Let us know which one of our teams would win against the other. I think we all know that Mekanyawam is just shutting your team down, so you're not getting a damn thing off.
I think my Paisami is better than your Paisami, so we got no.
So let us know whose team is better. Let me know your team. All of that stuff down in the comments. With that, we are going to move on.
Yeah.
But next up, we do have a bit of housekeeping to do on the rugby that was in the international arena. There was also a little series going on in Africa, the Stellenbosch Quadrangular series going on in South Africa, between Namibia, Zimbabwe, Kenya and Brazil.
Correct.
And we had set up a semi-final and final after the first weekend of it. So Namibia were playing Zimbabwe after Zimbabwe beat the Brazilians, and Kenya were playing Brazil in the 3rd and 4th place playoff.
Yeah.
Kenya had an absolute game against the Brazilians and won 36 points to 30.
Yeah,
massive congratulations to Kenya on that one. That's great. I believe they're going to wrap up their tour this weekend against the Cheetahs. That's exciting.
That's good.
It's been a good fun tour for them. They had a rough time of it against that Curry Cup select team, and they obviously lost last week to the Imperious Namibia. But a great old win over Brazil, who obviously have some soul searching to do after coming down to Africa and taking a couple of beatings.
Dropped a few points in those world rankings themselves, and they're already in deep doo-doo there.
They're out of the World Cup, but it's a slow build for them.
With the South Americans progressing as readily as they are, and now them finding they don't stack up that well in Africa either. It's a long way back.
Exactly, I mean, it was Chile who were the whipping boys of South America not so long ago, and now it's probably Brazil.
Yeah.
Although Paraguay, I suppose, are still kind of in there.
Yeah.
Then we also had the final between Namibia and Zimbabwe, and I suppose unsurprisingly Namibia ran out 41-10 winners over Zimbabwe, who we did learn today have a win over the All Blacks on their books. I'd say Namibia don't have that. So.
No, well, it was Rhodesia, so does that even count?
It counts. Absolutely it counts.
But Namibia too strong in this one, but all of that was broadcast on World Rugby's YouTube, and it is still up on demand. If you want to watch those games, you can watch them back. It's a grand old thing to do if you're midweek and you're starved of rugby, slap them on. But definitely encouraging, and it's not the first time. Like last year, Stellenbosch had that under-20s series that they were hosting as well here, so it's good to see, just in terms of flying the flag for Tier 2 rugby as well. If not all of it was the Autumn Nation series, but it's good that teams like this get exposed to some decent rugby and play some good games. And Namibia obviously still looking good with half of their World Cup qualifying process still to come this year in the Rugby Africa Cup 2022. So all of this is kind of feeding into that. They all still have to kind of dial in and qualify for that World Cup.
That's another one that we'll be keeping you abreast of next year, the African qualifiers.
Yes.
Just into the knockout stages, and I think they'll be taking place next summer, so we'll be with you for all of that.
Yeah.
But we are going to move on and look at a game that is halfway through, one of a rare set of games that are not finished in the November series. We have our 2-match series between Russia and Chile.
Correct.
And we had a match played last week between the two teams that was something of a game for the ages.
It was a humdinger, so it was, out in Sochi in Yug Sports Stadium, and it toed and froed. It went this way and that. The game started in the opening quarter with Chile all over it. They registered the first points. They got a little reckless. They got loose. They turfed a pass. Russia pounced, spread it well, grabbed the first try, and then backed it up by milking a card with some pressure and grabbing a second try. It was tit for tat all the game. It finished Russia 29, Chile 30. A 1 point game decided by the last kick of the game, which Chile managed to take the lead in. It was just constant drama and good caliber sides mixing it well together. They matched up very, very well together. I thought it was a really fun game to watch of one of those, that Super Saturday that was. It was like, overshadowed by all the tier 1 stuff that was going on, but it was an absolute humdinger. I really enjoyed it.
Russia had a 9-point lead with about 5 minutes to go,
and Chile crossed the last 10 meters, they started dominating contacts. It was impressive.
It was a weird looking picture for Russia. I mean, their player of the game was certainly Gaisan, moving them very well.
The place kicking on show. Gaisan didn't miss a one, but neither did Videla, the fullback for Chile. They were putting on a clinic in goal kicking up there in Sochi.
I wonder if it's nice conditions to goal kick, but they are solid kickers generally. And Russia were playing a good game, but rare you'd see them as physically outmatched as they were. And this Chilean side, perhaps even more so than the Uruguayan side who beat them earlier in the year, kind of feel like they warmed to the task of playing in Europe. They're physical enough. They're big and strong. They scrummage really well.
Iceman are absolute mountains in the row for them. He's a huge unit, and their back row are all pretty mobile and physical as well.
And their backup front row winning relentless scrum penalties in the second half
for them. And the second half they slowly started edging the contact area, which was surprising out in Russia, but it was encouraging from their point of view. And the last try that they managed to get when they were 29-20 down and it was do or die, they worked it so well, went through phases, were patient, found a lovely pass when it was on. They decided put the right time to pull the trigger. They pulled the trigger. They found the try.
By the way, how good is Rodrigo Fernandez, that out half who was fantastic against Canada as well in the World Cup qualifying? Still just looks a player, doesn't he? Like such good vision, skills. He's got it all.
His try was the try of the match actually, because at that point Chile were I think 14-3 down, and it was getting away from them. It was coming towards half time, and they put together just a beautiful sequence that saw them break into the 22 and then put a few phases together, and then a lovely little short ball off the scrum half, an offload that was a little loose that could have gone to deck, but the halfback just picked it up perfectly and popped it out to Fernandez, and it was just a lovely silky movement that ended up getting them right back in the contest. And that was Russia were kind of, they started slowly, but Chile were only able to make 3 points count on the scoreboard despite dominating really most of the opening quarter. Then they got a little loose, they threw a try away, and then kind of heads went down for a bit. The second try was very soft. Then number 8 just kind of from a tap and go letting the 9 through. But they slowly, as you say, warmed to their task. They didn't panic. Much like Uruguay, one of their best qualities is there's no panic in them. There's a lot of chill in their defensive line and in just their cohesion in general, and they managed to dig it out of the fire and win a very, very good game at the death.
Yeah, and I credit Russia as well. I mean, it's rare you'd see them as physically outmatched, and they have concerns. It's been a pretty rough November series since that win over the Dutch. Sure. Obviously, that tough game against Spain that's put them right up against the wall as far as World Cup qualification, followed by this home defeat, is not going to put them in a good place. But they have actually expanded their game. They were scoring tries off turnover ball, decent running from the wingers. Gaisan, as I say, distributing really well.
Yeah, actually, their halfback pairing is pretty decent as well. Gaisan and Usunov at 9 as well. But similarly, the Condors have also got quality there. They're a good matchup for each other. It's just a good advertisement for what Tier 2 rugby can dish out, because it's such a rare fixture, and it delivered. Like, there was no tape on it. We didn't know how it was going to go, really, apart from that both sides are kind of pretty competitive at Tier 2 level. And it delivered an absolute a class contest for any neutral watching, which is exactly what we were. And they get to do it again this week, and they have sort of rung in the changes. There are some new.
It's a funny one. There was a game of games last week between, I would say, the two first choice teams, but this week both sides have gone for something different. Russia have actually gone with Yuri Kushnarev, who you might recognise from playing for them forever.
Yes.
He's going to earn his 120th cap in his final test match. Obviously, he played in the World Cup in 2011 and 2019, and he's going to retire at the age of 36. So they've given him the start at 10. They're resting Gaisan. And that's obviously left them. They've made changes just about everywhere else as well. New heads in on both sides. Chile have changed near enough their entire pack.
Yeah, well, I see Iceman is out.
It's the whole pack seems to have changed for Chile. So they've brought their squad, I suppose, down to Russia. They want to give everyone a game. They are still going with Fernandez at 10 and Videa at fullback.
So the goal kicking is still the same. So that's kind of the spine of the team somewhat still there, but it'll be interesting to see how those backup forwards go.
Yes, indeed. Brand new players. Russia obviously with new halfbacks. They've got Koklov and Kushnarev in there at 10, and new centres as well. It's definitely it's a curious picture from both sides' point of view, using depth.
Yes.
And it's obviously could take place as a different game, but usually when sides ring the changes like this, especially at a Tier 2 level, you give the edge to the team that's best coached, and I think at the moment that's Chile.
I think so too.
So I'm curious to see what the rest of this
touring
squad
it was
will bring to the
noticeably an
party.
empty stadium, and presumably because COVID reasons in
Yeah,
Sochi,
Russia's getting hammered a little at the moment,
which is obviously playing into the it's not as big a home advantage at all. In
tremendous
Chile,
backdrop though. Sochi.
Oh yeah, Sochi's a beautiful stadium, absolutely lovely.
Just the backdrop to it with the sheer sort of mountainous terrain, and then also there's the built up class buildings in the city above
it. A bit of green as well.
Yeah, it was lovely. Really cool looking ground.
Yeah, it's a shame that it is obviously empty, and it obviously does contribute. Like, it means that 16th man isn't there, so it's a more even contest. So I'd probably agree with you. I think Chile will be frustrated with how they just coughed up the impetus, having started the better the last time and threw really 14 points very cheaply Russia's way. So if they can tighten up in those areas and be a bit more controlled, they should be confident that they are probably the better side on balance here, just about.
But think
Russia will have notions of making that themselves. They will not want to ship back-to-back losses to Chile at all. So
then maybe Kushnarev is going to come in and roll back the years, age 36, and start just putting them in the corners.
Swan song to sign
let's
off.
just peg them back in the corners. Let's get contest the line out, make it a mess. Get dialing our set piece and breakdown work that has been the hallmark of Russian rugby, and cause the Chileans to not starve them of ball, play the games in the right areas so that you're the ones chipping over the threes when the penalties come your way. That's the Russian model.
Yeah.
And front up physically, because those Chileans are big boys.
Exactly, yeah, and there's a lot of changes here, so it's a new task for a lot of these guys on the field from both sides. I think it'll be a physical contest in both areas, because both sides like to kind of go there and make it about that. So,
It probably makes sense on balance looking at them bringing the changes for this game, because both sides obviously have unfinished business in World Cup qualifying, and both sides need to take a look at their squad in a competitive game, which this will be. This game, by the way, taking place later this morning. For those of you who are early birds who are watching the show early this morning,
it's on at noon
GMT, so noon UK and Ireland time, 1 p.m. South African time.
So it'll likely be over by the time you're watching it, for the majority.
For the majority, but if not, find yourselves a means to watch it. I'm not actually sure about the broadcasting, but where there's a will, there's a way.
The last one was on World Rugby's site. I'm not sure if this one.
Maybe World Rugby will be having it up again, and that's the place for it. Just check out World Rugby's YouTube channel. Because they last one delivered in Spain. 30 to 29.
As you said, no tape on this game as far as what we thought might happen, but it delivered an absolute corker. So here's hoping lightning can strike twice. But fair play to both teams, and congratulations to Chile for getting that good win last week.
Chile on the march.
They are.
So
watch out the US, because Chile are on the march.
They're going nowhere. We also have another game, a fun one, coming up this weekend in Twickenham.
Yes,
Twickenham Stadium. We have the Barbarians against Samoa.
I believe it's Samoa 15 technically, but yes.
Yes, Samoa 15, because the Samoan test team couldn't be bothered showing up to this one now, or couldn't really make the trip. They didn't want to tour, and they cancelled their tour. But the Barbarians had already planned to play them, so on we march. This game's taking place at Saturday, kickoff at 2:30 p.m. Questionably clashing with all of the Premiership games on Saturday.
Yes, indeed.
Which is this is going to be there's going to be like a one tier of Twickenham open and it not full kind of game.
Yeah, it feels that way.
There's not too much to be said about it.
Craig Evans gets the whistle, a Welshman, with Reynal and Bruce on the touchlines with Gozan. So 3 Frenchmen and a Welshman reffing the Barbarians. Kind of fine. Yeah,
it's largely a hodgepodge Samoan team. Like, not only are they not not only have they not traveled together, they're actually doing this in the middle of a test window.
Yes.
So they're at the mercy of the clubs as to whether they release their players. And I'm proud to say that we have released Mike Alatoa, and he's going to be on the bench.
Good.
The Samoan captain. They also do have Big Joe Takori of Toulouse, so fair play. Abraham Papali'i, class player. Yeah. Sinati on the left wing. Magic can happen when he gets the ball. And a good few names on that team that I do not recognise, some of whom are class.
I'm curious to see how Jamie Jerry Tuilagi goes, because the Tuilagi name can be very impressive. And there he is at 15, but I don't know Jamie Jerry Tuilagi.
Well, he's Taulagi, he's not actually Tuilagi or Taulagi.
Taulagi.
Yeah.
Maybe
slight,
not. Yeah, you know, the kind of tuilagi you order on Wish and get. No, I hope not. I hope not. Like I'm rooting for it much the same way I was cutting slack to Tonga all.
But this is a silly game, so
it's a bit goofy that it's going.
Both of it's two Barbarians, except one of the Barbarians has absolutely no chill with their squad selection. Indeed. Listen to this Barbarians team that they've selected to take on these bunch of Samoans. Stephen Kitsoff, Malcolm Marks. Yeah, I know. Stephen Kitsoff, Malcolm Marks. Then they've gone with Kakinaga from Japan, Rob Leota. They've decided to put him in lock to even things up a little bit. Kotaki from Japan. Ryan Wilson is captain of the side, Glasgow legend. Pete Samu, Dwayne Vermeulen, Nick White and James O'Connor. Like they play together. Like this is not fair. Mid-test level. Ryoto Nakamura and Len Ikitau in what is just a really class looking
that's a fun
centre partnership.
Yeah.
Filippo Dangunu with Marcus Moneta, the class Argentinian sevens player. Love that on the wing. And Tom Wright gets the nod at fullback. And they've got Karaishvili and Angus Bell covering the props as well. Horikoshi covering hooker. Another Rodrigo Fernandez covering lock. Ollie Robinson of Cardiff covering back row. Tate McDermott, Isaiah Pereze also covering
many
backs.
Wallabies.
Yeah, I was thinking like the Wallabies are the ones that make sense because the Japanese clubs want their players for pre-season at the moment. The All Blacks have to go home in quarantine and they just have no interest in doing this right now. They're in a dark place.
It's true.
But the Wallabies I think are happy out to do with it. So I'm surprised Curtly Beale's not a part of it. But I suppose the reason he's not a part of it is because Rob Kearney is back from playing some Louth GA to roll back the years for one more game of rugby.
That's it, yeah. He's on the 23 jersey to come in at fullback. And fair play to Rob Kearney, what a career. One of my all-time favourites, an absolute Leinster legend. I did see a comment below going like, well, is it Leinster socks or is it, what is it, whatever it is, Ballymena Kickham's?
Louth socks,
Cooley Kickham's, I think that's the club he plays for.
Western Force socks. I mean, he can wear any socks he likes. I think wear Ireland socks.
I think it's club socks is
usually it's club socks, but I mean he's all kinds of clubs.
Yeah, this is true. But as you say, a side with absolutely no chill. What business do the Wallabies have, or do the Barbarians have putting Kitsoff in there?
Kitsoff and Marks. It's just so mean.
No, but that's not even what they're meant to be about. Why are they going to be taking scrum penalties and stuff? Like, this is a one-sided mismatch. And Dave Rennie's coaching, so it is just Wallabies and friends.
Wallabies with a few Bok front rowers for good measure.
Yeah, this is going to be an ugly one, but maybe hopefully a pretty one as well, and hopefully Samoa gets some stuff off.
Dwayne Vermeulen just lingering in that team, like it's ridiculous.
So why would you do Wilson Samu Vermeulen is a monstrous back row for test.
Take anyone on, like
indeed.
And, this poor hodgepodge Samoan team are lambs to the slaughter, unfortunately, in the England rugby money making scheme.
I would agree with that, but it is that, and it is a double header, which is part of where the money making scheme. I think the women's Barbarians are also playing that day, so we'll pivot on to the women's game as well.
Another frustrating encounter because the women's Barbarians are playing the South African women, and I understand that there's Premier 15s involvement, but listen, in the women's game you need to be a little bit flexible, move your Premier 15s to another weekend and make the game we all want to see, which is the Barbarians that is old school 1973 style, best possible team that you can field of all the players in the world to take on England.
Yes.
Because that's the best game in women's rugby right now. And it's a shame that they're not going that
way. It
would
be
be
mostly France. You'd have Drouin at 10 and whatnot. Mostly French players.
Get with David Parsons in there.
Well, a few Canadians as well. Jazz Joyce in there as well. 100%. A few of those Fijian women from the sevens perhaps. A few Black Ferns as well. Coxage is a good 9. I think Coxage Drouin would be a lovely. I'm
put
already
together,
fantasizing.
Yeah, that's the game to make.
Someone needs to take England on. I want to see, because it's only been France so far in the women's game.
The South African women are losing to Wales without Jazz Joyce.
Yes.
Like, of course they're going to lose to this women's Barbarians team, which has also been named and has Lindsay Peat, who by the way is retiring from Ireland, so good to see her getting a last swan song. Likewise Ciara Griffin, but also just loads of English talent. Natasha Hunt again. Jenny Murphy's out there as well, another Irish operator. There's some good Irish swan song in this team, which I do like, but like all too many England players. Sonia Green, Simi Pam, Rochelle Clark, Katie Mason. These are women who are coming off absolutely destroying everyone in their path against a South African team that is losing every game in its path. So it just feels like back-to-back mismatches, and Barbarians are going to take two strong dubs against mismatched opposition here, and a bit of a missed opportunity perhaps
a little, I would think. There's more spectacle can be made of the Barbarians fixtures, I think, and the Samoa, what's the point in having Samoa rock up to do that, much like the Tongan games that they were playing again, like why are Tonga rocking up to Twickenham without their coach or without it's all a bit silly.
They don't even have like Sayuteni or any of these guys. It's not actually the Samoan team that even qualified for the World Cup.
They qualified for the World Cup earlier by playing some decent footy and being a bit more cohesive than Tonga earlier in the year, but they couldn't travel and their coach isn't here, and it's a bit of a weird one that it is an absolute cash grab, but as you say, it clashes with the Premiership games, so I don't even know.
No one's going to watch this game.
How many bums are you going to get on seats in Twickenham remains to be seen.
You would be doing very well to get 10,000, I think.
I would think so. But I suppose we will pivot onto the women's game as well, because there were internationals last week that were actually pretty good quality as well in the women's autumn internationals, which finished up. We had Ireland edging Japan 15-12.
Picked up a red card.
Picked up a relatively early red card, and it was squeaky bum time. But Ciara Griffin actually on her final
was not to be denied.
Grabbed a brace of tries and was the difference. And fair play to
dragged them over the line. Yes. But it's still concerning times for Ireland in all reality.
A triumphant 3-point win over Japan, I think you'll find was what happened.
Well, it's better than a 3-point loss to Japan. That's much is for sure. And then the Black Ferns woes continued in another hockeying by the French, 29-7.
A narrower margin, 29-7. It's incremental improvement. No, it was a rough old tour for the Black Ferns, and they
much to ponder.
Probably be on the same flight home as those All Blacks, and it was probably a pretty like as much crack as a funeral on that plane. I would imagine. Really humbling tour for the Black Ferns, who obviously are defending world champions, and it's their home World Cup, so they'll want to defend very, very strongly. But
they have some time.
They do have time, and they will be hitting the gym pretty immediately, I'd imagine. But they were outmatched physically, but also skills wise by England and France in this tour, and it'll be an eye-opening experience of just how much work needs to be done for them. But I have faith. They're a great institution of the women's game as well. The Black Ferns, obviously that Super Rugby tournament is going to be opening next thing, which will change the game.
If nothing else, will just give them an eyeball at all of their talent and give a professional structure to all of their talent, and then allow them to assemble the best possible team and then work within that framework. It might be a bit of turnover in terms of personnel, because they were largely going with just the same unit that was there pre-2019, pre-COVID, and that's like a while ago now. Indeed. So the chances are there's plenty of talent that we haven't seen yet that they're going to find in this Aotearoa competition.
True enough. And then conversely, credit France. Like, France are awesome, and they look the second best team in the world for sure now. It wasn't for sure before the Black Ferns came up. There were doubts, but it is, and they've been the only ones mixing it with that England side and doing it pretty consistently. Those are always the best games in women's rugby right now, is England-France, Le Crunch. But it's a fair play to them. They look a proper side.
A couple of other results in the women's game as well. Wales went down 24-7 against Canada. Wales led 7-0 after 60 minutes in this game, and then the floodgates opened in the last 20. And
Canada are a proper side as well. They beat the US pretty comfortably earlier on.
They are. They move the ball much better than the US do. They play well in this game, which will cheer up the Canadian rugby fans who had such a rough time with the men's.
True.
And then conversely, the US fans, I mean, there's only so much you can read into
shipping a 10-point defeat in Ireland against Ireland, which we were pretty happy with,
89-0 it was to this imperious England team.
The women, those Roses, they are awesome. They are just awesome.
Levels above.
There are levels to this game, and
they're creating new levels.
Well, it's a chasm now. It's them France dragging their coattails and coming along for the ride, and then the rest. It's shocking.
Listen, they're pioneered. They're moving the game forward.
They are.
Everyone has to catch up.
The Pro League is great, and a lot of the Irish girls have contracts over there, and that's where the professionalism can come. But they're flying the flag for women's rugby.
People give out about the non-competitiveness, and I do understand that. But England, this England team is the best women's team to watch there's ever been.
Yeah,
you're seeing the game develop in real time.
The shape, the patterns that they put on it.
It's much more modern than what even like 10 years ago you were looking at women's games, and they looked kind of like men's games from the 60s and 70s, where it was just, there was no structure, there was just 10, 12, 13, 15 winger standing in a line, standing pretty much still, passing to each other. it was very rudimentary, and this new modern professional English outfit is anything but. And now it's on everyone else to catch up. And I'm sure long term people.
The rising tide raises all boats eventually. But right now there is a sea change, and there's a gulf chasm that's appearing, and it looks like they're odds-on favourites to win that World Cup next year.
No question. But yes, that kind of wraps up the women's internationals. They'll finish up with that Barbarians game on Saturday.
Yes.
We're going to move on now from all of the Test rugby, which is put on ice officially for 2021.
Yeah. So on to club footy, which does return this weekend. We'll take a look at all the European stuff that is to come. I suppose we'll start in France, which is up to round 11 this weekend.
Jeez, they do go on, don't they?
They do go on, absolutely. Yeah, Saturday is what they have stacked on the books. They have 4 different kickoffs at 2 p.m. You have Biarritz v Stade, La Rochelle v Pau, Perpignan v Clermont-Auvergne, and Montpellier v Castres, all of them at 2 o'clock on Saturday. Then the 4 o'clock kickoff is Toulon-Lyon, and 8:05 Toulouse v Brive, and then the Sunday game is Racing versus Bordeaux, which is actually quite a good game. That's at 8:05 on Sunday. A lot of those look like mismatches. Pau might fancy a bit of thing. Biarritz v Stade Francais could be a bit of a game in terms of matchups as well. Perpignan at home against Clermont. Perpignan have struggled with the intensity here. They look
surely like Clermont are taking that one.
I would think so. Montpellier Castres.
Toulon-Lyon. There's potential because Toulon have struggled this year and Lyon are good, but away from home factor. That's probably the closest of those games.
True.
Then you look to the URC as well, and there's some really fun games coming up in the URC this weekend. Connacht are taking Ospreys on the Friday game. That's not as fun as some of the games could be.
Marginally fun
but
game.
The Ospreys have been the best of the Welsh so far, and Connacht's the worst of the Irish. So there you have your dream matchup.
Yes, indeed.
Then on Saturday we have Benetton hosting Glasgow, which will doubtless be a tight game out in Benetton, as they always are. Stormers hosting Zebra. Stormers are going to get some vengeance now. Hosting a match against Zebra. That's a fun one for them. They'll rack up a score, get themselves some confidence. Sharks Scarlets, totally intriguing. Very curious to see what happens here.
Don't know what to expect out in Natal. How do the Scarlets perform over on Saturday?
Scarlets probably like the summer weather out there, though.
Probably a little bit more than most, yeah.
It'll be a fun tour, I think, that one. It'll be illustrative of where the sides are at a little bit.
Yeah.
Dragons Edinburgh, you can probably give a miss, but then Bulls Munster, there's your game of the weekend.
There's a game of the weekend, all right.
That's an interesting one now.
Absolutely. I'm curious how, they're mighty packs that love to steamroll each other. Bulls with the home advantage, Munster with the pedigree in this tournament.
But the funny thing is now we're getting to the extremes where Irish sides and players are now used to playing not just Irish rugby but winter rugby, and then you go down to the other hemisphere where it's high summer. That's
conditions
the
that is absolutely a factor. So it remains to be seen how Munster cope with that. There's also Leinster Ulster, which is the late kickoff on Saturday.
Which is also a great game.
Really good game, normally a banger to watch. And then on Sunday there's one game between the Lions and the Cardiff Blues.
Another great game.
Which up at altitude, Cardiff Blues like a shootout, same as anyone. So do the Lions. That could be 45-40.
Very curious to see how some of the Pro 14 teams deal with that
shock.
Weather.
Yeah, because there was all kinds of shade being thrown at the Saffas in the early exchanges of the season, but I think the shoe's on the other foot now. And there's a chance for the Saffas to generate a bit of momentum here in this URC and set up their stall, because it's still very competitive and chopping and changing in the mid-season here. It's all jostling for position to get into that post-season.
No question. In the Premiership, we have Newcastle. Interestingly, 4 kickoffs at the same time on Friday evening.
It's a bit wild.
I suppose it's there just to boost attendances. Not all of them will be televised, I guess. Newcastle host Worcester. That's the game of the weekend. No, I joke. Bath host Exeter. Bath have just been losing every week to everybody, so I can't see that changing.
Coming fresh from downing the world champs and back into Bath.
Wasps Gloucester, that's probably going to be a pretty game between two flaky but fun sides, and Bristol host Northampton in another good game on Friday night. Quins host London Irish at 3 o'clock on Saturday, and then Saracens Sale is your game of the weekend with a bye for Leicester.
But all of the games, only 2 different kickoff times, 7:45 on Friday and 3
as I say, it's
Saturday.
Probably to boost attendances.
It is, but it is annoying because it means I can't record them.
You're right.
So it's good to see all of this club footy back, and obviously gearing towards the Champions Cup, which is going to be getting underway this side of Christmas as well, which all of these sides, not all of these sides, but the contenders who are in it are slightly.
Leinster have a double-header against Bath coming up. What a mismatch that's set to be.
It seems to be set to be Leinster purring well in the URC, Toulouse flying high in the top 14s. You have actually the Premiership's most interesting because Leicester and Sarries are the dominant forces this year, neither of whom are in the top flight of Europe this year. Although Leicester, I think, are in the Challenge Cup, are they?
And so are Saracens. Everyone in the Premiership who's not in the Heineken Cup is in the Challenge Cup.
So that could be a competitive Challenge Cup coming up as well, with those two duking it out for it.
Yeah, and they are two sides that tend to show up in Europe as well, regardless of circumstance. So I can't see them failing to do that in the Challenge Cup either. But that kind of parks the European club footy. It returns this weekend. Plenty to watch in the absence of Test footy.
Absolutely.
Some fun games
Keeping
out there.
Company over Christmas.
Also, if you fancy checking out the Sevens, it's back with a bang.
It's back in proper fact. We built it a few weeks ago, or around a month ago, when it was back-ish in Canada.
It's
with
still
a few
kind of
teams.
back-ish somewhat because there's no New Zealand.
That's true.
And you do need a New Zealand for it to be truly back.
Do New Zealand even play Sevens rugby?
Yes.
Yes, they do, and they do it very well.
Cheeky Brits are still playing as Great Britain as well, much to our annoyance.
Yes.
So we have the Dubai Sevens out in the UAE taking place this weekend. Starts actually today. It will have started by the time you see this video. There's 3 pools in the men's: Fiji, Australia, Canada and France in one pool. Great to see France back in the mix, and Fiji as well, and Australia. Those are all great Sevens teams. Great to have them back. Argentina, USA, Kenya and Spain in another pool.
Also good colour.
Pretty class. And then for whatever reason, Ireland are just permanently in a group with Great Britain and South Africa. Those are the only 2 teams we're allowed to play. And we also have Japan. I think that's the same group we were in last time. It's ridiculous.
Close to,
Why do we have
Hong Kong.
Why do we have Great Britain and South Africa? That's just not fair. And then the women's have 2 pools of 5. Pool A, France, Australia, USA, Brazil and Spain. And Pool B, Fiji, Great Britain, Russia, Canada and Ireland.
Good luck to the Irish colleagues out there in that one. But great to see it return. A few more teams returning to the fold. Obviously, you're right to cite the lack of an All Blacks or of a Kiwi side at all in it, which is obviously a factor. They contribute greatly to the game, be it in Sevens or 15s or whatever goofy format you might want to come up with next. In terms of that, they will always be at the forefront. But compared to the kind of tacit reopening in Canada that we had with only a handful of teams and the South Africans dominating it, it'll be nice to see a few more teams return
Fiji
to the fold.
are back, France are back.
Exactly, a bit more box office than it had been, and just great. It's a great product still. So I hope it hits the ground running.
I think if it's not being broadcast by a TV whatever station in your area, which I don't think it usually is,
then
World Rugby will be putting it up.
Either on their Facebook or on their YouTube channel. They tend to live stream it, and it's well worth a watch. If you find yourself in a few minutes, just slap it on. It is always good fun.
You can watch the games in no time. They're always class.
Excitement.
Running rugby, great stuff. You love the Sevens. But listen, we are going to move on now to our final segment of the show, which is the rugby news of the week.
Yes.
And we have a big story at the top of the news this week, which is that Test rugby, as we know it, is going to radically change from January 1st. The World Rugby Council approved an amendment to the sport's eligibility regulations, and that they're what govern national team representation.
Yes.
And crucially, it's now going to allow an international player to transfer once from one union to another, subject to demonstrating a close and credible link to that union via birthright. Now that's interesting as well, and they go into a bit of detail on this. There's a 3-step criteria that will be applied for a player to change. A player has to stand down from international rugby for a period of 36 months, so 3 years out of the game before you can even approach this.
Sure.
Then the player must either be born in the country in which they wish to transfer, or have a parent or grandparent from that country as well. So no residency bullshit switches, which is definitely a good thing. You would hate to see them bring this in where residency was a factor, so then you could all of a sudden see tier 2 sides plundered, and it's still a concern.
Yes, Dan Leo is still not in favour of this necessarily.
Oh no, he is. Dan Leo is spearheading this. This is his thing. No, the Pacific teams are delighted. It's the other tier 2 teams. I think South Americans are kind of up in arms as well. South Americans are very prideful about the fact that they're all homegrown themselves, and that like everyone in the Uruguayan team is a Uruguayan who comes from Uruguay and was raised in Uruguay. Yeah, it's a bit militant for my taste, but
a little.
There's more complexities to nationality than all of that.
True.
But interestingly, so that's it. The player has to have a parent or grandparent, and the player can only change union once, and each case will be subject to approval by the World Rugby Regulations Committee in order to, as they say, preserve integrity.
Interesting.
Which is definitely important. I would like to think that moves from tier 2 to tier 1 be treated with much skepticism. I don't want to see that really. I want to see it go one way, which is from tier 1 to tier 2, and that is where it gets kind of fun.
Yes, there's all kinds of possibilities.
I mean, we can rattle through some really, really fun ones. One thing that is going to happen 100% is that Israel Folau is going to come back into our lives. He is good. Like
Squidge will be happy.
Yeah, well, he's been in communication with Totai Tefu, the Tongan head coach, and he's 32. Like, he wants to play in the World Cup, and he's certainly when we last saw him, he was one of, if not the best fullback in the world.
Yep, well up there, literally well up there. His leap is phenomenal.
He said some gross things, and he wouldn't shut up, and Australia Rugby had no choice but to ditch him.
Yes.
But I mean, if he can kind of shut up and stop talking absolute waffle,
banging
I'm
your Bible.
going to enjoy watching him play again.
To be fair, in Tonga it'll wash a bit more than in Wallabies because they are a bit more devout in terms of design. But hopefully just shut up and play on field.
There's nothing wrong with being devout. You just don't have to be bigoted along with it.
Yes.
But I mean, let's be real. From a rugby point of view, the
prospect Tonga are in no position to turn down his services either from a rugby point of view.
Well, I mean, this is what has people excited, because this is an immediate change, and that means that the next time that we see Tonga play, they could, in theory, be able to select from Israel Folau,
yes,
Charles Piutau, George Moala. Of course, they have Fekitoa come back in. George Moala, who is lining it up in Clermont the last few seasons.
Yes.
Via Fifita, who's been left out of the All Black fold for the last little while, could choose to move. Sakopi Kepu, former Wallaby tight head, could choose to do it. Yeah. Augustine Pulu could choose to do it. Samoa, they also have potential bolstering as well here.
Yes.
They could have Lima Sopawanga. Yeah. They could have Stephen Luatua, Victor Vito, Julian Savia, Denny Solomoa. Tonga as well could end up with Billy and Mako Vunipola by 2024 if Eddie Jones is done with them.
Moves away from that,
and then there's some other fun ones as well. Italy could end up with Creevy from Argentina, who's been knocked out of the fold, along with Alex Lazowski, who's been left out of the England fold for the last little while. Provided those guys want to make the move.
I don't know if England are completely abandoning the Lazowski train, because he is a class Sarri, but that could be a great thing.
Other fun ones that could happen: Alec Hepburn from Exeter could play for Australia if they want him.
Yeah, it's a useful unit. Big Exeter prop.
Yeah, capped for England back in, I think, 2018.
Right.
Then Jordy Murphy, our own Irishman, could play for Spain.
Yeah, I wouldn't hate to see it. Spain probably need him more than Ireland.
Yeah, I think he would fit quite nicely into that Spanish team if he can get fit and be healthy, and if he's keen to do it.
Yeah.
Morgan Parra could play for Portugal, provided he's happy to sit on the bench, because he's not ousting Marques.
True enough. Yeah. Coming off the bench for your 20-minute shift to ice the game. Maybe. That would be fun. I doubt that one will happen. But
and the most unrealistic I have down here as well is that George Cruz could give up his England ambitions to play for Canada or the Netherlands. Either or, George.
Good luck to the Netherlands or the Canadians for trying to pitch that. Why would you play for England, eh? You can come over here and lose games and play no World Cup footy at all.
Yeah, maybe they'll win more games with a big George Cruz in there.
They would win more games with a big George Cruz in there, but that's fanciful dreaming.
What do you think it is? There could be a sea change.
Yeah, I think it is a good thing, and I hope it works out for those tier 2 sides. I agree with you. I wouldn't mind seeing it more limited so that you can only go from tier 1 to tier 2 rather than the other way around. That would be better, I think. But for the meantime, I think it is overdue, because there are so many guys frozen out of test match footy because of things like that. The classic example,
blocking selections.
The blocking selection, like our own Issa Nasiwa from Leinster, who's a Leinster legend, and this is actually one of the ones that was reversal. But he wanted to play for the All Blacks, ended up being selected to go to the World Cup with Fiji, got one cap off the bench for 5 minutes. Didn't realise that in so doing, he completely ruled himself out of ever playing for the All Blacks, and had to abandon his international career as a result.
Spent a decade reaching All Black levels in colours for Leinster. Yeah,
indeed. So hopefully there'll be fewer cases of that, where guys who are undeniably world class are not able to play test match footy.
The benefit from a fan point of view, especially when you look at some of these All Black back threeers who they toy with for a few years and then ditch for the new shiny back three. Like Charles Piutau is still a world class player. Test rugby is enhanced if he plays.
Yes.
If he plays Test fully.
Exactly.
It's just enhanced.
And
the game is
doesn't
better.
affect the All Blacks, and it doesn't affect anything
No,
like
it's
that.
just it just enhances the game. The best players will be involved.
Likewise,
in World
Malachi
Cups.
Fekitoa and other guys like that. Like, and it does contribute. It's a bone to throw to those Samoans, those Pacific Islanders who contribute so much
Of the
game.
talent everywhere, down to Vasa rocking up in a Romanian jersey, Bundyaki in an Ireland jersey. I mean, they populate so many of the world's teams. Yeah, this is like why shouldn't they get a bit of love?
Indeed,
on this one,
and I hope it works out in that regard. There are some concerns of abuse. Obviously, it remains to be seen how it goes forward. It remains to be seen how that World Rugby officiating board ends up officiating. I don't know what the metric will be.
Unintended consequences are always a concern.
Indeed, but on the macro, I think it is a good development for the game and for Tier 2 footy specifically. So I hope it works out well, and I hope some of these guys get to go to the World Cup then, and they get to see some.
Are we going to see a Tongan team with all of that talent rock up to the World Cup? Because if so, game changer.
Indeed, they already rock up to the World Cup in good fettle most of the time. So if they can bring some world class talent as we know they can, then sky's the limit for those guys.
And it's insane. It could make for a very interesting test season next year.
True.
Then we also have news coming from the more contrite Springbok camp than the last time we ran into them.
That's right.
Their director Rassie Erasmus and the South African Rugby Union have done a U-turn on their initial intention to appeal. They've drawn their appeal. They sent an apology, a kind of a "I'm so sorry" to Nick Berry.
Yes.
And so they've done what they were court ordered to do.
Indeed.
And gave that full apology, and they're coming to their senses, and they've decided to stop digging because it wasn't gonna end well. I don't think.
Should have just dig up. Stupid.
There was nothing good going to come out of an appeal.
No, only more chastising. It is still a weird one that they're at loggerheads, and World Rugby are at fault in a sense in it as well, because they do throw fuel on the fire. Like any year that the Southern Hemisphere team wins the Lions series, like how can you get no Player of the Year nominations? It's wild stuff, and they're world champs as well. And it is just seemingly that the Bill Bowmans and the powers that be just really don't like the Springboks, and then that's true. Part of where all of this comes from is that fact. And it's like, even going into
if you think that's conspiratorial, just listen to establishment, especially in Britain and Ireland, but just listen to the way that media and bigwigs talk about the Springboks. I mean, it's just
disdain.
There is disdain. It is disdain. They can't stand them. They hate them. They think they play ugly rugby. They think they're an ugly team. Mm-hmm. They do have hang-ups about apartheid era Boks as well, which obviously were a much uglier entity than this modern rainbow nation.
Oh, there's a whole generation of people, older generation than us now, who reflexively will go South Africa.
It does. Yeah, it's there. It's 100% there, and you can't tell me it's not.
We were noting it in our coverage of that World Cup, because you were calling from the outset that the Springboks were the favourites going in and in the best position to win it, and that just didn't change as the tournament progressed. And yet in World Cup final week, you're listening to all these Northern Hemisphere pundits, Brian O'Driscoll and the like, going surely England, they just beat the All Blacks, it's England, isn't it? It's like, no lads, it's absolutely not. They are not favourites here, and they got blown away. And it's just never giving the Springboks their slack. And it's like, as when
they do win, it's an existential crisis for the game.
Yes, exactly. That was the other thing. So all of that Lions tour was spent saying well, isn't this just horrible, awful, just terrible to look at? Don't we need to change everything now because the Boks are winning? And it's like, no. But Rassie was not absolved from blame in this either, and he was not right to do the way he dug his own grave. Exactly.
He down to his silly defence, which was instantly chalked off.
Yeah, well, that is defence. No, indeed, and it's disingenuous to the point of being just ridiculous. To rock up with that. He could have owned it. He could have said
that's what he said he was going to do in his video, but
no, but he didn't. But there is a macro problem that he is addressing, in that there does need to be more redress. That the cloak and the kind of cloak and dagger mirrors and shadows and mirrors and all of that smoke and mirrors, I should say, that it exists around the refereeing, whereby it's like, respect the ref is definitely a core value of the game, but respect and criticism are not mutually exclusive. And criticising performances,
exactly right. There's definitely a point there, and the game isn't being refereed to the highest standard at the top level. Although Aussie whingers are not accurate on this occasion.
No, Aussie whingers have a separate problem where it's like learn the laws first, then you get to criticise them.
Yeah, indeed. But regardless of any of that, Razzie has contritely apologised, and hopefully the Boks aren't too impeded, and this, before we know it, this can be put to bed and put behind us all.
Other news then, actually, speaking of those Wallabies, is that Stephen Larkham, a Wallaby legend himself in his own right, has declined an offer to extend his contract at Munster and has returned to Australian rugby with a 2-year deal, I believe, for the Brumbies, is it?
That's right, yeah.
He has abandoned, I think it was largely actually family concerns was what he was citing as well. It was tough enough for his family to uproot and move to Munster, and speaking as two people in Ireland during this lockdown, I can't imagine it's much fun for those young girls. His thing is like there's nothing to do, everything's locked down, freedom's impinged upon, team aren't even playing that good footy, which he doesn't speak entirely. He's backs coach, they still haven't really solved that problem.
Can't argue he's done a good job at Munster.
No, not particularly.
He's had a curious history. Obviously, he was in charge of the Brumbies from 2014 to 2017, and in that period for the 2015 World Cup, he came in and took the attack, and obviously they were brilliant. And then he was dual managing the Aussie attack and the Brumbies along with Cheika, before a string of bad results led Cheika to unceremoniously fire him and blame him for the Wallaby failings.
Somewhat of a scapegoat.
And then he went off to Munster, and he took the backs, and the backs were poor and continued to be poor. And
I do have sympathy for him in that regard, though, because I remember your man
Rob
Penny coming in and trying to introduce shapes that have forwards out in the wide channel, like you see all modern offences trying to implement, and just the Munster response of no. That's not where we go at all.
One man who's game for it is Peter O'Mahony.
Peter O'Mahony is the most
authentic Munsterman out there, and yet he is so game for the skills game.
He's a baller, whereas they kind of neglect the ballerific side of the game a lot of the time in
they
favour
do.
of grunt.
They do. And it'll be curious to see.
On paper, they've had good backs for ages, but it's just they don't have much shape.
He's going to take the Brumbies again back to his old club. Dan McKellar, who is the current Brumbies coach, is going to join the Wallabies set up full time from the end of the Super Rugby Pacific campaign next year. Yeah. And that's when Larkham will come in, and it remains to be seen what Munster are going to do about the whole thing, but definitely an interesting one. A couple of other bits of news. England, the injured ACL recovering Anthony Watson has been handed a 1-week suspended ban for a social media message he posted about the Premiership defeat Bath had to Wasps on October 30th, where basically Bath got a red card and he tweeted something snarky saying it's never a red or whatever he said. And they've given him a 1-week suspended ban, which is to be enforced when he recovers from his ACL. Which is
goofy stuff.
Goofy stuff again.
And again, criticising the referee and just,
they're cracking down on it. I wonder if Dave Rennie and Shara Kadza are safe yet.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Then terrible news, unfortunately, coming out of England as well. Poor old Alex Sanderson has had to come out again and offer a terrible report on Manu Tuolangi. He's going to be sidelined until the new year at least. He basically had a hamstring strain, I believe.
In the scoring of a lovely try, the opening try against the Springboks.
Sanderson must be just Sanderson has been so patient with Tuolangi.
Yeah,
like he gave him a year and was given constant injury updates, and then he comes back and he looks trim and he looks good. You get a few weeks out of him. He goes to England, plays well. Last game injured. Now he's out until probably the Six Nations. Who's the better to play 5 games and get injured in the last one, and Sanderson will be like,
no Tuolangi for your book when you're a sail coach, and struggle bus all week long. Every time they even when they're dominating games, Sales somehow find a way to make them competitive and then sometimes lose them. So Sanderson definitely stressed.
Terrible news coming out of Wales as well, but perhaps not unsurprising news is that Alan Wynne-Jones had a shoulder operation already, but actually now requires a second shoulder operation after his injury during the Autumn Nations series. This is obviously
probably delayed reaction to just shoehorning your shoulder back in so that you can go and take on the Springboks, despite not needing the surgery then and there.
Yeah, I'm not a qualified medical professional, but I do know some qualified medical professionals, and this is in all likelihood this is kind of what happens when you cut corners like that to come back for a big event. You end up paying for it down the line.
Yeah, you exacerbate it.
But anyway, listen.
But he made his choice. He was like, Lions tour, my last Lions tour. I'm captain. I'm gonna, and he made the right choice. He played very well.
Yeah, did himself an absolute credit, and so now he's off. He's not going to play in the Six Nations. He probably shouldn't play at all this season, and now he has an opportunity to rehab his shoulder, get himself healthy, take a long leave of absence from the
sabbatical,
game.
as they would call it in
exactly.
the All Blacks
and that gives him a chance to get healthy and to have one more big season and to come back and play the World Cup if he's hungry to do it.
That's the idea, and certainly the great white hope for all Welsh fans, because he is the second coming in Wales, and there is no two ways about it. He is an absolute legend.
Indeed.
And we hope to see him recover and get back on the pitch for Wales and for Ospreys, mostly for Wales though.
There's other pretty alarming news if you're an All Black fan, by the way, coming out of Japan.
Yes,
Suntory Sungoliath of Bowden Barrett fame have confirmed the signing of All Blacks back Damien McKenzie from the Chiefs.
Yeah.
So he's the 26-year-old. His contract with New Zealand Rugby expires at the end of the current year, meaning as in the current season that they'll be taking place in, as in next year. Meaning there is uncertainty as to whether he will return to the Chiefs or New Zealand next year. Listen, they should not lose Damien McKenzie. They're like, if they cut Damien McKenzie loose in favour of Geordie Barrett, they are just so wrong.
Yes.
And I would nearly take back what I'm saying about Ian Foster. Like, there's one thing he's got wrong this year.
Yeah.
Geordie is great. He's tough. He's physical. He was great up until that horror show in Paris that he had the other week. But DMAC is where they need to be going. DMAC is what the All Blacks are about.
Yeah, Bowden Barrett DMAC.
He's
10,
a world.
15. There's your 10-15 axis.
Yeah, that's what I want to see.
Yeah.
That's what I want to see. Truly, I think he's got next level ability, 1-on-1 distribution, right up there with the top echelons of the game.
Clutch goals like Geordie as well. So.
Like, are they seriously going to cut this guy loose? 26 years old, all the talent. I think that is a huge mistake if they do. But listen, they've let him go to Japan. French club.
It's off the back of a season where he wasn't getting the picks.
And French clubs now, as well as Japanese clubs, people are going to be offering him
box
all
office.
kinds of contracts.
I'm sure technical love him because he's so wee and he's so technical and he's great.
He'll slot in there and tear it up. I don't doubt at all.
True
but if the All Blacks lose DMAC, that'll be stupid.
Yeah, they become an instantly less likeable entity overnight.
Yeah, that'll be stupid. They really shouldn't. Interestingly, the World Rugby announced as well that Australia have been awarded this new preferred candidate status for the 2027 Men's World Cup. And England have been awarded the same status for the 2025 women's competition. Don't really know what that means, but apparently
I don't know if it means anything at all. Well, again, one of the South African gripes that has come up in their anti-World Cup World Rugby tirades of late has been like, oh yeah, we were the ones who won. Like, of all that survey that was done, we were decided as the preferred candidate as a result of the survey, and they gave it to France.
That survey was a stitch up on Ireland, I say. It's a funny one, but apparently if reporting is to be believed, Australia are odds-on favourites to get the 2027 World Cup.
I mean, they'll host it well. They've been doing their trial by, like, as in tryouts over the last couple of years between the Tri-Nations and this year's Rugby Championship. They've been hosting it well.
I'm fine with it. Provided they fill their stadiums for every damn game.
Yeah, that's true.
They don't fill their stadiums enough. If you want to host a World Cup, fill your stadiums.
Yeah.
Georgia v Romania or whatever shouldn't have an empty seat.
Yes.
Aussies.
Yes, indeed.
So that's the charge.
No, Georgia v Romania. No,
that's the charge.
When
you're hosting a World Cup, you fill your damn stadiums.
They don't even play rugby, do they?
Fill your stadiums. That's the only concern I have, is that, like, it was a shame. Like, listen, the All Blacks Springboks 100th test was a magnificent game of rugby. But it wasn't played in front of a full house.
The only ugly thing about it was that there were empty seats.
Yeah, come on. Like, I don't care what you have to price the tickets at. Get bums on seats. Let's make it the occasion that it ought to be.
True enough.
Which it would be in a place like England. And, like, England getting a Women's World Cup is just a no-brainer because the crowds that they are generating at the moment are insane.
And the stadia they have are perfect for it. Sandy Park, perfect. Six Ways, perfect. All of these little grounds, absolutely perfect for hosting a thing. I don't hate those two nominations, but you're right to charge the Aussies with that. I think that's fair.
One final story then for you before we leave and wrap up for the year.
Yes.
World Rugby have confirmed where and when the final qualification tournament will take place for the 2021 Women's Rugby World Cup.
2022 is it? Oh no, it's 2021 is the title.
Sorry, it's called the 2021 Women's Rugby World Cup, but it'll take place next year.
That's right.
But the tournament is going to take place at the Seven Stadium in Dubai. on the 18th and 24th of February.
There you go.
And that was an interesting one, isn't it? If I was Scotland, I would not be vibing off them bringing this tournament to Dubai,
yes,
of all places. Scotland, Samoa, Colombia, and the winner of Hong Kong, Kazakhstan will play off in this little repechage.
Yeah.
Scotland will come in as the favourites. The Samoan women's team are a bit of an unknown entity. Likewise, Colombia, really. I'm curious to see what they're like. But maybe this Dubai heat will be a leveler, you know.
It could be. Yeah, no, I don't know.
If it was in Twickenham, you'd give it to Scotland already.
Yeah,
but Dubai?
It could be
knows?
tough. Yeah. Definitely. Who knows? Well, it could be an indoor air-conditioned stadium as well. You don't know.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but interesting that is finally happening. Obviously, that's the reason for the deferring was through COVID. It's just tough to arrange these fixtures for qualification. So we will confirm that, and then the tournament will go ahead then next year.
We've 11 teams already in the World Cup with one of those teams to be added in. We've got New Zealand, England, France, Canada, USA, Australia, Wales, South Africa, Fiji, Italy, and Japan.
Yeah, awesome, colourful tournament. No Ireland, which is the shame.
That's
we were
true.
Covering that earlier on.
But yeah, we're one of the many things to look forward to next year. We got a big year ahead of us in 2022. Don't go anywhere. But for now, we are going to wrap up 2021. It's been a remarkable year, really. Obviously, there's been issues with empty stadiums, but what's gone on the field has been fantastic. It started with an epic Six Nations, followed by what I thought was a brilliantly compelling Lions tour. A wonderful rugby championship, the to'd and fro'd, the All Blacks coming back, the Wallabies taking on the Boks, and then the Boks beating the All Blacks, and then a phenomenal November series where we all met together for the first time since COVID, played out some thrilling games, and there's nothing between these sides at the top of the game, and it just tees up the next year and the next 2 years so well.
And likewise as well, sure, if you've been with us all year covering things like Rugby Europe, even Rugby Africa, the South American and the North American World Cup qualifiers, Tier 2 is heating up. Some old giants like Canada out of the picture, teams like Portugal, Chile coming back into the fold. Like Romania missed the last World Cup, they're in the hunt for this one. Like the Tier 1 picture is as bunched as it's ever been, but likewise Tier 2. Sure, we had Georgia Fiji played out a 15-all draw last week. It's really competitive at the top levels of test match footy, and it's just exciting to watch for all rugby fans concerned.
Absolutely, and we're going to be with you now over the next couple of years, building up to that World Cup every step of the way for all of these international windows and all of these great test games. We're going to be putting up shows. Hopefully you can engage with us as best you can. We might have one or two little extra videos posted over the next month or so over the New Year period. We'll also be keeping a keen eye on Club Footy in the interim as well. But be sure to subscribe to the channel if you're a fan of what we do. Click the bell, as you say, because it helps you know if we're sporadically uploading, you'll get a notification. It'll just help. You also help our videos tremendously by sharing them on, by liking them. And we really do like an active comment section. So if you have any thoughts on any of the ramblings that we've made,
who's your team in the tournament, drop it down below.
Absolutely.
You know, any comments on the games, drop it down below. Ref whinging, drop it down below. All of that stuff. We do love it. Have an active comment thread down below. But yeah, I suppose without any more ado, we're going to sign off on ORP 114 and 2021 in the books. We will see you next year to preview the Six Nations.
See you guys.
Bye.
Bye. Last one of the year.
Let's go.
Bit of pressure.
Oh, tugged it.
Yep. Talked myself into that, you know.
Oh,
skimmed it.